This boy was born cursed by fate. Even his own father called him a disgrace to the family on the day he was born. That's because he was born with only one arm. But to make things worse, he suffered injustice. Even so, he spent his entire life training with just one arm to become the strongest, and he did it. With only one arm, he managed to defeat even the one blessed by the god of the sword. But despite all that, he met a tragic end. A bit of betrayal, humiliation, and in the end, torture. His life ended miserably. But what would happen if this man who suffered so much were reincarnated with both arms? A man with the resilience of a true beast, now without physical limitations, and in a body with a bit of talent. Revenge would become part of his destiny. He would become a prodigy among prodigies at the Academy of Magic and Swordsmanship. But for now, let's go back and see everything this boy went through. The story starts on a rainy day at a castle. Inside, a baby lies in a room while a blonde man stares at him with disgust. The baby had done nothing wrong. That man was his father, and he called his own son disgusting. The child's bad luck was being born at the exact same time as Kajin, a boy blessed by Kesha, the sword god with a gifted body and natural talent. His mother held him and cried because he wasn't Kajin. The reason they hated him was simple. He was born without a right arm. Each night his mother leaned in and whispered, "Can you die soon, my little baby?" The child was heartbroken, but he didn't want to die. Even in the womb he had heard his father say, "This child is our hope." His father could never beat his older brother, so he wanted his son to surpass Kajin. Instead, the boy was born without an arm and without a god's blessing, shattering all his father's hopes. Elsewhere in the garden, another child was surrounded by maids. It was the blessed young Kajin. The maids all fought for his attention. Watching from afar, Davin's mother noticed her own son was still slow. No maid helped him, and when he finally stood and took a step, she was disappointed. Kajin could already hold a sword. When Davin first picked up the sword, Kajin was already learning how to use mana. His mother thought if her son were Kajin, she'd be happy. Over time, Kajin became the image Davin was compared to, and the one he envied. So at 7, Davin was sent to serve him. From the outside, it looked like family support. In truth, his parents sold him for 300,000 liden. And little Davin, the boy without an arm, never saw it coming. Kajin hated him. He abused him again and again, simply because he felt like it. Davin became Kajin's punching bag. He held back his tears not from pain, but because grown-ups saw it and did nothing. Davin's uncle had once been strong enough to keep Kajin in check, but he left the family and never came back. So no one stopped Kajin, and he grew into a butcher. After a brutal training match, one subordinate's sword broke and the boy surrendered. Kajin's talent and blessing had become poison. He felt no pity and kept beating the boy, mocking him for thinking surrender would make it stop. Then he looked over the others and called for the next one. This time he chose an older Davin. Davin envied Kajin's talent and strength. As he stepped forward, he wished he could be strong too. Their swords clashed until Kajin snapped at him for staring and smashed him into a castle pillar. He demanded to know how a one-armed loser dared look at him like that, then beat him again and asked if hard work alone could ever beat him. Kajin raged that Davin could train his whole life and still never reach him. Then he struck him again. Even so, Davin truly wanted to beat him. He knew hard work might not be enough, but he kept going. Kajin meanwhile got lazy. As he grew older, he sank into alcohol and worse. Still, Davin couldn't beat him. It was a lazy genius against a stubborn worker. Years later, at a tournament, Kajin and Davin faced each other again as adults. Kajin attacked in fury, and their clash sent Davin flying, but he refused to lose and slammed his blade into the ground with all his strength. Kajin recognized how powerful the attack was, but that was only a setup, letting Kajin move in for a surprise strike. Davin answered with everything he had, and when their swords met again, a huge blast erupted. Soon after, the crowd panicked, unable to believe what they were seeing. Davin, the one-armed man, had defeated Kajin of the Storm Sword. Until then, his record against Kajin was 21 draws, 21 losses, and no wins. Now at 29, he had finally beaten Kajin. People had mocked him for years and called him talentless, but he still showed up and won. The crowd exploded over the one-armed man's victory. Davin asked Kajin how long he planned to keep acting like the strongest, but Kajin could only think that he had lost to trash like Davin. That made Davin remember the words he'd heard all his life, "If only my son were Kajin." Davin said that if he were Kajin, he wouldn't have lived like this. He said he would have used that talent for something better, instead of wasting life on alcohol and crushing the weak. Then he turned away, saying he had finally won, until his eyes widened. Kajin stabbed him through the chest from behind. The whole crowd fell into shock. Kajin had really stabbed Davin in the back. Davin could only think Kajin was a bastard to the very end. In his mind, Davin said he wasn't angry. He had finally beaten his rival, but now he was dying. He realized Kajin had used the famous mana sword of the Samam family. Only Saint Rayla could save him now. With a terrifying stare, Davin said Kajin would go down in history as a loser, and that should have been the end. Later, in what looked like a prison, Davin woke up tied up. He asked if this was hell, and a giant man laughed, saying he was lucky Saint Rayla had been in the arena. Who would have thought the miracle-working Saint Rayla would be there? The executioner said she healed him anyway. Even though he was dirty and worthless in their eyes, Davin understood how he survived, though his body still felt wrecked. Then the executioner asked if he had really made a contract with a demon. Davin was stunned, and the man said that was the only way a loser like him could beat Kajin. He added that even Davin's parents admitted it, so denying it was pointless. Thinking of them, Davin realized they really might do something like that. Still, he asked if it was true. The man claimed they found sacrifices and bottles of Davin's blood at his family home, and said Davin had sacrificed 300 innocent children to gain power. Pointing at him, he declared that young Master Kajin stabbed him to protect the Samyun family's honor. Davin laughed, realizing he could beat Kajin, but never the Samyun family. The guard said Davin had stained the family's name, so his mana would be sealed, and he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. The soldier cursed him, then cut the tendons in his limbs, and bound his mana with chains. After that, he was thrown into a cell. When the bars opened and light poured in, Davin realized Kajin had come to visit. Wearing a crooked smile, Kajin said Davin finally looked right. He had become a sword emperor now, praised as a hard-working genius. And he thanked Davin, saying it was all because of that loser. After Kajin left, Davin's food rations dropped even more, and hunger gnawed at him. Coughing blood, he thought that if he had to die, he at least wanted to die with honor. He should have died that day in the arena. As he lay freezing on the floor, he wondered if he had been born with both arms, would things be different? If he were a direct descendant or had the blessing of Kishak, the sword god, would his life have changed? Would his family have loved him? He didn't want to die. He wanted to live. Then everything seemed to stop, and suddenly he woke up to an adult yelling at him. The first thing he noticed was pain in his right arm. He couldn't tell if all of it had been a dream, but it felt too real. Looking at the man scolding him, he somehow knew he was from the main branch of the family, though he didn't know how. Then he heard the man call him Vinchin, and memories rushed into his head. Even so, this didn't feel like a nightmare. Nothing could be worse than that prison. Was this a dream where he had his right arm, or some gift just before death? The man grew angrier and asked how long Vinchin planned to ignore him. Vinchin realized the man was trying to hurt him with mana, so he quickly used a method to block that kind of attack by putting distance between himself and his opponent. But when the man flew back several meters from the blow, something felt wrong. What kind of body was he in? He quickly apologized and said his hand slipped. The man refused any help and called him a reckless brat. As he got up, he said Vinchin acted that way only because he was from the main family. Still furious, he swore his son would crush Vinchin and prove the branch family could beat the main one. Right away, the protagonist compares this man to his old father, a man who dumped all his failed dreams onto his son. As he walks off, he says he won't forget Vinchin's arrogance or disrespect. He tells the boy to wait for the day of the assembly of true swords. Then he leaves Vinchin behind. Sometime later, Vinchin sits down alone. He keeps wondering if this really isn't a dream. Then more memories start flooding in. He learns his mother died right after giving birth to him, and his father never cared about him either. The other children all treated him like a punching bag. Out of the 8 children in the famous Edenka sword family, he was Vinchin, ranked 7th. He was such a coward that even after getting beaten by the youngest girl in the family, he would just hide in his room and cry. On top of that, the branch family kept targeting him because they wanted to beat the main house. The one-armed Davin of the Simeon family had become the useless Vinchin of the Edenka family. He starts wondering if this is reincarnation, but he can't make sense of it. Then he searches the room and finds a diary. Inside, the old owner of this body had written page after page putting himself down. His self-worth was so low that he had given up on everything. That makes the protagonist think maybe God answered both their prayers. In his final moments, he desperately wanted to live while Vinchin had always wanted to die. So the one who wanted death disappeared, and the one who wanted life took over. Until a voice suddenly asks if he really believes something that ridiculous. He spins around looking for whoever spoke and wondering who's in the room. The voice calls him naive or just stupid. It asks why he's overthinking, and says it's the original owner of this body. Panicked, he asks if that means he really is the real Vinchin. Then he sees a purple-eyed figure, and the stranger says he's right. He explains his original name was Vinchin, but after giving his body away, he no longer has a name. He asks to be called only Julian. Still confused, the protagonist asks if Julian didn't die and how any of this is possible. Julian says it was a revelation. That's something the gods give humans who are blessed at birth. Realizing this, he points at Julian and asks if he's a god now. Julian says yes, but only a lesser god. He explains he meant to call a spirit god, but brought the protagonist here instead. And if he wants to become a true god instead of a lesser one, he has to complete countless accomplishments, what they call calls. Finish those calls and he can become a true god. The protagonist says he gets the situation, but he has no interest in Julian's goals. If all this is true, then he's been given a new life, and he plans to spend it living, not helping with somebody else's wishes. Julian agrees. He gave up his life while the protagonist begged for one, and this is the result. But Julian warns that his spiritual energy is dangerously low. If it runs out completely, this body will die. Caught off guard, the protagonist asks if that's supposed to be a threat. He checks his body and says he feels way too healthy to die that soon. Then the room suddenly shakes. A cold sweat runs down his face, as he realizes he just insulted the god in front of him. When he collapses, Julian asks if he understands now. He says the protagonist is very naive. Then Julian says he'll show him his real memories. A bolt of lightning shoots into Vinchin's chest, and Julian's memories flood in. He finally understands what really happened. Everyone called Vinchin trash and an idiot, and told him to get stepped on even more. But that look on his face wasn't from someone who had simply been broken. He wasn't drowning in despair, he was pretending to be weak while preparing revenge. Shocked, the protagonist asks if those are really the thoughts of a 13-year-old. He even wonders what kind of world he ended up in. With a sarcastic smile, Julian asks how his perfect acting was. He says he had to escape his family's watch, and the things he wanted to study were considered apostle-level secrets. Even after hearing all that, the protagonist barely reacts. So Julian says, if that's the case, does he know about the great demon Davin and the hero King Kajin? That finally gets his attention. Furious, he demands to know how Julian knows any of that, since it all happened 500 years ago. Julian says history claims a one-armed swordsman named Davin escaped the Simian prison and through a contract with a demon, devoured thousands of lives to grow stronger. They say he killed over 10,000 people, which is why he's remembered as the Great Demon. Stunned, the protagonist repeats it. Davin from 500 years ago? Does that mean he's 500 years in the future? None of it makes sense. And it makes even less sense that Davin and Kajin are now said to share blood with the Simian family. He remembers clearly dying in prison 500 years ago. The Simian family abandoned the one-armed swordsman and chose the storm sword instead. The one-armed warrior died alone, while the storm sword became Sword Emperor. So turning it into stories about a great demon and hero king means the Simian family twisted everything. Enraged, he slams the ground and curses that rotten family. Julian mocks him, saying the hero king Kajin was the great demon's dear friend who loved him so much. Wasn't that romantic? The protagonist angrily tells him to stop this nonsense. Julian asks why he's so shaken, and he snaps back that the whole story is fake. That makes Julian ask if he's actually from that era. When he says yes, Julian teases him again, calling him really old and telling the old man not to get mad. After all, this story was pieced together from records left by the winners. That makes the protagonist wonder what kind of world produces a 13-year-old who talks like this. Seeing no other choice, he tells Julian to keep going with the story. Julian says the king swallowed his tears and joined hands with the greatest hero of that age, his best friend, the Emperor of the Sun Sword, to defeat the great demon Davin. Not knowing who that is, he asks, and Julian is shocked he doesn't know. Aslan, ancestor of the Adenka family. Then he finally remembers the brat named Aslan, calling him arrogant and asking if he really became the first patriarch of the Adenka family. Back then, that boy came to him and said he admired him and wanted to grow up to be like him. Even though Aslan was still young, he was also a friend and disciple Davin taught himself. He visited Davin several times in prison, saying he had committed no crime and that authority could never defeat the truth. He swore he would restore Davin's honor no matter how long it took. But after saying that, the boy never came back. Julian explains that Aslan became the first patriarch of the Adenka family and left them with one mission for life, and it ties directly to his conquest. That mission is to surpass the Simian family and uncover the truth. Hearing this, the protagonist wonders if all of it is just coincidence. Then he opens his eyes and says no, this can't be coincidence. He may not know everything, but one thing is clear. Aslan Falker left the Falker family, created the Adenka family, and went after the truth. Adenka was built to restore Davin's honor. In short, fate put him in Aslan's bloodline. He quickly asks if completing that goal really can turn Julian into a god. Julian says yes, and once he becomes a true god, he'll even be able to grant an amazing blessing. He says it's a deal that helps both of them. The protagonist thanks Aslan in his heart. He'll carry on the mission his friend left behind and crush the Simian family. This time, he'll stay ahead of the family that betrayed him by becoming part of the Adenka family. Outside the castle, Julian asks where the old man is going. That instantly annoys him, and he demands that Julian stop calling him old man. The lesser god argues that if he's from 500 years ago, then he obviously is one. So the protagonist pretends he's forgotten everything and says Julian will have to explain it all again since he's confused. Julian quickly switches and starts calling him Davin, saying he won't use old man anymore. Then they hear someone shout for training to begin. Nearby, two swords clash with mana. The protagonist wonders what martial arts look like in this era and imagines how much they've changed over 500 years. He also wonders how strong Kajin's descendants must be by now, but suddenly his body turns heavy. His vision fades and he drops to the ground. He realizes this child's body is awful. It passes out far too easily. Worse, it's in such bad shape that unless he uses mana to control the body, he won't even be able to live a normal life. Then he suddenly feels a flow of mana. He quickly starts yelling for Julian, telling him to come fast. It seems the lesser god had been sleeping, and he asks why he was called. The protagonist demands to know why this body never learned swordsmanship earlier. Julian, confused, says the boy had a condition that stopped him from learning. Frustrated, he asks why, and Julian says he was simply born that way. Furious, the protagonist says he has a celestial exoskeleton. So why didn't he train in swordsmanship already? Julian has no idea what that means and asks why it matters so much. The protagonist says it's because mana can be stored anywhere in the body. Julian still doesn't understand, so the protagonist tells him to listen carefully. A martial artist uses mana to gain strength beyond a normal human. Usually that mana is stored in the heart, but with a celestial exoskeleton, you can store mana in more than just that. Heart. You can store it in your bones too. That means your mana can grow far beyond normal. The protagonist says Julian still doesn't get how huge that is. So he brings up Kajin. The hero king himself had a celestial exoskeleton. That makes this even more ironic. He was reborn looking like Kajin, the very man he killed in his last life. But this world, 500 years later, is stranger than he expected. Julian starts teaching him how to link imagery to the heart and imagine storage space for mana. The protagonist is stunned and asks if people don't use meditation to store mana in their actual hearts anymore. Julian has no clue what he's talking about. So he explains that Falker, the first Adenka, used a powerful meditation method to store mana in his own heart. Julian says people now store mana in imagery instead, calling each one a star. The number of stars shows a fighter's level, and storing mana in the body was abandoned long ago. He even thinks that old method may be completely lost. Hearing that, the protagonist realizes this new system was made to avoid the danger of storing mana in the heart. Back then, over half of martial artists died doing it. Their bodies exploded, but that doesn't matter to him. He starts filling his heart with mana right away. Julian panics, asking if he's seriously doing that now. The protagonist tells him to relax, his heart is strong. If he wants to be a real martial artist, he has to take that risk. Then Julian suddenly notices the mana is flowing in the wrong order, and asks if he doesn't know the circuit formula. The protagonist calls him noisy and asks if there really is such a formula. Julian insists there definitely is, but the protagonist says that in his time they just focused on the feeling. If it failed, the mana circuits twisted and exploded, though only about half died. Julian asks if people really died and he shrugs, saying that means at least half survived. Pretty decent odds, right? Julian gets mad and tells him not to act so careless, just because this isn't his body. That makes the protagonist ask why they neglected this precious body in the first place. He explains that it has amazing potential, strong heart, strong mana circuits. With proper training, it would have thrived. A good physique needs enough mana to support it, and by his estimate, Vincent Adenka's body will die before adulthood. According to him, meditation can slow the damage, but only so much. He likely has just 10 years left. Still, he says 10 years is enough. Enough for the Stormy Sword to become Sword Emperor and for Armless Davin to vanish from the world. It's the same span Davin spent trapped in an underground cell, starving to death. Those 10 years felt endless and terrifying until someone knocks, asking what the young master is doing. A voice calls through the door asking what the young master is up to. The protagonist doesn't know who's out there, but the servant barges in anyway and sees the room is a mess. He asks why the young master trashed the whole room. Getting up, the protagonist asks if he's his servant. The boy says, of course, who else would he be? The protagonist remembers him, Wilson, the one Julian will cut down in 3 years. He feels a little sorry for him, then drops the thought. He tosses his clothes to Wilson, says the timing is good, and orders him to clean both the clothes and the room. Wilson is confused. Vincent seems bolder than usual. He asks how the room got like this and even wonders if something weird happened. The protagonist says nothing strange happened. Wilson snaps back that he must have learned black magic or something like that, and says he should report it to the butler and the patriarch right away. The protagonist notes how formal the words sound even while the servant is being blatantly rude. Then he points out that he only gave him extra work. Isn't that a servant's job? Wilson loses it, saying he already said he hates doing this and asks if he's really here just to clean up after him. The protagonist answers yes because he's a servant. Isn't that obvious? Then he suddenly takes the clothes back and says if Wilson won't do it, he'll handle it himself. Alarmed, Wilson asks where he's going. He says he'll find the butler, ask for fresh clothes, and mention that he had to come in person because his servant Wilson refused. That instantly rattles the boy and makes him furious. He snatches the clothes back and says he'll clean everything too. The protagonist realizes that no matter how timid Vincent was, a servant shouldn't be this bold and disrespectful. Someone likely put Wilson there on purpose. Julian agrees it was probably a test. If Vincent handled this rude servant properly, he could prove how the 7th young master of Adenka should act. Julian also says Wilson is supposedly from a gang and has killed many people. So what should they do? That makes the protagonist laugh. Real killers give off a different kind of presence, and Wilson doesn't have it. He's just a pathetic punk. Julian asks how he can say that so confidently. Because in his past life he was the kind of man who actually lived with blood on his hands. That's when Julian realizes he may have summoned someone far scarier than a king of spirits. A while later, Wilson returns and says he washed the clothes and cleaned the room. Vincent nods and thanks him for the hard work. Wilson keeps talking, telling him not to wreck the room like a battlefield next time, until Vincent asks him to bring a wooden sword about 1 meter long and around 500 grams. It should be made of black scented wood and there should be plenty in the family warehouse. Wilson sneers and asks what happens if he refuses. Vincent stands and says he'll get it himself, and tell the warehouse guards a few things on the way. Those guards are elite martial artists, and they're loyal to the family's direct bloodline. Wilson quickly tells him to wait and grabs his shoulder. In the next second, his vision spins. He's lifted and slammed to the floor by a small child. Vincent soon apologizes, saying old memories of being attacked from behind make him react that way. Wilson says he's never heard that before. Vincent tells him to take it as a warning. Even so, his own body aches from forcing that move with such a weak frame. Wilson gets up, furious, ready to argue, but Vincent meets him with a killing stare and asks if he has something to say. Wilson stammers, then repeats that his master wanted a black scented wooden sword, about 1 meter long, right? Vincent asks if he didn't just say he wouldn't get it. Wilson mutters that he said he didn't want to, not that he absolutely wouldn't, and storms out, slamming the door behind him. A second later, he opens it again and awkwardly says the wind shut it, not him. Vincent is pleased by that small improvement. Still angry, Wilson goes to fetch the sword he was ordered to bring. On the way back, he fumes that he won't lose to Vincent again, and will show him who Wilson really is. He returns with the sword, almost expecting praise. Instead, Vincent says he once knew someone who lost his right arm, a man who suffered deeply because of it, and met a miserable end. Wilson just hands over the sword, confused by the whole thing and embarrassed. Then he leaves the room. Alone again, Vincent says he needs real training and heads to the training grounds. He strikes the dummies with sharp precision, but after only a few swings, he's exhausted. Even so, he feels made to be a martial artist. Then the dummy in front of him is split in half. A boy shows up and mocks him, saying he didn't notice someone this week standing there. He introduces himself as Raven Adenka, and makes it clear he already knows Vincent. Vincent stays calm, while Julian explains that Raven is a distant branch member of the family. He's also the favorite to win the Assembly of True Swords this year, and Vincent already knew his father in the past. Raven steps closer and says he expected to face Vincent if he won, so he came to see him himself. The Assembly of True Swords is a contest between children from martial families tied to the Adenka clan. Its winner earns the right to face a direct descendant of the Adenka family, which means Vincent. Raven taunts him, asking if he'll hide in fear, since the swords used there aren't made of wood. Vincent answers that a true martial artist doesn't fear swords. Raven laughs and says he talks big. Must be because he's a direct descendant. Vincent scolds him and says he should learn to speak better too. Even insults should carry some dignity. He says that because in his past life, even with one arm, he was respected by everyone. But now some brat cuts down his training dummy just to posture. That's shameful for a martial artist. Vincent adds that Raven's father must not have taught him any manners. At that, Raven immediately raises his sword to Vincent's rev. Raven presses his sword to Vincent's neck and says he won't forgive anyone who insults his father. Julian quickly warns that Raven is already a 2-star fighter and has the Man of Steel trait, so Vincent needs to be careful. But Vincent is more annoyed that Raven copied his father's bad habits, acting childish and ignoring a martial artist's manners. So Vincent decides to teach him some proper etiquette. He snaps his wooden sword up under Raven's chin and says a brat like him would have been beaten by the family elders. Raven is stunned. Vincent shouldn't have mana, and he definitely shouldn't know how to use imagery. Raven still believes he's stronger, but he can't shake the feeling that Vincent could cut him down at any second. Vincent lowers his sword and says they can stop if Raven is already scared of a wooden blade. If that's enough to shake him, how is he supposed to face Vincent in the Assembly of True Swords? Still glaring. Raven says this isn't a place for wooden swords. That only makes him even angrier. He rushes forward, shouting that he'll kill Vincent today. He's completely lost control. Seeing things go too far, Julian tells Vincent to run, but the boy stays calm. Then someone grabs Raven's arms and says he can't fight young Master Vincent here. If Vincent got hurt now, he'd have a reason to skip the Assembly of True Swords. Still boiling with rage, Raven says they'll settle this in the Colosseum and calls Vincent a cowardly kitten. Julian asks why Vincent had to provoke him, since this obviously could have ended badly. Vincent says he only wanted to teach a rude child a lesson. That makes Julian snap. He says he should have summoned the Spirit King instead of some old man. Just then, Vincent finds a childhood photo inside the book he was flipping through. Julian hurriedly turns the page and tells him to focus. Then we get an explanation of traits and blessings. Raven's trait is Man of Steel, a blessing from the King of Dwarves that strengthens the body. The more a trait is developed, the more powerful paths it unlocks. This is called the technological tree. Man of Steel is a mid-level trait built around defense and raw destructive power. In short, martial techniques tend to favor one side, and Raven showed something far beyond what people from Vincent's past life had seen, the power of a trait. If Vincent wants to face someone like that, he has to get used to these abilities fast, so he goes back to the training field and keeps attacking. The people watching laugh that he only uses his left hand and gets winded after just 2 or 3 swings. Then someone steps in from behind and tells them not to talk so carelessly. It's Merlin, vice commander of the White Swords unit. He asks what's so funny about the Adenka young master training with a sword. The vassals quickly apologize and go back to work. That's what Merlin says out loud. But inside, he agrees with them. Vincent looks like a disgrace to the Adenka, swinging blindly with no mana and no trait. Julian worries they're drawing too much attention, but Vincent doesn't care. He's used to being looked down on. No one thought Davin could win the Stormblade either, but he turned mockery into cheers once before, so he can do it again. Then someone holds out a potion and says it's an advanced recovery potion that'll help with training. The man introduces himself as Merlin, vice commander of the White Swords. Vincent asks why he's helping now if he was laughing earlier. Merlin admits that honestly he was, but then he saw the desperation in the boy's eyes. He says anyone who laughs at a martial artist like that is the real joke. Vincent says he'll remember Merlin's name, then apologizes for taking up his time and says he can manage. As Merlin leaves, he thinks the young master has changed a lot, and maybe things will finally improve. Vincent spends the whole day training. He keeps striking the dummy, then sits down to drink the potion Merlin gave him. That night, he studies mana and traits. He also works on balance and his cutting form. Then he starts to feel the mana in his heart and understand how it works. It feels similar to his past life. The sword's path is built from points and lines that shape its abilities. Then Vincian swings with all his strength and finally splits the dummy in two. He actually did it. His grip is now complete. Later, Wilson grumbles that his master must be a rooster for wanting food at 5 in the morning, then eyes the meal and decides it's time for a little humiliation. He enters and says breakfast is ready. But Wilson is left speechless when Vincian notices the tray is messy and some food is missing. Vincian says if he's going to steal a little, he should at least wipe his mouth first. Then he calmly warns that he may seem kind right now, but Wilson shouldn't cross the line. Wilson boasts that he used to be a street thug and has killed people before. Vincian mocks him, saying that's very frightening, but in his head he reminds himself that ruling by fear is easy, yet that never wins real loyalty or respect. That's why he isn't forcing Wilson with power alone. Only then does Wilson realize his master is using telepathy and already has mana. Vincian tells him to drop the pride and stay by his side. Soon, he says, Wilson won't be ashamed to belong to Vincian Adenka. When that time comes, he'll have to choose fear or loyalty. After leaving, Wilson mutters that he didn't feel pressured at all, but the way he shuts the door says otherwise. The cold aura Vincian gave off almost made him wet himself. Later, Merlin patrols the training grounds. It looks like young Master Vincian came even earlier today. Then he notices something shocking, a dummy cut clean in half, making him wonder if it was done with a real sword, but that makes no sense, since last time Vincian was still using wood. Could someone really improve that much in just a few days? Merlin even starts wondering what kind of martial art the boy is learning. In his past life, the protagonist complained about having only one arm, but now that he has two, he still uses just one. Or maybe he's doing it on purpose. At that moment, Vincian is dressing in his room. Wilson folds clothes while waiting for more orders. Julian jokes that the boy has become annoyingly polite. Then Vincian asks about his clothes. He says the fabric is made from Levi-dyed cotton, which may be cheap but isn't proper for a noble. The food served to him is also far below what the family budget should allow. In other words, someone is stealing money. But that suspicion quickly clears when Wilson asks what Levi-dyed is and what embezzlement means. It's obvious Wilson isn't the one behind it. It has to be someone higher up. Meanwhile, Revan is in his room training hard. In his mind, Vincian's words keep haunting him, afraid of a little wooden sword that only makes him madder. He swings with all his strength, yelling, "Who's afraid?" Then someone knocks and comes in, his father, who says the training looks good. He reminds Revan there isn't much time left before the assembly of true swords. If they want to escape poverty and the suffering of being a branch family, his son has to beat Vincian. He grips the boy's arm and says Revan must become the one branch family member who surpasses the main family, no matter what. Revan can only answer, "Yes, sir," to the father, who put all his hopes on him. If he beats Vincian, his family might return to what they had before. Back in Vincian's room, Julian gives him information on everyone entering the event. Vincian is surprised it includes not just personal details, but also their techniques and habits. He's impressed enough to call Julian terrifying. Julian's original plan was to make a flashy debut at the assembly by borrowing the Spirit King's power, then win the mana crystal that can instantly strengthen whoever consumes it. Seeing how serious Julian is, Vincian realizes how badly this child wants to win. As a martial artist, losing with all this help would be shameful, so he stands and says that even if he isn't the Spirit King Julian wanted, he'll give him a victory worth even more. A little later, he rings for Wilson, who rushes in, out of breath, asking what the young master needs. Vincian says there's something he wants done. Elsewhere, someone is sorting through a pile of papers. Then Wilson enters and greets the person inside. It's the ruler, Realsa, who immediately asks what he wants. Wilson trembles all over in front of a 7-star martial artist. Still, he says his young master has a message for the family head. Realsa replies that it seems the young master lacks the nerve to face his own father. Wilson says his master asks the family head to personally attend the assembly of true swords this time, because he'll prove he deserves to stand in the main Adenka family. Realsa is about to say the family head never attends, but Wilson adds that diverted budgets can make the impossible possible. She asks what he just said, and Wilson, shaking, says he only repeated his young master's words. With her permission, he quickly leaves. Realsa understands that Vincian could have come himself, and it might have worked better, but he sent Wilson on purpose to show authority. Pleased, she says the boy finally gets what she meant. Meanwhile, in the Patriarch's room, the man was giving off a terrifying aura. Then he suddenly calls for Realsa, showing he already knew she was there. She gets right to it and says young Master Vincian has invited the Patriarch to the assembly of the true swords. He coldly says she should stop this nonsense. He tells her to quit the pointless act, but Realsa insists the boy plans to prove he deserves his place in the main Hedwig's family. The Patriarch repeats the words, "prove his worth," then asks if she truly believes the boy has enough skill to talk like that. She says not at all. That's exactly why he promised to prove it. Now, she begs him to attend and even offers herself as security. He asks if she understands what that means. Realsa says she does. If young Master Vincian fails, she will give up her head to the Patriarch. He asks why she would go that far. She answers simply because young Master Vincent has something that makes up for his weakness. Raelsa is startled when the patriarch brings up the budget issue. He knows she did it on purpose for the boy's sake, planning to use that money for his future, so he says he has no reason to interfere. Raelsa serves that woman, not him. Still, whatever method the boy chose suits her style, and he made his request without costing her dignity. He wonders if this boy is really Servana's son, the child of that legendary woman. Then he rises and says fine, she wins. He'll attend this year's Assembly of the True Swords. At last, the day of the event arrives. Raven is among the fighters, looking fully determined. His goal is simple, beat Vincent. Then he looks up and senses an unusual presence. He's shocked to see Patriarch Khan there. Raven assumes he came to watch the rising star among the collateral line. Soon the event begins. Raven pressures his opponent, who struggles to hold him off. Coming down with a heavy strike, he warns him not to get overconfident, but his sword suddenly snaps. Raven immediately moves to finish it, smashing into the boy's shield until it cracks. His father cheers wildly from the stands. The crowd whispers about the boy, the rising star of the collateral branch. Vincent thinks these kids are talented compared to those from his past life, but their martial arts are shallow. Most of their strength comes from their attributes, and Raven's movements show little real combat experience. That's probably why he leans on his attribute and attacks so recklessly. Raven bows to the crowd, giving Vincent some credit for not running away. Vincent, meanwhile, has been waiting for this fight. The patriarch watches closely. Before long, another broken sword flies through the air, and a boy is sent flying. Once again, the winner is Raven Adenka. Looking at the patriarch, he says he's beaten every other challenger, and by the Elder's Law, he now has to face a close relative, Vincent Adenka. In other words, he must fight a direct descendant of the family. Of course, Vincent accepts. Now standing across from each other, Judge Zarin asks if they're ready, but the protagonist tells him to wait. He has one condition. Just then, Wilson steps up behind him carrying his wooden sword. As if using a wooden blade wasn't insulting enough, Vincent says he won't use his right arm and will let Raven attack 3 times first. Raven's father explodes in the stands, while everyone else thinks Vincent is insane. Vincent adds that he won't even move from where he's standing during those attacks. That makes Raven furious, asking if he's going to mock him to the very end. The crowd murmurs that Vincent knows no martial arts and is acting arrogant. Raven's furious father yells that the boy is only setting up an excuse for when he loses, but the patriarch allows it, saying Vincent must back up those words with action. Vincent says he will. Then the judge starts the match. Raven tells Vincent to come at him seriously, but Vincent asks if he's deaf. He already said. Raven gets 3 free attacks. The duel begins. Raven rushes in with everything he has. Vincent is ready for it all. The day before, he and Julian had gone over Raven's likely opening. First, a short thrust and a feint. The second attack would probably be his trump card. To Vincent, though, Raven is too predictable. Even with his great endurance, he still ignores the basics of swordsmanship. Channeling mana into his hand, Vincent says, first of all, broadswords aren't made for thrusting. Raven can't believe Vincent actually knocked his sword aside. Vincent calmly says that was already the second attack. Raven can only curse. Enraged, he swings into a powerful horizontal slash, but his hand is caught. Vincent trips him with ease and drops him to the ground. That alone leaves the boy in serious pain. Vincent reminds him that was the third attack. At that moment, he thinks of the promise he made to Julian and the promise he made to his father and the patriarch. Now it's his turn. The crowd is stunned. Even Judge Zarin can't believe what he just saw. The patriarch is fully focused on the fight while Raven's father keeps raging. He shouts, asking why his son is still down and not getting up, why he's struggling against someone who supposedly can't even use mana. Even Julian doesn't understand, because he can't see what Vincent is doing. Of course, it all comes from his past life, when he trained one-armed and often without a weapon. Raven starts getting up, saying he gets it now. He guesses Vincent must have some special trait, probably from a lesser god he's too ashamed to show. Julian gets angry at that, but Vincent says it doesn't matter what Raven thinks. Raven charges in, trying to end the fight. Julian warns that attack is dangerous, and Vincent dodges it. Now he has an opening, and he plans to hit with a lot of force. Raven notices the gap but has no time, and takes a blow from the wooden sword to the neck. But he's shocked because he feels no pain from the hit. His father yells that of course it didn't work. A practiced sword could never break the defense of the Man of Steel. In truth, that was because Vincent's body is still weak and untrained. Raven steps forward with contempt, saying he'll show the gap that talent alone can't cover. Vincent answers with a strong thrust straight into Raven's chest, sending him flying several meters. Furiously, Vincent shouts to Judge Zarin to step in and stop this before it turns into tragedy, catching the moderator off guard. Putting great power into his leg, Vincent dashes after him, thinking that if he uses this technique even once, his body may collapse, so he has to finish it while Raven is still in the air. Even then, Raven tries to strike back, but now Vincent can see it all. He sees the paths of the swords linking together. Charging in, he tells Julian to watch the sword art he mastered. After putting all the pieces together, he drops with all his force in one blow and severs Raven's arm. Raven's father can't believe it, and even the patriarch is impressed. Vincent cut through space itself and twisted the flow of mana, slicing through Raven's ability too, a technique from his past life. Raven screams in agony, crying that he can't feel his arm anymore. Vincent angrily asks the judge if he needs to cut off a leg too before being declared the winner. Only then does the moderator announce Vincent Edenke as the winner. People rush to stop the bleeding, but say only a priest can help now. Vincent meanwhile scolds Zarin, saying he warned him to stop a tragedy, and the man can only apologize. Julian asks how he's staying so calm when his body is about to collapse. Looking at the patriarch, Vincent says he kept his promise. At first, the man says nothing. Then he admits the boy promised to prove his worth and show the difference of the direct bloodline, and he truly did, with great skill. He personally declares Vincent Edenka the winner of the Assembly of the True Swords. He orders everyone to follow him, because the awards ceremony will begin soon. By nightfall, Vincent stands before the patriarch. Inside a box rests a beautiful stone. The patriarch says only one who overcame hardship can receive this miraculous stone, and he is about to hand it to the boy when someone bursts in, shouting that this makes no sense. It's Raven's father, claiming the whole thing is a fraud. He accuses Vincent of borrowing power from some apostle. Then someone hurries in behind him and says there's a problem. The patriarch quickly asks what happened. The answer: young Master Raven's arm can no longer be reattached. It really is another severed arm. His father asks if that means his son will stay one-armed forever. Furious, he demands to know why the priest can't simply restore it. But the priest explains this is a kind of wound they've never seen before. Not even Julian knows what Vincent did. It looks like the cut was made by something even divine power can't endure. The priest adds that if they don't act fast, not even a high priest may heal the wound. The furious father tells the patriarch to look closely, if even a third-rank priest can't treat it. Was this really done fairly? Murmurs spread through the room. To settle it, Vincent asks the patriarch for permission to speak, and gets it. Vincent says the Assembly of the True Swords was held before the patriarch himself, the patriarch present. Every method was allowed, and the patriarch had already named him the winner, so Charles was openly challenging his authority in front of important guests. Vincent asks if Charles Denka really thinks his judgment is better than the patriarch's, leaving the man speechless. Then he tells Darren to arrest him. Vincent was seriously ordering Charles Denka's arrest. Charles tried to defend himself, but Vincent cuts him off. He had questioned the patriarch in public, so Darren says he'll carry out the order. A moment later, Charles was on his knees and tied up. Then the patriarch called out to Charles and asked if he still didn't understand that he owed Vincent. By Zdenka law, no one is judged twice for the same crime, and if Vincent hadn't stepped in, Charles would already be dead. The patriarch adds that, as both a father and a family head, he'll let this pass, but warns him not to speak again. After that, he praises Vincent for handling it well. Julian laughed, clearly pleased by the praise, but Revan's condition still looked bad. At this rate, his arm would stay like that forever. Then Julian quietly whispered something to Vincent. He had a way to turn this around. So Vincent asks the Reverend if even a miracle stone couldn't heal Revan's right arm. The man hesitates, and Vincent takes that as a yes. He tells the patriarch that since he caused the injury, he should be allowed to settle it himself. The patriarch agrees and leaves it to him. Vincent says Revan had insulted him as a martial artist, and Revan's father quickly apologizes for failing to raise him better. Taking a sword from a guard, Vincent says words mean nothing without action. He cuts Charles free and tells him to show the resolve of a true martial artist. If he does, Vincent will use the miracle stone to save his son. In short, it was payback. One arm for another. He wanted Charles the Denka's right arm. Vincent thought the man was pathetic. He stood there silent, as if his own arm mattered more than his son. But then Charles grabbed the sword, set his arm on the table, and said he'd give it up. He was shaking with anger the whole time. Still, everyone could see it was a twisted kind of fatherly love. He really was willing to lose an arm for his son. He swung the sword down at his arm, but Vincent, annoyed, glances aside and reminds them he told them to stop any accident. Zarin instantly slashes across and shatters Charles's sword. That was the only reason Charles didn't cut off his own arm. Vincent tells him to use that courage for something better next time. Then he bows to the patriarch and says the matter is settled. The patriarch praises him again and gives him the miracle stone. Vincent immediately hands it to the Reverend, who starts a holy spell with the stone in his mouth. When it shattered, Reverend's arm was restored and the pain was gone. Charles broke down in tears, full of relief. Even if it saved someone, using that stone was still a huge loss because of how valuable it was. Outside the door, Wilson had heard everything. He laughed to himself, saying his master was unbelievably bold, truly impressive. He remembered Vincent once telling him to choose between loyalty and fear. Now he had his answer. Serving this prodigy sounded far more interesting. The next day, Wilson was smiling as he stood by the door, saying he'd hurry and prepare his master's meal. Julian couldn't believe the change. Then someone knocked at the door. Vincent told them to come in, expecting Wilson with food. But it wasn't his vassal. It was Dullan, a pontiff of Gaia. He had come to thank Vincent for what happened earlier. Julian was stunned when the man offered Vincent a miracle stone. Dullan explains that this was the stone meant for young Master Revan, but Vincent says it makes no sense to give it to him now. Dullan says he became a pontiff to lift up the suffering, but earlier he lost his way and weighed a human life against the value of the stone. Vincent, on the other hand, gave up his own stone without hesitation. That made them reflect on themselves, so Dullan asks him to accept this one. Vincent says he doesn't deserve that much praise, but accepts it to honor the man's choice. Then Dulin gives him one more thing, a card from the sacred temple, saying that if he ever needs help, he should just show it. He adds that this isn't public yet, but he's already become a second-class pontiff. Julian is shocked. In other words, with that card, Vincent could get treatment and temple services freely. Dulin says he learned a lot from young Master Vincent and thanks him. Vincent simply wishes him well. Both of them were pleased with how things turned out. Then Julian suddenly remembers something. He says the patriarch once invited a family member to dine with him after the assembly of true swords. That happened to the second child from the direct line after a huge victory in the assembly. So there's a decent chance, maybe 50%, that the patriarch may call Vincent tonight. Vincent gets up and says that even if he's exhausted, now isn't the time to rest. He quickly changes clothes, saying that if Julian is right, it's better to be ready. That trust makes Julian happy. Then Wilson rushes in, saying it's urgent. He starts to announce that the family head, but Vincent cuts him off and asks if the family head has summoned him. Wilson is shocked that he guessed it. At the main Adenka mansion, Vincent heads through the halls toward the patriarch's office when a woman suddenly tells him to hurry. It was his stepmother. Since Vincent's real mother died giving birth to him, he politely greets her as mother. Her name was Virsa Helene. Once a fearsome martial artist, she now handled the Adenka household. She just says they need to go. His father is waiting. They enter the room, but the patriarch immediately catches them off guard. He looked furious and shouted Vincent's name. The pressure pouring off him was so heavy Vincent could barely breathe. Still, Vincent quickly realizes the patriarch hadn't acted like this earlier, so this was probably a test. He says there's no need to pressure his son like this in a private meeting. The patriarch asks why he thinks that. Sweating, Vincent points out that his mother called him father, not family head, so this meeting was meant to be informal. The patriarch drops the pressure and praises him for noticing. Then he says he called him here for two reasons. First, to congratulate him on today's win. Second, to test whether Charles Adenka's suspicions had any truth. Charles was sure Vincent had cheated. Then Vincent feels a massive presence pushing into his mind. His mother was examining him. He starts sweating under the pressure. The patriarch asks if the boy could be an apostle, and she says no. Vincent still couldn't understand what this crushing force was. Julian realizes it must be his mother's special skill, eyes that can see through the truth. The patriarch goes on, asking what sword art Vincent used because it made no sense for him to sever a two-star martial artist's arm without linking mana to his heart. His mother says the style resembles that of the great hero Cajun. Legend says Cajun used the sword in a strange way and could swallow any skill that came at him. He was so strong that he even defeated the great demon Davin with ease. Hearing that twisted version again makes Vincent angry. Then his mother steps closer and demands that he explain how he learned swordsmanship like the hero of Samayan. She keeps pressing him, asking why he won't answer. At that moment, Vincent realizes it wasn't really his father who called him here. His mother was leading this talk and interrogating him about his martial art. Panicked, Julian begs him not to say anything. This woman could tell truth from lies, so making up excuses wouldn't work. The pressure was crushing and they had no idea what to do. Julian tries to think of a way out, but his mother presses him again, telling him to speak. Julian is so scared he can't think straight. Then Vincent tells himself it's just one step past fear, and the rest will follow. So he takes that step for Julian and tells his mother that he received a revelation. She immediately asks if he's claiming he got a revelation without a blessing. Angrily, she says that almost no one receives revelations without blessings unless they're evil. Vincent hadn't known that. Seeing how suspicious he looked, she asks whether he wants to be judged by the sacred court or stand before the judges of Jeremiel. Then Julian urgently tells him what to say next. If she thinks he's suspicious, then she should confirm it with the temple. That answer catches her off guard. Vincent argues that if he were truly evil, a third-rank priest would never have given him a miracle stone and acknowledged him. The woman asks if the miraculous stone is the same one she gave to Dellen, and he says yes. She checks with her eyes and sees he's telling the truth. Then she asks if a revelation taught him swordsmanship. He says revelations taught him many things, but not that. He explains he's always been able to read the strange flow of a sword, and after thinking for a few days, he chose to learn it. He wanted to change, and even if that made people suspicious, doing nothing would have been cowardly. Mixing both their truths together, he says he felt he had to show something had changed. He wanted to prove to their many relatives how much he had grown stronger, and also show his worth to his father. He trusted his father to judge fairly, and since the temple approved him too, the only thing left was his father's decision. The man rubs his chin and his wife notices that's what he does when he's pleased. Then he gives his final answer. The boy can keep training in martial arts. He thanks him overjoyed, but the woman reminds the patriarch that Hirokujin's sword style looks like that of the great demon king Dav Yang. He says he already knows. She goes on, if Vincent uses Hiro's style, the Samayon family could accuse them of stealing it, but if it's the demon king style instead, they can't say much. So she asks if he made his decision with all that in mind. He firmly says he considered everything that mattered, and the matter is closed. She lets out a sigh and tells the boy that since the patriarch approved this, he will bear the responsibility. So Vincent must improve and not bring trouble to his father. It isn't just a warning, she's accepting the decision too. The patriarch stands and says the boy has shown great results, and proved himself worthy as a direct Edenka descendant. Because of that, he'll grant him something he wants and asks what it is. Vincent answers that he wants to become stronger. The patriarch says that's a good reply, but that's something he must achieve himself. So he tells the boy to ask for something the patriarch can actually give him. Julian tells Vincent to ask for access to the library. The man says only 3-star martial artists can enter and asks if he's linked imagery to his heart yet. He says not yet, and that's why he'd like to use this chance to act a little spoiled. Laughing, the patriarch agrees and lets him into the lower library used by 3-star martial artists. He also tells his wife to give Vincent the Crimson Lotus. The patriarch tells him to take it as the reward for keeping his promise. The Crimson Lotus was the sword his father used in his youth, the blade that helped build his name across the world. It's practically part of the anicaps family's history. Julian can barely hide his joy, but Vincent tells him not to be satisfied with only this. They'll achieve far more later. The lesser deity is so happy, he wonders if he could have done any better by summoning the Spirit King instead of the old man, now inside his body. At that moment, he feels he can truly trust the man with his body. Outside, Vincent tells Wilson they should go, but then his mother appears on the stairs and asks if he has a moment. She says it's clear he's been working hard, and she's proud of her son. Since he won the Assembly of True Swords, custom says he must enter the Crimson Fortress, and she asks how he plans to subdue the Crimson Demon. The Crimson Fortress is one of the anicaps family's training grounds. Only those who finish its trial are fully recognized as martial artists, and to enter one must win the Assembly of True Swords and defeat the low-ranked demon called the Crimson Demon. Not knowing the answer, he admits he doesn't. That surprises her. She thought he had a plan for everything. She also says that strange sword move he used earlier must have hurt his whole body badly, so he should listen carefully. No one can beat that demon in one strike, and if he fights it now in his current condition, he will die for sure. After hearing his mother warn that he can't defeat the Crimson Demon with a single blow, Julian wonders why she's helping them. To Vincent, it almost feels like she's started to accept them. She could have turned against them, but she didn't. Maybe she doesn't like them, yet she won't act as an enemy either. Before she can keep talking, Vincent thanks her for the warning, and says he won't disappoint her, then leaves without even hearing the Crimson Demon's details. Seeing his martial skill and courage, her heart stirs at the thought of his future. The next day, the vassal hums while folding sheets, saying he'll support the protagonist however he can. When someone suddenly smacks him on the head, the maid Sari asks what kind of trouble he's planning with the young master, since she still doesn't trust him. He answers that he's only doing laundry, which surprises her. He's actually working. Serantic asks where the young master is, and he says Vincent is in the library, where only family martial artists are allowed. Inside, Vincent is frustrated because he can't find records from 500 years ago. Julian says that's strange. It looks like that whole period was removed on purpose, as if someone erased it. Vincent decides to leave that for later. Right now, what matters most is raising his skill. At his current level, he can't beat the Crimson Demon, so he needs a training method before reaching imagery theory. Julian points out that Vincent called Aslan's father a child, and uses the late Hero King's sword art, which makes him wonder who Vincent really is. Vincent thinks that if he said he was the Demon King, Julian would probably panic. But lying would also be rude, since Julian once owned this body, and shares the same fate. So he decides to tell the truth, and says his real name. But hearing it gives Julian a terrible headache. He can't even understand the name and asks him to say it again, but the pain only gets worse. Vincent worries about Julian, so Julian gives up on learning his identity for now. Then Vincent finds a book called First Love of a Watermill. Julian wonders why a romance novel is sitting with mana training books, but since this is a family library, it's probably not just romance. As they read it, they realize someone hid a secret historical record inside a love story. Vincent thinks this could be a useful clue, and as he reads more, he finds that the main character doesn't use imagery, but uses the power of love as a trait instead. Vincent thinks it might work, but Julian says that's impossible and dangerous. Vincent argues that whoever did it survived long enough to write this book. Even if it's risky, this is the first real shortcut they've found to grow stronger fast, and they need to test it right away. On his way out of the library, Vincent runs into Saray, who asks if it's true that he beat Raven. Vincent asks Julian who she is, and from his memories he realizes she's someone who truly cared about the old pathetic him. When she learns he really did defeat Raven, she drops to the floor in relief. She thought the assembly would only make people ignore him more. Vincent asks Julian if he knows how to comfort a woman, but Julian says they never taught that in magic and spirits class. Since neither of them knows what to do, Vincent simply apologizes for keeping secrets and says he's trying hard to become a leader she can be proud of. While he's trying to comfort her, Raven shows up and ruins the moment. He says he's been looking for Vincent and has something to say. The two move to a room and face each other in silence. Serantic asks if anyone wants a sandwich, but Raven, ashamed of his loss, pulls out his sword and says he'll repay what happened at the assembly. Vincent doesn't expect an attack, so he draws his own sword. He knows he can't use the same trick as last time. He tells Suri to leave, but before anything happens, Raven says he owes Vincent a great debt. Vincent forgave his disrespect and gave him the miraculous stone. He even spared his father from losing an arm. Powerless and ashamed of his own cowardice, Raven decided to offer the most important thing he has, his loyalty. He sets his sword down, kneels before Vincent, and swears himself to him. Vincent is glad to see not every young martial artist is hopeless. Julian asks if Raven could be lying, but Vincent says he turned the sword toward himself, a warrior's sign of offering his life. He's serious. Julian says he'll trust Raven too, but before that he proposes a deal to Vincent. Vincent accepts the oath and rests the sword on Raven's shoulder. He says Raven may stand by his side until the day he betrays him. Raven then notices the sword in Vincent's hand is the Crimson Lotus, which means the patriarch has already chosen him. That only makes Raven more certain he made the right choice in pledging loyalty. Seeing this, Siri realizes Vincent really has changed. The days when everyone called him a loser already feel far away. Julian uses the moment to suggest using Raven to gain the blessing of the Dwarf King. Later, in the Patriarch's Hall, Vincent's mother says he seems to be planning to enter the Crimson Fortress next year. The Patriarch asks about defeating the Crimson Demon, and she says she even tried to explain what resources he has, but he refused with total confidence. The Crimson Demon can use 3rd star mana and has no physical body. That's why beating it is seen as proof you've surpassed the 3rd star. She also adds that in recent days, Raven Denka has been staying in his quarters, so now Raven is helping the protagonist with his plans. They explain they want the Dwarf King's blessing by using the method from the book. To do that, Vincent has to meditate beside Raven while he guides the flow. That means Vincent is basically trusting him with his life. Vincent has no issue with it, since Raven already swore loyalty. Raven feels ashamed again. If their positions were reversed, he doesn't think he could trust someone the way Vincent does. He's also amazed by this reckless training method. He never thought someone from the main family would risk his life just to get stronger. Julian scolds Vincent, saying he's acting like he's on a tightrope over a cliff. Even Raven says he's moving too fast and shouldn't rush. But Vincent says this is how he's always lived. No one ever handed him anything, so he had to risk his life to move ahead. Julian is nervous he could actually die, but Vincent nearly finishes the flow. Only the final link is missing. He forces the two parts together, but they break apart right after. The clash causes a huge explosion. Raven gets blasted back and crashes onto the bed, badly hurt. Elsewhere, his father says the next Crimson Fortress enrollment is in half a year. Since Vincent already beat a 2nd star martial artist, subduing a Crimson Demon should be just another test for him. Back in the room, Raven asks if he's okay. Even with 2 stars, it took Raven half a year to absorb the Dwarf King's trait, and despite being a genius, he still needs 2 more months. But Vincent doesn't have that kind of time. His father gave him only 1 month to defeat the Crimson Demon. The butler comes to deliver the order. She's clearly worried he barely has time to get ready, and when she opens the door, what she sees shocks her. The room is wrecked and Vincent and Raven are being treated by Sari. She immediately demands to know what happened. Raven gets nervous around her because she's a 7-star butler. Vincent tells her not to worry, and claims he was just meditating. Sari calls that a lie. Nobody ends up like this from simple meditation. The butler notices everything about him feels different, from his presence to the way he talks. Still, when he asks her not to worry, she lets it go. She just tells him to hurry with this meditation, because his father ordered him to finish the rite within a month. Julian notes he's never set a deadline before. Vincent is pleased, taking it as proof his father now expects something from him. She adds that in 1 month she'll personally serve as his protector, and hopes he'll be ready by then. Raven worries because getting the Dwarf King's blessing should take at least 2 months, while Sari is more worried about Vincent's condition and tells him not to push too hard. He promises he won't, but then notices a lot of mana moving around her body, like she's hiding something. Still, he asks her to leave because he has more to discuss with Raven. Raven tells Vincent 1 month isn't enough to get the Dwarf King's trait, and suggests another way to grow stronger. And Vincent reveals something that shocks both of them. When he forced the flow, he actually completed the magic circuit. That means he can skip ahead to the final step. Julian is thrilled and says the truly worthy can do anything. Vincent says instead of just meeting the 1 month limit, he's going to surpass his father's expectations. 2 weeks later, the three meet in a forest. Vincent is going to manifest the trait again. They get ready, and Vincent tells Raven to stand back in case it explodes, like last time. But Raven refuses. He wants to see Vincent succeed with his own eyes. Vincent starts moving the flow, forming a full spiral. The pattern links up and spreads into several circles. Julian says it feels completely different. Then, when he looks up, he sees the Dwarf King. He's probably the only one who can see him, since he's a god too. The Dwarf King moves to strike and slams right into Vincent, finishing the trait. Raven says Vincent gained a first defense trait, body strengthening, which is already a little ahead of his own. He's stunned by how fast Vincent is growing. In less than a month, he got the Dwarf King's blessing. As the Dwarf King slowly fades, Julian tells him to head home. Vincent is glad he's finally built the base he needs to subdue the Crimson Demon. He thanks Raven, who says to save that thanks until after the demon is beaten. Then Vincent asks him for one more favor. 2 days later, Vincent heads for the Crimson Demon's lair in a brand new outfit, apologizing to the butler for the sudden request. He just wants to go beyond his father's expectations. The butler worries because he's not only skipping part of his prep time, he's going in 2 weeks early. She wonders if he'll really be okay. She says she's guarded this rite 3 times for the patriarch and his brothers, and no one from the family line has ever failed. She warns him he can't be the first. Vincent stays firm and says he's not facing the Crimson Demon with empty courage. Inside the carriage, Vincent tells Julian a guardian seems pointless for a mission like this. Julian says they're also there to collect the Crimson Demon's treasures and to keep an eye on him. The butler asks if he studied the Crimson Demon. Reaching 3 stars of mana is only the first step to subduing it, and by her judgment, he still doesn't meet the full requirements. Julian points out that Vincent never once asked about the Crimson Demon. Vincent tells him not to worry, this demon was his first hunt. She warns that even with his strange sword style, he can't drop his guard, so Vincent asks why she's trying to help him. She says she's the test's official guardian, but he sees through it and asks if she's really trying to hide budget issues. Still, if she doesn't want to explain, that's fine. She also never asked about his training. At last, they reach the test site. The Crimson Demon's lair is an ancient temple ruin, a memorial to Father Aslan after he defeated one of the remnants of the great demon Davin. Then she draws her sword and says she'll prepare the area, raising it upward. A huge beam of light bursts out, and a mana barrier covers the whole temple, so monsters can't pass through it. Vincent begins the test, and the Crimson Demon appears. He tells her to watch closely and report exactly what she sees, how he surpasses his father's expectations. The Crimson Demon attacks first with a scythe. Julian tells him to dodge, but making distance would only help this enemy, so Vincent does the opposite and closes in. The Crimson Demon, which had been attacking, is forced to defend against Vincent's assault and can't counter properly with its scythe as he keeps pressuring it. Watching from afar, the butler says closing the gap on a long-range fighter is obvious, but this is still his first real battle, and he's only 14. The way he fights makes it look like he's beaten the Crimson Demon hundreds of times. Vincent is pleased with the Dwarf King's marks. They let him move freely, even without a trained body. Still, he knows this is only support for his true strength, swordsmanship. He uses the demon's scythe as a step and jumps back, creating perfect distance. The Crimson Demon is aggressive, and being forced on defense clearly rattled it. Its anger makes its move simpler and leaves it open. Against an enemy full of openings, the sword's path becomes easy. He uses the mark to lower the cost of his sword skill and slices through the demon's middle. With one strike, he seems to have subdued it, and a small red orb drops out. He looks at the butler and asks if she saw that clearly, but she isn't satisfied at all. She's worried he really doesn't know why the Crimson Demon didn't die from one blow. It actually has 2 lives, and it starts forming again behind the protagonist, ready to strike. She tries to warn him, but he already knew this would happen and dodges easily. He thinks it's just like 500 years ago, but then another attack comes much faster than the first. He barely avoids it and realizes its form hasn't just changed, it's stronger too. These demons evolved over the last 500 years. The butler explains that once revived, the Crimson Demon becomes enraged. Its speed and power both rise. It slams at him with its palm, smashing the ground with huge force. Vincent dodges but admits it's dangerous to face it now. Then he finds his escape blocked by a wall. The Crimson Demon swings its scythe and splits the wall in half. Julian says this is going badly and tells him to use the plan. But Vincent says he first has to force the demon to lower its guard. He's likely trying to corner it before the finishing blow. Once that final opening appears, he can use the plan. Watching from afar, the butler says that if she steps in, Vincent automatically fails. She doesn't want to ruin his future, because he's Sylvana's son. She came from a ruined family and survived by doing illegal work, but meeting Sylvana was like facing a monster. What shocked her even more was Sylvana reaching out and asking her to join them. Back then, Sylvana was traveling to become a martial artist, and she wasn't alone. Her companions were Vincent's father and his current stepmother. At first, the butler didn't even know why she agreed to join them, but she became part of the adventure that later turned into legend in Edenka. Sometime later, she fought a red ogre with that group. She says she wasn't the main fighter that time, while Sylvana took the chance to cut off its head. Sylvana was strong, beautiful, and had a way of making people smile. She became the hope of her life. So when Sylvana gave birth and died, the butler chose to use her own life to protect that child until he became a respected martial artist. But after 14 years, all she had seen were the endless times he was mocked by his brothers. She had stopped expecting anything from him and even thought about leaving Edenska. One day, when she saw Wilson sneaking around, she found out Vincent had finally been recognized by the family. Meanwhile, the Crimson Demon charges at Vincent. Without changing his expression, he calls for Revan, who appears at once and blocks the demon's strike. The butler is shocked by Revan's sudden help. Vincent says he's counting on him, then sits down and starts to meditate. She's stunned. Doing that now seems insane, because one hit or even a shove could kill him. Even with the Crimson Demon still locked on Vincent, Revan fights hard to buy time, even managing to push it back a little. The Crimson Demon turns to him and attacks, but Revan blocks it. He thinks it's weaker than expected, but then a storm of attacks catches him off guard. His Steelman trait doesn't protect the sword, and under the demon's blows it starts to split apart. After one heavy hit, the blade finally shatters. The Crimson Demon goes for the last strike, but even unarmed, Revan stops the scythe with his bare hands and calls to Vincent. Vincent says he's done enough, then uses his sword skill to cut the demon down, ending the Crimson Demon for good. The butler asks if this was his plan all along. She praises him, then adds his father won't like that he got help. Vincent tells her not to worry. She made this mana barrier so no monsters could enter, But now that one demon is dead, more will come. This fight was just Revan's way of proving his resolve to him. Now Vincent has to prove his own. He bites down on the magic crystal he got, restoring his mana. Even with body enhancement, he can only use that power twice a day, and because he still couldn't judge the miracle stone's limit, he had to meditate. When the Crimson Demon attacks, he answers with a huge slash from his sword skill. The blow forces the demon's core open, exposing several weak points. In that instant, Vincent finds the path of the sword again and kills the Crimson Demon in 1 second, leaving the butler speechless. She realizes she never needed to worry. He's become someone truly incredible. Vincent spits out a little blood, but he doesn't fall. Julian is amazed and curious about that technique, since just a few uses left Vincent's body in terrible shape. She tells him to rest and says she'll carry him home if he passes out, but Vincent says it's like the assembly. The last one standing is the real winner. Then something bizarre happens. A huge magic circle appears overhead. Everyone panics when they realize it's a summoning circle. The butler says nothing like this was ever recorded in the rite of passage, as stones begin stacking together. What appears is a giant stone serpent, a guardian of the artifact. A guardian this massive staying, hidden until now, likely means it was made with the temple itself. She tries to speak to it and ask its purpose, but gets no answer, probably because it's too ancient. She tells Revan to get Vincent out of there, since he can barely stand, and gets ready to fight it herself. As she prepares her 7th grade sword skill, the guardian attacks first, making the children think she's dead, but the stone beast suddenly freezes solid from the inside out. Seeing that, Revan is stunned by the power of a 7-star fighter, but Vincent says it's not over yet and strikes a pillar nearby. No one understands why except the butler, who realizes he's trying to tell her something. When she looks closer, she spots a tiny insect-shaped jewel on the pillar, the guardian's real body. It flies straight toward the children. She rushes over and slices it in half. She couldn't sense its true form, likely because of its age, but Vincent found it right away and warned her. He's lying on the ground, clearly spent, but still points to a box in the frozen rubble. It was probably what the guardian had been protecting. When she opens the box, she finds the bones of a dead dragon. It looks like this relic was left by the founder of Aslan. Julian says a dragon skeleton is an incredibly rare material worth a fortune. Vincent figures that's why he created a rite of passage there. She tells the young master to keep the bone. Usually spoils like this belong to the family, and letting him keep it could bring her trouble, but she says he earned it and she'll face the result. Vincent decides to split the bone and give half to her, because he couldn't have done it alone. The patriarch stands at the graveyard of the old patriarchs. The butler reports that Vincent passed the rite of passage, but he says that should be sent to the presbytery. She says what she saw was too amazing not to tell him herself. She explains that the hostile Revan Adenka was moved by Vincent and risked his life against the Crimson Demon, letting the young master bring it down. As expected, the patriarch complains that he didn't do it alone, but she goes on saying that after that, Vincent killed another Crimson Demon by himself and found a dragon skeleton left by the founder of Aslan. She shows the bone cut in half, and the patriarch asks if Vincent split it himself. She says yes. The patriarch says she's forgetting something, then tells her to break the bone. She strikes it, but nothing happens. Then she uses her technique and puts in all her strength, but the bone still won't break. The patriarch says it takes at least a first-class smith to break a dragon skeleton. It seems his son has a rare talent, and he asks her to keep watching over him. Back in the room, Wilson is nervously worrying about something, but Siri tells him to keep quiet because Vincent needs rest after the subjugation. He's scared because he'll have to go with Vincent to the Crimson Fortress, a place full of terrifying monsters and martial artists. Siri teases him, asking if a back-alley thug is really scared of a few little monsters. Vincent asks Julian if he still hasn't noticed the mana flowing through Siri's body. Julian says he's never felt anything like it, even though he's known her longer. Vincent says he saw a similar flow 500 years ago and asks her full name. She says she's Sarvanna Heasley from the ruined Heasley family. That makes Vincent realize at once that she has a magical body. Julian has no idea what that means, or why the Heasley family matters. Vincent explains that her family studied mana and the body. They discovered the celestial exoskeleton and created a skill called magical body. Like the celestial exoskeleton, she can pour mana into the body. If that power stays stable, she might stop the celestial exoskeleton from dying. Vincent asks if any elder from her family is still alive, but Wilson snaps, asking if he knows why she had to leave. She says her grandmother died, and that was the only family she ever knew. Julian can't understand how a family with powers like that could be ruined, but Vincent says if someone wanted to hide the truth about the celestial exoskeleton, the first thing they'd do is silence the ones who made it. There was one more person, but she's dead now. His mother Sarvanna was also a Heasley. Julian's face shows he never knew that. Her name had been banned in the house because the patriarch always looked sad whenever he heard it. In fact, they're only here because of her, especially the butler, who she once helped. While they talk, the butler enters to say young Revan is leaving. Outside, he says his reason for coming is finished. He helped Vincent get the Crimson Demon, and he can't stay forever. Before he goes, Vincent asks one last favor. He wants Revan to investigate the Heasley family from 500 years ago. Someone seems to have tampered with the records, but the truth might still be found through side sources, like the book First Love of a Watermill. They say goodbye, and Revan promises that next time they meet, he'll be stronger. Vincent then turns to the butler and says he heard about his mother. He has a request, not as Sarvana's son, but as Vincent Adenka. He wants her to train him until the day he leaves for the Crimson Fortress. She wonders if it's time to give her loyalty to the next generation, then quickly apologizes for her wavering heart. She warns him she won't go easy in training, and he says that's exactly what he wants. So training begins. She confirms he can learn a trait without imagery, but since he asked to be trained as a martial artist, she wants to focus on real combat. Vincent notices she isn't using the same sword from the rite of passage. She says he'll only face Black Moon when he's worthy. He has 5 months before Crimson Fortress, and if he can wound her even once in that time, she'll give him her trait. She tells him to try hitting her with his sword technique, but he hesitates and asks if she knows what happened to Revan. She suddenly closes the distance, presses her sword near his eye, and asks if she looks as weak as Revan. Vincent attacks, but she dodges with ease. She knows how dangerous his sword skill is and won't give him a clean opening. She notices how sharp his eyes are, like he could kill at any second, not the eyes of a normal 14-year-old. Then she mentions he became friends with Father Dolan, so if something happens they can rely on his help. A week later the training continues, but Vincent is still far too weak to match her speed and gets dropped in one hit. Even so, she says he's improved a lot in just a week. She also notices his sword is about to break again. She's already lost count of how many swords he's gone through this week and starts thinking about complaining to the blacksmith. When she reaches the forge, she says he's already lost the title of master. Now even his weapon quality is falling. She says it'll be a problem if he keeps filling Idinka's armory with junk. The dwarf glares at her, offended. He asks why she came in so irritated this late at night. In response, she shows him the pile of swords broken during training. After checking the damage, he asks if she fought some beast with razor teeth, a martial artist from Nova Estrelis, or even a greatsword user. She says it was just training with Vincent, who carries the Crimson Lotus. That shocks the dwarf, and he blurts out why such a weak-looking kid has the Crimson Lotus. In the middle of the night, Ralsa and the dwarf call for Vincent. She says he was too impatient to wait and wanted to see the lotus, and Vincent replies he can inspect it whenever he wants, since he's the one who made it. Julian explains this is the blacksmith Hansen. He's not only famous but also an old friend of Vincent's father, and once held the title of master. Vincent asks why he lost that title, and Julian explains he quit making big swords to focus on useful, high-quality inventions. Other smiths mocked him for chasing money, so he lost his honor. But Vincent thinks he's amazing because of him. Many people could defend themselves. He put others before his own pride, and that deserves respect. Vincent then properly introduces himself to the so-called Master Hansen. The dwarf looks annoyed for a moment, then laughs, and says the boy sure knows how to get a reaction. Vincent says he isn't mocking him, he truly believes Hansen chose the right path. He remembers the patriarch once saying the same thing. Even if people laugh at him, he still believes his decision was right. Hearing that, the dwarf says the family blood really does run in him. He thought Vincent was the weakest of the children, but maybe those rumors were wrong. Then he asks to inspect the Crimson Lotus. Looking over the blade, he asks if Vincent really beat the Crimson Demon and trained against Sarvana's shadow with it. When he learns that's true, he's shaken. The sword is still perfectly intact, as if Vincent fought with his own power instead of relying on the blade. He asks to see his swordsmanship, but Vincent hesitates. The dwarf snaps and asks if he's about to make up some excuse like being tired. Julian says Vincent already used up his daily charges, but Vincent refuses to waste the chance to learn from a master. Just then, Ciri appears behind the dwarf and scolds him for shouting so late at night. Vincent asks if they know each other, and it turns out the dwarf used to help poor children, with Ciri being one of them. They're basically like father and daughter. Vincent says he'll visit the forge tomorrow and bring Ciri with him, which sends the dwarf back to the forge. Vincent realizes Ciri's kindness came from having a good father figure. The next day, he shows the dwarf a little of his swordsmanship. After watching closely, Hansen says the style is strange and reminds him of the techniques of the Hero King and the Great Demon from legend. Now he understands why the Crimson Lotus was given to Vincent. The dwarf admits Vincent has caught his interest enough to make him want to forge a sword for him, but he needs one rare material first. The blade he wants to make requires something money can't buy, a mastodon horn. That shocks Vincent, and he and Julian exchange looks at the strange coincidence. Vincent hands over the dragon bone and the dwarf is stunned they actually have a mastodon horn. Then Vincent gives him the Crimson Lotus too and asks him to forge the bone into it, since that sword marks the beginning of his father's path. 3 weeks later, when they return to get the sword, they're alarmed to find the forge on fire. Seeing how shaken Ciri is, Vincent realizes this has never happened before, so he says they need to save Master Hansen first. Since his attack can cut through almost anything, he slices open the door and rushes inside. Once inside, he finds the dwarf unconscious on the floor. Julian quickly realizes the source of the blaze. It's the Crimson Lotus overflowing with mana. The bone must have been stronger than expected, but they ignore the sword for now because getting out comes first. As they move toward the exit, burning wood collapses and blocks the way. Julian asks if Vincent has any defensive technique, because even a dragon skeleton can't hold back those flames forever. If he can withstand them long enough, the fire should burn out. Vincent uses a skill from his past life, The gentle blade that breaks steel is a mana technique driven by will. He carefully cuts into the flow of fire, keeping the flames from reaching them. Julian is stunned, wondering who Vincent really is and how he can be this skilled. After hours, the flames finally die out. When the dwarf wakes up, he asks how Vincent was using Sanian swordsmanship. That makes Vincent glad. If Hansen recognized it, then maybe he isn't as rusty as he thought. More importantly, the sword is finished. Hansen says he'd never forged with dragon skeleton before, so he didn't know the flames would overflow that badly. The moment Vincent takes the sword, it starts to glow, like the blade is resonating with him. A small steel master symbol appears on it. Julian finds that odd. If Patriarch Arslan left all this behind, he should have known what dragon skeleton would do. He probably planned this, using the first bone as practice, before making the next weapon. So Vincent asks Hansen to forge him another sword, because if this one is already this good, the next should be even better. The dwarf says that's impossible. There's no dragon skeleton left. But the very next day, Sarvana's shadow appears with the second half of the skeleton. Hansen says he doesn't know how long it'll take, but he'll forge a perfect sword from it. On the way home, Raelsa admits she almost gave up on guiding him partway through, but she's happy with how much he's grown. Vincent apologizes, saying he wanted to share the bone with her, but ended up taking it back. He asks how he can repay her, but she says she's already being rewarded. The child born 14 years ago has turned into an outstanding martial artist. Vincent says she's about to like her reward even more. Ever since he beat the Crimson Demon, he's been thinking of a way to defeat her, even though she's a 7-star martial artist. And today he plans not just to fight her but to win and claim her characteristic. The duel between Vincent and Raelsa begins, and he struggles to endure her ice attacks while she mocks him, saying he's nowhere close to beating her. She attacks from above, but he barely blocks with his sword. The clash creates a huge blast, yet both swords stay intact. Raelsa is impressed. She used power equal to 4 stars in that strike, and normally that much mana would have shattered the blade. But she has no time to think about it because a sword line is suddenly aiming for her neck. Vincent follows with his sword technique, but Raelsa dodges at once. She realizes his power is completely different now and wonders what the Crimson Lotus has become. Thanks to the Dwarf King's trait, the sword no longer breaks, it absorbs the shock of attacks. Its new power is simple. The Crimson Lotus can absorb its wielder's traits. Once Raelsa sees how much stronger that makes him, she decides to stop holding back. She vanishes with incredible speed and appears behind Vincent. By circling him over and over, she scrambles his vision and creates a false image, but Vincent doesn't fall for it. Instead of chasing her movement, he reads the mana she uses to move. He deliberately misses, so Raelsa appears behind him, thinking the fight is over. That was his trap. He catches her sword with his bare hand and, seeing the sword path that runs through her neck, uses double sword strike to hit her. The attack erupts in a huge explosion. Even after using both of his daily strikes, he still hasn't landed a clean hit on Raelsa, and she's impressed by how badly he wants to take her sword. Still, he gives it back because he doesn't want a cheap win over someone who's disarmed. Raelsa calls that arrogant. In a real battle against martial artists or monsters, no one would be kind to him. As she prepares her mark, she warns him his enemies won't care about fairness. Then she fully activates it, releasing a freezing aura so strong even Julian is impressed. Telling Vincent to be careful with his own attack, she charges in. But for some reason, her mark suddenly shuts off. That opening lets Vincent grab her and flick her forehead. Even with 4 months still left before the Crimson Fortress, he's already managed to beat her. Raelsa asks how, and Vincent explains he knew even double sword strike wouldn't hit her, so he cut the mana around her and stopped her bind. Since he kept his promise, Raelsa now agrees to teach him about his blessing, the mana flow of the Galactic Wanderers. After just 2 days of meditation, Vincent completes the blessing flow. As he guides mana along the path, it starts to change, taking the form of a cloud. Julian worries about how huge the blast will be if Vincent fails, but that fear fades when he sees the goddess approach him. At the Crimson Fortress, Dean Vargan asks why Director Herka isn't working. She says she's a martial artist, not someone meant to sit around pushing a pen, but Vargan tells her to stop acting childish and do her job. While checking the list of students coming to the fortress, she spots Vincent's name and asks if he's from the Min family. When Vargan confirms it, she says another troublesome person is on the way. Vargan, meanwhile, wonders if the rumors about Vincent being a loser are actually true. If that happens, the Crimson Fortress could lose face, so he plans to stop the problem early and keep Vincent from enrolling. Back in the young master's room, Julian sees the same thing the Dwarf King saw. The Ice Goddess is about to bless the protagonist, and Raelsa says the Galactic Wanderer's blessing has only one step, the Frozen Walk. That night, Vincent studies the Crimson Fortress, and Julian says it's closer to a fortress than a school. It stands in the middle of the Samian border mountains. Long ago, when the Archdemon's followers invaded Samian, Arslan and the other heroes defended it, and later took charge of the academy. Vincent is sure Arslan's will is there, and if they're lucky they may even find another dragon skeleton. Julian adds that there really is a legend about hidden treasure. It's called the Celestial Fruit, a medicine stronger than any other, said to even revive the dead. Julian once doubted it, but with everything happening now, a fruit like that doesn't seem impossible. If they find it, they can heal his rotten celestial skeleton and save him from death, but they have only 9 years left. Vincent says with how fast he's growing and training, They may have even less time. Julian still gets fired up, saying they'll uncover the celestial fruit's secret and claim it. Another issue is that inside the fortress, Vincent can't rely on his family's money. Julian says that's meant to stop rich families from crushing everyone else with wealth. He tells Vincent not to stress, since he put money into the 6th magic tower. The Edinka and Samian families are known for swordsmanship, while the 6th magic tower is famous for top mage training. They have a sponsor system: invest in a mage and if they succeed you earn money back. The mage Julian back just became a co-owner of the tower. The only catch is that if she dies, his investment is gone. Then a hooded man approaches her. He kills her inside the magic tower. When Julian reads that in the newspaper, the only thing he worries about is his money. Vincent tells him to show some respect for the dead, but Julian is too focused on the loss. Vincent keeps reading and learns that in her will, she left everything to her younger brother Vargan Pagoda. Back at the fortress, Vargan appears to be grieving for his sister. He was never close to her talent, and was seen as the family's shame, so even he doesn't know what to feel about her death. Vincent spends the next 4 months gathering all the information he can before entering the fortress. Then the day comes, and he reaches the mountain of the Crimson Fortress. Raelsa tells him that for security, he has to continue on foot. The fortress director will appear soon to lead him inside. Vincent thanks her for everything and says his mother would feel the same. That leaves Raelsa deeply moved. Inside the fortress, Vargan tells the director that young Vincent will arrive soon, but she hates work and says formalities aren't her thing. Just then, a voice from the magic stone warns of a recent monster attack nearby. The director instantly takes the chance and says she has to go protect the people of the fortress. The magic stone points out they're only weak monsters and reinforcements would be enough. She acts like she didn't hear that and heads off anyway, telling the dean to handle the direct descendant. Out of options, he heads to the watchtower and greets the soldiers. Using binoculars, he spots Vincent talking with Grand Steward Raelsa. Vargan had already judged him as useless from the rumors, so he's shocked that someone so weak would need a guard that strong. The dean decides to carry out the exam himself. As he casts a spell, he thinks he must get rid of Vincent before he can enroll. While climbing the mountain, Vincent, Julian, and the 2 servants admire the Crimson Fortress. Then a bright light flashes from it, and soon after the 4 hear a roar from the forest. The servants shake in fear, but Vincent gets ready, knowing the test has already started. As he draws the Crimson Lotus, he decides this is the perfect time to test the results of the last 4 months, and accepts the fortress's greeting with a smile. His first opponent is the strongest monster in the snowy mountains, the white tiger with blue eyes. Vincent orders the 2 servants to run straight to the fortress, while he dashes the other way to draw the tiger's attention. If this really is a white tiger with blue eyes, it will chase the fastest target. The plan works, but while it's chasing him, Vincent notices something off. It doesn't seem alive. Still, strange or not, he's going to defeat it. Just as he gets ready to strike with the sword's path, another white tiger appears. Using body strengthening, he dodges both attacks, leaps up and lands on a tree. Then Julian warns him and points to several more white tigers on the hill. Vincent realizes something is wrong. White tigers don't move in packs. They're top predators, so they don't need to. And even though they're meat eaters, he can't smell blood from them. Julian suggests they may be illusions made with magic. From the tower, Vargan is impressed that Vincent figured that out so quickly. Still, these illusions are made with high-level magic, so they're basically as dangerous as real tigers. He waits to see what the useless 7th son will do. Vincent considers running until the caster runs out of mana, but Julian says the mage is likely using a copying element instead of controlling many spells at once. He casts one spell and copies it, which makes it easier and uses less mana. That element has one big weakness. If Vincent beats the original, the copies vanish. Julian asks how he'll spot it. Vincent says that if a person is controlling this, they'll protect the real one with the fakes. The tiger at the top of the hill that's staying still must be the original. Using the Galactic Wanderer's blessing, he rushes to the top of the hill, leaving Vargan stunned because he just used Raelsa's trait. But the mage won't just stand there and hand him the win. He sends 2 tigers to attack Vincent. The Crimson Lotus, enhanced with a dragon skeleton, absorbs the nature of his mana. Vincent activates the Galactic Wanderer's trait through it, and slips right through the 2 tigers, striking the original. The magic circle explodes, and every tiger slowly fades away. Vargan is impressed by Vincent's understanding of magic, while Vincent wonders if the fortress examiners are satisfied now. Defeated, Vargan orders the gates open and welcomes the young master. Vincent asks Julian if it's normal for a swordsman's fortress to have a mage this skilled, since that makes no sense unless the attacker was the dead mage's younger brother. When the gates open, Vargan and his soldiers are waiting to receive Vincent. Julian says that even without family money inside the fortress, talented cadets can earn support through sponsorship. Now they need to score points with the right person and win all that investment money back. As their carriage moves through the fortress, Vincent comments on how many people live there. Vargan explains that besides instructors, disciples, soldiers, and children, many families live here too. Vincent will share a dorm, and once he moves in, he'll be just another cadet. Any old status is gone. Vincent understands he'll only be treated like a young master during this ride. Siri sees kids in uniform and says he'll look good wearing one too. The protagonist asks what his current rank will be, and Vargan explains that every cadet starts at rank 9. Exams happen twice a year, ranks go from 9 to 1, and anyone who passes after rank 1 becomes an innovative martial artist. Vincent has only 4.5 years to graduate, and by then he must find the celestial fruit or die. Varjin asks how someone from a martial family knew about the copying element. Julian says he was terrible at swordsmanship, so he studied as much magic as he could. But Vincent says knowledge is power, and refusing to learn something useful, just because of family tradition, is foolish. The dean starts wondering how a child this remarkable ever got labeled useless. Then Vincent asks about the celestial fruit, and the dean is a little disappointed, calling him childish for believing in a legend like that. That answer makes Julian realize even high-ranking people treat it as a myth, which makes finding information on the fruit even harder. Soon they reach the rank 9 dormitory. Varjin explains that the servants stay on the first floor, while the protagonist will use the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. He hands over a sun emblem to show he's a rank 9 cadet, and says the Crimson Fortress greeting is, "Humble respects, glory is absolute." The protagonist heads to his room, but when he enters he finds the other cadets blocking it. He quietly asks Julian if he did something wrong, and Julian has no answer. Then they hear a voice from the doorway. Julian immediately knows it belongs to his older brother, Malone Denka. Even Vincent feels sick just looking at him. Julian explains this is the brother who bullied him the most, even forcing him to eat trash. Hearing that, Vincent nearly throws up because he saw it in Julian's memories. Malone is the kind of person who uses strength to crush the weak, and he clearly hasn't changed, so Vincent asks if he can teach him a lesson. With a friendly greeting, the protagonist says he's glad to see him, but also disappointed that after being away from home so long, he's still only rank 9. Malone snaps, calls over Saizen, and slaps him across the face, saying newcomers need proper training so they don't act out. He warns that if it happens again, Saizen will be beaten. Right then, the protagonist realizes Malona is the worst kind of person, just like Kajin, his greatest enemy from his past life. He can't hold back anymore and drives a punch into Malona's face, leaving all the cadets stunned. Malona snarls that his little brother must have gone crazy, and swings back at him. Vinci slips past the hit with ease, remembering one thing: people like this don't respect martial arts. He grabs Malona by the collar and slams him hard into the ground. Then he turns to the other cadets and tells them a martial artist should fear only one thing: respect. Malona rises, burning with hate, and draws his sword, but Vinci avoids the strike without trouble. Julian says this could be the perfect chance for them. Near the Crimson Fortress, the dean has just finished hunting the monsters. The village chief thanks her, says everyone can finally sleep peacefully, and invites her out for a drink. Just as she considers it, Varjin shows up behind her and says he could use a drink too because his superior has been driving him crazy. At the tavern, Varjin explains how Vinci passed the entrance exam. The dean barely understands the magic side of it since she isn't a mage, but that only makes it more impressive. Vinci beats something even a 7-star martial artist had never heard of. Still, she says he looked timid compared to the other direct descendant who destroyed an entire mountain. Then jokes with Varjin, saying she can't wait to meet someone as cowardly as him. Then a magic crystal calls the dean back to the fortress. When he asks what happened, the crystal reports that Malone and Vincian, both rank 9, have requested a mediator for their duel. When he arrives, the official apologizes, saying he had no choice because both boys are direct descendants and Cadet Vincian requested it. The dean tells him it's fine, and says anything involving Vincian must be reported to him from now on. Using his authority, he allows the duel. When the protagonist draws the Crimson Lotus, Malone is visibly shaken. Still, he claims it's only a copy, and even wagers his right arm on it. That pleases the MC, who tells him not to forget those words. Malona ignores that and says he'll force him to surrender using his blessing, the Daughter of Fear. Its pressure spreads through the room and makes everyone around them tremble. Julian explains that this trait fills the enemy with fear, but he can't understand why the protagonist is completely fine. Vincian says it's his pride as a swordsman. The words he spoke earlier that a martial artist should only fear respect can even cancel a trait. Maloney can't understand why it isn't working, and tries to crush him with his sword. The blow is so powerful it leaves a crater, but when the dust clears, Vincian is gone. He appears behind his brother and kicks him away. Before Malona can recover, the MC uses Swift Blade with Frozen Walk and body reinforcement, striking so hard that Malona crashes to the ground. The dean knows Malona's trash, but he also knows why he stayed cadet representative this long, and now Vincian is threatening that spot. Just then Selbura arrives to watch and sees Malona already down. She says it still isn't over. His coercion is only a side trait. His real blessing is something else. Julian is happy to watch the protagonist crush his brother, but it is strange the dean hasn't stopped the match after Malone lost his sword. Yellow lightning starts pouring from Malone's body, and Selbura reveals his true blessing as the Brain Giant, the god of electricity. A burst of lightning catches the protagonist's right arm and chars it completely. Julian is stunned because the only trait he ever saw his brother use was Daughter of Fear. He says there's no way he wouldn't know, since he was bullied over it. Malone answers that of course his brother didn't know, even if he was born with it. He only learned to control it after joining the fortress. The protagonist asks how many years he hid it, but that was never really the point. Malona was just being cruel. Since coercion alone was enough to beat kids his age, he never bothered to train. Those words hit the protagonist hard. He was born with no talent at all, so seeing someone waste talent like this is unbearable. Malone attacks again with lightning, but Vincian dodges and says he'll take his right arm. He has already used one of his 2 strikes on the illusion monster, so he plans to finish this with the Dwarf King's absolute sword strike. He keeps slipping past the lightning while Malone's blows grow so wild they start tearing apart the whole room. Even the Dean sees that Malone is drunk on his own mana and losing control. Siri, who has been watching closely, is nearly crushed by falling rubble, but the Dean saves her with magic. Bargain checks if she's hurt, orders Braun to evacuate the cadets, and teleports her somewhere safe. Then he notices her body is filled with mana. The protagonist keeps dodging. The trait is strong, but it leaves plenty of openings, and if he closes in with Frozen Walk, he can finish it fast. But then his body gives out, and Vincent drops to the floor. He was wrong to think he could handle Frozen Walk like Ralsa. His body is too exhausted now, and he has only 1 move left. The Dean realizes his own mistake too. They may be kids, but they're still direct descendants. To keep the fight from getting worse, he throws up a barrier around them. Now the protagonist has even less room to avoid the attacks. But Julian says they can cut something other than Malone with the absolute sword strike. After dodging again, the protagonist decides to trust that plan and jumps toward the air. Malone takes the chance and fires a huge blast of energy, but that was exactly what Julian wanted. Vincent cuts through the barrier, freeing the attack so it slams into the ceiling. As the roof comes down, Malone can't escape and gets buried under the rubble. The protagonist lands over him and says a martial artist's vow weighs more than anything else. Then, with the sword his father gave him, he rips off his older brother's arm. Vargan is shocked that Vincent destroyed his barrier. It was far beyond what any normal martial artist should be able to break, yet 1 strike shattered it. Malone screams from the pain of losing his arm, and the Dean finally ends the duel. Right then, Wilson arrives with a 5th-class priestess. Chevin asks who carries the mark of a 2nd-class priest and why the protagonist has something so valuable. Still, anyone holding that symbol is treated as if the priest himself were present, so a 5th-class priestess has no place questioning him. Chevin heals the burns on his arm. Seeing that, Malone screams for his own arm to be healed too, but Arvin asks if he's really sure. He wagered his right hand in an official duel, so letting the same person who took it restore it would ruin whatever honor he had left. Malone gives up that honor and begs to have it healed. Julian acts like he didn't hear him and tells him to say it louder so everyone can hear. Malone shouts that he has no honor left and begs them to fix his arm. Satisfied with the humiliation, Julian allows the priestess to heal Malone's arm. Even after restoring it, she tells him to rest and avoid hard training. The cadets who watch the duel are stunned that Malone lost so easily. One asks if they could ever become like Vincent. He tells them to overcome their fear first, then they'll reach far more of their potential. Malone is still boiling with hate and tries to catch the protagonist off guard. He charges a stone and gets ready to throw it at his head, but the Dean stops him. He says the only reason he's overlooking Malone's behavior is because in a month, that hand must be healthy enough to hold a sword. A week later, in Dean Vargin's office, the protagonist learns from Julian how to properly offer condolences at a time like this. Vargin says he's 4 months late, and the whole thing feels awkward. Once Vincent leaves the academy, he'll go back to being a direct descendant, while Vargin is only a dean and former mercenary, which makes their relationship strange. The dean also notes that the protagonist knew his name from the start, and asks why he approached him on purpose. Vincent admits he first invested in his sister and planned to ask him to repay that debt, but after learning his story and seeing himself in it, he simply wanted to talk. Vargin ran from his family and the Samian Magic Tower, survived as a mercenary, and now works on Denka's front line. Unlike young Master Vincent, he says he feels no attachment to his sister or family. The MC asks why he still kept the pagoda name if he hated them that much. Vargin snaps that a brat with no stars doesn't know what he's talking about. If the Samian and Denka families ever went to war, he says the first thing he'd do is destroy the Magic Tower. The MC believes him because in his past life he was the same. But in the end, what he really wanted wasn't revenge, it was love and acceptance. The real reason the dean never let go of the name is simple. He still cares about his family. His sister was brilliant and gifted. He admired her deeply, and that admiration helped him endure the bullying. But her brilliance also made his own weakness hurt even more, because he couldn't do even half of what Varnelli could. Unable to handle that pressure, he ran away. Vargin feels ashamed. He thought he understood Vincent, but it was the other way around. Those condolences truly reached him, and even though his sister is gone, he can finally be honest with himself. So the dean decides to sponsor him, which means Vincent no longer has to worry about fortress expenses. Julian is genuinely happy. Riven, Relelsa, Master Hansen, and now Dean Vargin, they all fell for the protagonist's sincerity. He says all he did was speak honestly. Then he notices Sizen and Selbura walking over. Since they haven't properly met before, Selbura introduces herself as the second representative of the Rank 9 cadets. When they greet each other, the MC feels the same strange sensation he once felt from his mother. Her trait, discernment, lets her read an opponent's strength and potential. But when she checks Vincent, she sees no image at all. His crimson aura blocks any red on his hidden potential, so he quickly pulls his hand back and says he didn't like her using that trait as a greeting. She's shocked since not even the instructors can pick up what they're doing, while Vincent clearly can. She explains that cadets aren't allowed to walk alone at night. They could freeze, get lost, or run into the evil spirit of Davin. The moment he hears that old name, Vincent asks what she means. That leaves her a little embarrassed. Cizan says that after the demon arch was defeated, parts of his spirit spread across the world. People say those spirits grant power in return for a martial artist's life. Sabira adds that there are reports of contractors now and then, though she doesn't really believe the story. At the dorm, the archdemon spirit speaks to Malone and offers him a contract. He's frightened at first, realizing the legend about Davin's spirit might be real, but decides that doesn't matter if it helps him reach his goal. When Vincent gets back to the room, everyone is asleep except Malone, who isn't in bed. Meanwhile, Cizan is on night patrol. When he hears something in the dark, the second he calls out, his arm is ripped off. Then, out of swirling black magic, Malone steps forward and asks where Vincent is. Even with one arm gone, Cizan draws his sword and asks if he made a contract with an evil spirit. Malone mocks him for trying to act like his brother, grabs him by the neck and slams him down. Just before he can finish him, Instructor Brondich rushes in and attacks Malone. He tells Malone to surrender, then realizes his strike did nothing. Bronda immediately orders Cizan to sound the emergency trumpet. Back in the room, Vincent is still awake, waiting for his brother. He hears the blast and asks what's going on. The others say it's the emergency trumpet, so something may have happened to Cizan. Everyone runs outside and meets the girls from the other dorm. Vincent asks what's happening, but they don't know either. Then he smells blood and tells Sabira to call Deputy Commander Pagoda right away. He tells everyone to follow him quietly. As they get closer, the trumpet suddenly stops. Before the cadets panic, Vincent asks if they have any defense they can use. The first clash is over and no message came saying the enemy was beaten, so the adults are probably dead. Sabira says there is one defense, a Denka, but it needs at least one 5-star fighter at the center, or the formula breaks. Instructor Brondi was that 5-star, but when they arrive, they find him dead. At once, dark magic lashes out at Vincent. He blocks it, but still can't tell who's hiding in that magic. Then his brother appears and says all the traitors gathered in one place to die. Sabira recognizes the dark energy from the legend. It's a sign of a warrior possessed by Davin's spirit. Vincent is shaken. As Davin himself, he feels like he's about to face his own darkness. Malone declares he'll show them the king's true power, then activates his mark, terrifying all the cadets. Only Vincent stays calm, pushing back the mark's pressure and steadying the others. With Bronde dead, he doubts he can beat Malone alone. Still, he has help now, and the real goal is to stall until the Dean arrives. With no better choice, Vincent tells Sabira to activate the shield. She hesitates because they need a 5-star user, but he says he'll stand at the center and hold it. She warns the seal may collapse the moment it forms, but Vincent reminds her she's the cadets' representative. She has to choose what saves everyone. Out of options, Sabira orders the cadets into the triangle defense, with Vincent at the center. Even Malone can't believe Vincent can bear the shield's weight. Vincent admits maybe he can't, but if the seal still blocks Malone after he sold himself to an evil spirit, that would be humiliating. Amused and provoked, Malone lets them finish the seal. Julian urges Vincent to use Frozen Walker and run, but if he leaves, everyone behind him dies. The formation activates. Vincent feels his mana bursting apart, but he forces himself to endure. Malone thinks he's already breaking and attacks, only to be thrown back by the barrier. Vincent asks if that's all he's got, but Malone keeps attacking and raising his power. His aura is so monstrous, the children feel like the archdemon himself is standing before them. Vincent calms them, reminding them that a martial artist should fear only respect. Seeing a 14-year-old bear the seal and still encourage everyone, Sabira refuses to just watch. She orders all the cadets to pour in mana on her signal. This surge blasts Malone backward, and Vincent tells him to give up. The martial artist will be here soon. Malone is almost ready to stop, but the evil spirit feeds his bloodlust and makes him stronger. Vincent instantly sees a huge attack coming, and a bolt of black lightning slams into the barrier. The impact shakes the ground and lifts stones into the air. One cadet gets hit and passes out, and the triangle seal slowly begins to break apart. Malone presses the opening and unleashes a massive lightning strike at everyone, but when the dust clears, the barrier stands again. Cizan, still alive, uses the last of his mana to restore it. He's finally overcome his fear and now faces Malone head-on. At that moment, the evil spirit seems to take Malone over completely. The seal is at its limit, and so is Cizan. In that desperate moment, Vincent suddenly sees a path for his sword to reach Malone. It catches him off guard, since he wasn't planning to attack yet. That path leads to Malone's right hand, the one already cut before. Vincent hesitates, but with the seal about to fail, he has no choice. He moves in and prepares the absolute sword strike. With a single step, he's already behind Malone, but the cut is too shallow to do real damage. Malone turns and prepares another attack. A huge bolt of black lightning strikes Vincent head-on, and everyone panics. He manages to block, but his left hand is hit and can no longer hold the sword right. Even hurt, he can't fall back, so he charges again, but Malone stops him easily. Then things get worse. Another black lightning bolt tears straight through his arm, ripping it apart. In his past life, that would have been the end, but not in this life. He still has his right arm. He raises the sword with it and strikes. Malone's arm is cut off, and the hit sets off a huge explosion. For a second, Vincent thinks he won, but Malone rises again, this time without the evil aura. That sword path had severed his link to the spirit. Even so, Malone's rage is still there, and he attacks again, though weaker now. Vincent knows he has to strike once more, but he's already pushed far past his body's limit and can barely move. Just when everything seems over, Malone is yanked into the air by ropes, and Varjan appears with a sealing spell. Malone slowly begins to freeze. The dean says no martial artist can escape this spell. Before he fully goes down, Malone tells Vincent it isn't over yet. Even the director is impressed by Vincent, but his injuries are so bad he can't even speak. He still refuses to collapse, using his sword to stay upright. The director tells him he can rest now, and his mind fades. He wakes in a white space filled with windows. He has no idea where he is. Then he hears Julian's voice, but when he turns, he sees his own body slowly disappearing. A few days later, the fortress director speaks frankly with the patriarch. She politely greets Lord Edenka and asks him to honor the absolute glory. He tells her to drop the formality and explain what happened. The red-haired director hesitates, knowing this won't be easy to say. 15 rank 9 cadets were injured, and 1 instructor died. Sism was the first to face Malone and barely survived. Hearing that, the patriarch says the dead should be honored, and the injured should have all their treatment paid for. The director feels guilty she didn't deal with that first, but the old man says evil spirit contracts are full of unknowns. He adds that her choice to stop it after careful planning wasn't wrong. The real issue is why Malone survived the contract at all. History says people who take those contracts gain huge power in exchange for their lives. Once that power runs out, they die. The director says the fortress mages examined him but still found no answer. Still, the cadets claim Malone was freed from the spirit after Vincent struck him. That alarms the patriarch, who realizes the strange swordsmanship Vincent used before can also cut a spirit contract. Since his foolish son stepped beyond a martial artist's limits and made that contract, he'll spend the rest of his life confined to the guest house. His imagery will be sealed, and the tendons in his remaining limbs will be cut, so he can never hold a sword again. If one son is being punished, the other should be rewarded. But the director reveals that after the fight, Vincent fell into a coma, and still hasn't awakened. Inside his mind, Vincent and Julian stand in that white space, and neither knows where they are. After looking around, Julian guesses they might be inside Malone's memories, which instantly alarms Vincent. Julian wonders if this is another effect of his swordsmanship, but Vincent says he's never entered the memories of someone he fought. As he tries to understand what's happening, a memory of Malone starts playing from one of the frames. In it, Malone asks the rector why he has to train that brainy giant when he's already the strongest in rank 9. Varjan answers that he's one of Edenka's respected sons, so he needs to stop relying on brute force and train seriously. It seems the rector had a reason for covering for him. Then Malone shows the flux to the brainy giant, leaving Vincent and Julian stunned. But suddenly, black mist starts filling the space. When Vincent looks for Julian, he realizes he's alone. 2 giant hands appear and grab him, and then a woman's voice asks why he won't die. When he looks up, the ex-handicap sees his mother from his past life. He realizes he's no longer in Malone's memories but his own. People he once cared about appear, like Master Nydia Falcon and Arsalan, then slowly fade as he tries to learn what happened after his death. Then a sword stabs through his chest, and since these are his memories, the enemy from his past life must be here too. He's back in the prison where he spent over 10 years. A man insists he did nothing wrong, that power can't hide the truth. Arsalan, in tears, says he'll clear his name no matter how long it takes. Soon after, an older Arsalan appears in front of him. The last time he saw Arsalan, he was still a child, so this grown-up version is new to him. Adult Arsalan says Arsalan is Julian, but the protagonist can't hear him well and asks him to say it again. Then Arsalan says that in 500 years they will meet again, no matter what. Vincent is left confused, but before he can ask anything, he wakes up in his room drenched in sweat. Vincent wonders what Julian did. The lesser god appears and asks if he's okay after suddenly vanishing, but the MC says he's fine and his body has healed too. He's still puzzled, wondering if adult Arsalan met him before he died. Siri and Wilson are shocked to see the young master finally awake. They get so overwhelmed that they throw themselves at him, hugging and crying. Wilson thought he might never wake up, while Siri is just relieved. The ex-handicapped, who never had this kind of affection before, doesn't know what to say, but thanks them for caring. The director walks in and asks if she's interrupting the moment, then greets the sleeping beauty who finally woke up. She doesn't care for formal talk and tells him to just call her sis. Vincent asks if she shouldn't be at the fortress, but she says a recent incident forced her to report straight to the patriarch. She adds that Varjan handles the fortress better anyway, and since she hates working, she's leaving it to him. After wrapping up a few things in the central area, she plans to head back with him. But first she has a small favor to ask. She wants him to rough up the young master of the Sanian family. The moment he hears roughing up and Sanian together, he gets excited. Then she explains it's only a friendly exchange event, which kills his mood since he was ready for a real beating. The director says it's a special event where martial families compete. Both patriarchs will attend, and this year it's being held at the Crimson Fortress. The skinny guy asks why she's bringing this up only now. She says Malone was supposed to take part, but now that he's a crippled prisoner, Vincent is the only choice left. That makes him connected to the stage the principal mentioned in those memories. Maybe it was this event. She goes on to say his opponent is the Sanian family's 6th son. The kid is so strong that Malone never even planned to win. Still, none of her second sister's sons has ever won this exchange, so she tells him not to stress too much. But our lefty, who loves crushing extras, says he'll beat him until he turns white, which makes the director like his attitude even more since she enjoys stomping extras too. Just then, the patriarch enters the room asking if he's ready to stand by those words. The protagonist says the sword assembly already showed how he takes responsibility and promises to come back with a win. The old man likes that answer and says he can't wait to see the Sanian family lose. Before leaving, he tells his son to rest because his internal injury is serious. Outside, the patriarch remembers he still hasn't rewarded Vincent and says when the director returns to the fortress, he'll go too. His reward will be having his name carved into the Crimson Monument. Hearing that, the redhead is stunned because only Edenka's heroes are honored there, and she asks if he's really serious. While resting in bed, the protagonist gets fired up about the friendly exchange event. He wants to help Edenka surpass the Sanian family, and this is the perfect chance to test where they stand. Vincent asks Julian if he knows anything about the sixth son, but since he never expected to face him, he never looked into him. Vincent asks what his chances are, and Julian says that with the surprise of his absolute sword, he might have a shot, but the odds are still bad. Vincent is at most 3 stars, while the other guy is likely 3 or higher. Realizing lying around won't help, the lefty decides to train a little. Julian warns that his internal injury is severe, and he shouldn't use mana. Vincent says he'll be fine as long as he avoids mana, then heads out to swing his sword, while the lesser god tells him not to wreck his body. As he starts training, he thinks about the coming fight. One thing is certain, beating up the Sanian family's descendants sounds great. Raven shows up while he's thinking, saying this reminds him of the first time they met. They sit down for tea and Raven says he found something Vincent asked about. Vincent gets excited, hoping it's about 500 years ago, but it's actually about his own family. Raven got curious how a family with no martial talent and only a modest estate compared to other branch families could still attend the sword assembly as spectators. When he says that, the protagonist remembers tossing Raven's father across the room despite Vincent's weak body. So the blonde explains that he kept pressing for an answer until his father finally gave in and showed him. The Baron gets up and goes to a bookshelf, then uses magic to unlock a hidden door. He says even the patriarch can't enter this place without his permission. Inside is a library full of Edenka's hidden knowledge, the real reason his family keeps such high standing. As Raven walks through it, one book grabs his attention. The lost record of the Heasley family still exists. That instantly excites the protagonist because it might contain proof of his innocence. But Raven tells him not to get ahead of himself. He'd need to become patriarch to access it. Vincent asks if it's really okay to share this, since it sounds like secret family business, but Raven says he owes him his life, so it's fine. Then the blonde remembers something important and pulls out a magic crystal. The dwarf asked him to pass along this message. The crystal glows, and a hologram of the dwarf appears. Right away, the old protagonist thinks it's a live call, but Raven says it's just a recording. Real communication crystals cost a fortune. The dwarf starts by saying the recorder is a gift, and that he has news about the dragon skeleton. First, forging a perfect dragon sword is impossible. The fire in the workshop started when he struck the Crimson Lotus, after transplanting the dragon skeleton. The reason is that the skeleton absorbs the user's mana trait, and because he carries the blessing of the god of unwavering flames, everything burst into fire. That's why making a weapon like this is almost impossible. Still, if they made a hammer from the dragon skeleton, it could work, since 2 bones hitting each other don't absorb mana. Even then, he says it doesn't solve much, because using the bone for a hammer means there'd be none left for the sword. Then the old man signs off and tells Vincent not to bother his daughter. Raven says that's all he had to deliver, and he needs to get back to the workshop for his sword. He asks if Vincent has a reply, and Vincent immediately says to tell the old man to forge the hammer from the dragon bone, because he'll just find another skeleton for the sword. Raven says he expected that, but it's still wild how he talks about impossible things like they're settled facts. Later, Julian says everything they've learned so far has been useless, but the protagonist says the opposite. Now every path is open, so they just need to grow stronger and make their own way. That starts with beating the 6th son of Sanian, though he has no clue how, so he asks the useless god if there's any way to win. Julian, unimpressed, says it's basically impossible. They barely beat Malone when he wasn't even possessed, so imagine someone stronger. Vincent says Malone's trait was a nightmare to deal with, so Julian says that if he could gain the blessing of the cerebral giant, he might be able to win. They don't need Malone for the mana flow anymore since they both saw it in the memories. Even so, Vincent doubts it would work, because you can't unlock a trait from just a memory, at least not from a human one. But our butterfly boy is a god, and a god's memories are nearly perfect. That gets Vincent fired up, because he's the kind of guy who never ignores a new cheat. He asks why they're standing around, and says they should go get the blessing right now. But that's exactly why Julian kept quiet. Vincent's body is already wrecked, and now he wants another power-up. Cerebral mana is the most destructive element, and the cerebral giant is the strongest of the cerebral gods, so trying it now would ruin his body. So until they get back to the fortress, he needs to recover as much mana as possible, and to do that, he can't push his body. 3 days later, they finally return to the Crimson Fortress. Vincent thinks it's weird they're using a carriage this time since Relelsa had said walking was safer. The director admits that was a lie. It was only to make his rite of passage easier. She also says they forgot to tell him he'll be part of the recording ceremony. Once inside the fortress, cadets gather before a huge stone carved with heroes' names. In front stand the rank 1 cadets, led by Hana Adenka. Behind them, cadets from every rank line up to watch. It seems the rank representatives are always direct Adenka descendants. Well, except Malone, who got folded pretty easily. The rest of the descendants are the real deal, and rank 1's Hana Adenka is on another level. Just looking at her is intimidating. While everyone waits to see who will engrave the name, the Adenka patriarch arrives. He immediately calls Vincent forward. Vincent jokes that he didn't know he was getting such an amazing gift, but Khan tells him this isn't a gift. He earned it. The old man takes the Crimson Lotus and announces he's carving Vincent Adenka's name into the stone. You'd think he'd carefully write it, but one swing nearly tears the place apart. Vincent is stunned. The patriarch used just a little mana and did what rank 9 cadets can barely endure. The other direct descendants are left staring, finally seeing the true power of the Adenka. When he's done, the letters are still burning. On the way back to the dorms, the cadets are still hyped over what they saw. Then Salbera shows up, asking where Vincent is. Even the freshmen don't know. They guess he's at the training grounds. Of course, our favorite hack chaser didn't waste any time. He's already trying to get the cerebral giant's blessing. First, he has to guide the path through 3 points, but Julian suddenly stops explaining because he's crying. The patriarch finally recognized him as a son. Vincent tells him that doesn't mean much yet. They're aiming for way more. Then he tells Julian to quit crying and explain the blessing properly. Step 1 is turning the circle into a perfect triangle, but the moment he does, a huge lightning bolt crashes down. Julian stares at the figure before him like he's the true god of lightning. He's thrilled they actually got another blessing. But when he looks at Vincent, he's on the ground shaking in pain. Lightning is bursting from his body and Julian panics. When he asks what's going on, Vincent screams that the lightning energy is overflowing. The cerebral god is amused that a human gained divinity on his own, saying freaks like him appear once in a while. Julian demands to know what he did, but Thor says he only gave the blessing they asked for. Julian argues Vincent shouldn't be like this since his body was restored earlier, then realizes the problem is the skeleton. The celestial skeleton absorbs mana like a sponge, so it took in far more power than it should have. The fix is simple, stop the mana flow. But if Vincent does that, Thor won't grant the blessing again. So the choice is clear, live or risk death to keep the blessing. Seeing Vincent's body breaking apart under the lightning, Julian says this makes no sense, but Thor snaps back that Vincent activated the blessing and summoned him himself. The real problem is this body taking in too much energy. He even tells Julian to remember his place as an incomplete god. Even so, Vincent has earned the lightning god's attention, and though he knows he could die, he still struggles to control the power and keep the blessing. Watching Vincent fight this hard for another hack, Julian realizes he can't just watch. So he uses his weak divine power to shield Vincent's heart. A butterfly barrier forms around it. Julian thinks all he has to do now is absorb the lightning, but his power isn't enough, and the energy starts spilling over. He forces himself to hold on because if the heart explodes, they're both finished. But his divine energy burns out fast, his hand starts disappearing, and the lesser god feels death closing in. That one mistake brings the worst outcome. Vincent's heart explodes. Julian watches his friend, his body dropping to the ground, and screams for help. Then somehow someone answers, asking who's there. Julian turns and recognizes her, the priestess who healed Malone. For the first time, he feels hope. She must have heard him through her sacred powers, but even she is shaken by Vincent's condition. Julian realizes Vincent is still alive and still fighting, so he can't give up either. She says she can hear the lesser god and asks if he was the one calling her. Julian introduces himself and begs her to heal Vincent now. But she can't get close because of the lightning, so Julian uses sacred power to control the lightning and opens a path for her to heal him. This time he's resolved. Even if he disappears, he'll hold on to the end. The healer gives off a green light that slowly brings life back to Vincent's empty eyes. Then the scene shifts to Vargan's office. He asks Siri if she's truly ready for training. He says that during Vincent's fight with Malone, he felt unbelievable mana inside her. Like Vincent, her mana goes beyond what modern magic understands. Vargan warns her the training won't be easy, and he's never been gentle. Even so, she still wants to learn. Her young master keeps growing stronger, and she wants to do more than patch him up when he returns hurt. Cedric wants the strength to stand beside him. That loyalty even makes Vargan smile. Still, she's a maid, so she needs her master's permission to begin training. Just then, lights start pouring in from every direction. Even Vargan doesn't know what's happening. They rush to the training room, and Siri is shocked to find Vincent there. The lightning rain is stopped, leaving only a crater behind. Vargan asks what happened, but the priestess tells him not to worry. Young Master Vincent is fine and has successfully controlled the cerebral giant's blessing. A little later, Siri asks Vincent for permission to study magic, which excites Julian, since a maid being taught by a wizard like Vargan is incredibly rare. Vincent asks if she'll really be okay, since the training will be brutal. But after seeing how serious she is, he agrees and asks the dean to take good care of her. After seeing Malone's growth, Vargan can quickly tell Vincent's new blessing comes from the cerebral giant. In the blink of an eye, he picked up another hack. Since Vincent is safe, Vargan says they can move on and plan the class. Vincent then realizes his maid has a teacher, but he doesn't. It bothers him that he still hasn't learned the swordsmanship. Aslan left his descendants. With the friendly exchange getting close, He needs to train as hard as he can. So he asks the dean who will train him in the fortress, but Varjan doesn't get the question. In this place, you're supposed to find your own teacher. It may be called an academy, but it's still a fortress. Usually, an elder sponsors a promising child and provides a teacher. Vincent asks Julian for help, but Julian says not to expect much. There's no elder backing him. If anything, it's worse. Nobody wants to sponsor the so-called useless Vincent. With no one left to ask, he sends a letter to the only person who might help. Wilson says the letter is for the patriarch, but he was too scared to face him alone, so he handed it to Ralsa instead. She brings it to the family head and gives him the letter. After he reads it, she asks what's inside. He says his son needs a teacher in the fortress. That worries her, since this should have been handled much earlier. The patriarch doesn't get why Vincent sent the letter, but Raelsa says it's simple. He's a son asking his father for help because there's no one else. The patriarch, not being clueless, asks if she wants to teach the boy, but Raelsa passes the job to someone else. She says it has to be a master of Adenka swordsmanship. Not knowing who to choose, the patriarch asks Raelsa for help, and she says she already knows the right person. It's someone the family head knows very well, the strongest swordsman among the Adenka. The patriarch says the man has to want it himself, but Raelsa promises she'll convince him no matter what. He's the only one who can properly train Vincent. That swordsman is Merlin. As he walks through the training grounds, he realizes it's been months since he first met Vincent, and wonders how the boy is doing. Then Raelsa suddenly appears and asks if he still takes these night walks. She says she has a new offer for him, a private tutor job at the fortress. The second he hears teacher, Merlin shuts it down. Raelsa presses on, and says she wants him to teach the useless young master Vincent Adenka. That gets his attention a little, but not enough to make him care about working as a teacher, so he refuses again. As her last move, Raelsa reveals that Vincent just gained the blessing of the lightning giant, the same blessing Merlin has. Now he's interested, and she offers a bet. Soon, the young master of the Adenka will duel the young master of the Sanyan. If Vincent wins, Merlin has to stop slacking off and train him. Meanwhile, Vincent keeps trying to control the lightning giant's power, but it's clearly not as easy as his brother made it sound. He nearly hurts himself over and over. Julian admits he really can't control it yet, especially after seeing the room completely wrecked. Vincent can feel the lightning inside his body, but he can't guide it, and Julian worries that at this rate they won't even reach the microcurrent stage. Vincent takes the chance to tease the lesser god, saying he had to cry his eyes out to get this new power-up. That makes Julian realize those desperate screams he heard earlier were from him. A few days earlier, they got a letter from Raelsa. She still hadn't found a teacher before the friendly exchange. One reason was simple: the man she wanted had no interest in working, and the other problem was the elders' influence. They don't want Vincent getting involved with the heirs they've already trained, and since the elders exist to limit the patriarch's power, even he can't force it. So Vincent says they'll have to win the friendly exchange on their own. Julian asks why he can't just use Sanyan swordsmanship like he did during the fire. Vincent says he can, but using it in public would cause huge problems because he'd have to explain it to his mother. Both of them hate that he can't use the sword style from his past life. Then Vincent remembers someone else's technique and wonders if he can use it now. At the Samian estate, a blonde boy quietly studies a white tiger with blue eyes. He knows it's the beast Adenka heirs must kill to enter the Crimson Fortress. Then a bald man walks in. He tells the boy his opponent is the useless seventh son, Vincent Adenka. But lately he's been getting strange results and climbing fast. He adds that the friendly exchange hurts the Sanyan more than it helps. Winning gains them nothing, but losing would be humiliating. While they talk, the white tiger breaks its chains and lunges at the boy, but he cuts it down in one move and says he'll never let the Adenka have anything. Back at the fortress, Selbura brings Vincent a gift and wonders if he'll like it. She heads over with the present, hoping he'll be happy. But when she reaches the training room, the mana from his sword nearly blasts her away. Once she can see clearly, she realizes Vincent has created a new sword form from Crimson Lotus. He quickly asks if she's alright, and Selbura shows him the gift she brought. Inside the crystal is footage of the Sanyan sixth son's training. She's so flustered that even touching Vincent's hand makes her blush, but she still warns him the end of the recording gets pretty cruel. When he activates it, holograms appear and this 500-year-old man is amazed by modern technology. But once the match begins, that curiosity disappears. Vincent reacts like he already knows every move the boy will make, even the feints and quick attacks. After a string of blows, one strike shatters the opponent's sword, forcing an instant surrender. But even after the boy gives up, this monster still doesn't stop. Vincent is furious because this kid is exactly like Cajun from his past life. Not just the face, even the techniques and habits are the same. It's exactly like the days when he was crippled. Then the story shifts to the mages meeting for the friendly exchange. The event is usually split into 3 parts: treasure hunt, monster subjugation, and one-on-one duels. The mages handle the treasure hunt and decide what kind of monster to create. The dean speaks first and says that based on the 2 fighters' level, the best choice is a level 8 reptile or demon, since those are hard enough for 3-star martial artists. But a mage from the magic tower suggests a level 8 giant fracture instead, which makes the dean furious. He asks if they're serious, because that's a monster meant for fighters above 4 stars. The skinny mage tells him to relax. He just wants the match to be entertaining. Vargan fires back that using a giant only helps the Samian young master, since they already train with one. The sorcerer says if he's that upset, he should just quit, making the dean ready to throw hands. Before it gets worse, Alberto steps in and suggests they settle it with a vote. That's when the dean realizes the whole thing is rigged, and they've been taking Samian money from the start. Later, the school director is forced to deal with the mess because the friendly exchange meeting will be held at the fortress. The redhead asks Vargan if he's handling the illusions for stage 1, but he doesn't even want to hear about it because every mage from outside the fortress has already been bought by the Samian. That's bad enough, but they've even influenced the supposedly neutral association mages. Still, if Vincent wins the other stages, it'll be enough. That catches the director off guard, and she asks if the dean really thinks the young master can win. When it was Abel, he said the odds were under 10%, but with Vincent, he has hope. The redhead teases him, saying he sounds like he's in love with Vincent, pressing herself toward him and joking that she'll get jealous. Vargan teleports away to escape her headlock, saying if there's time for jokes, he'd rather go back to work. Still, it seems the director really does have feelings for the dean. At last, the day of the friendly exchange arrives. When reporters see Vincent, they say Idenka must be in trouble, if Malone had to be replaced. Vincent ignores them. He only cares about why Kagan acts exactly like Kajin. Soon, Kagan arrives at the fortress. He walks up to Vincent and politely introduces himself, and Vincent answers in kind. As they shake hands, reporters go wild, saying they look evenly matched. Kagan keeps up his nice guy act, saying it's good to meet someone his own age, but the former cripple sees through it. There's plenty of malice behind that smile. The Samian says he hopes Vincent can show his strength, and the director and dean recognize it as a greeting that treats Idenka like the weaker side. Vincent answers calmly that he hopes Kagan can prove his talent too. The reporters love the tension and realize the exchange has already started. The fortress director officially opens the event and reveals the first round, the treasure hunt. Both participants will enter a magic space and retrieve a chest while dealing with monsters created by sorcery. They won't go alone. Each can bring 2 level 9 cadets. Since Edinka lost last time, they pick first. The director even hints that he should choose Silbera, but Vincent ignores that and picks the 2 weakest level 9 cadets instead, leaving everyone stunned. Suzanne and Harmon step into the arena looking nervous. The director asks if he's sure and warns him not to blame them after he loses, but that's exactly why Vincent chose them. He doesn't want Kagan using excuses. He also says they both carry Adienka blood, and beating the Samian with the blood of Patriarch Aslan matters. Even after hearing that, Selbera still looks a little disappointed. She'd clearly hoped he would pick her, but Vincent says he trusts her completely, and expects her to do her best in the exchange. Annoyed by that jab, Kagan chooses the representative and vice representative to join him. Vincent stays calm and says it was a smart choice, while Vargan wonders what he's planning. The mage who mocked the dean earlier can't understand why Vincent gave up the strongest cadets, but Vargan says he should be excited for the first stage. 3 mages begin casting, and 2 portal-like gates appear before the fighters. With everything set, the director starts the first stage of the friendly exchange. Vincent enters the cave with his team and keeps them close. In the other dungeon, Kagan tells his team to split up, which annoys Selbera because of how arrogant he sounds. Outside, the crowd gets fired up, and the director notes that Vincent is different. He doesn't treat his teammates like tools. Inside the cave, Harmon asks if Vincent really thinks they can help, and Vincent says yes. They faced their fears and became martial artists. Then a huge explosion throws them all back. When Sazan opens his eyes, he sees a giant monster, and fears the plan is ruined. For a second, they think Vincent was crushed by the giant, but he used ice steps to strike from above and nearly cuts off its arm. As the giant crashes down, Vincent tells the others to start the distraction plan. Sazan and Harmon pull drums from their bags and begin drawing the giant's attention. Fractures have bad eyesight and react to loud sounds, so they try to lure it toward the entrance while Vincent goes for the chest. The plan looks solid, but the director says they're doing it wrong. Even if it's called a treasure hunt, the real point is to show off martial skill. Vincent keeps moving and finally spots the chest, but before he can grab it, a second stronger giant slams into him. He avoids its blows, but now the plan is in danger. He needs to save at least 1 absolute sword strike, and fighting 2 giants makes that much harder. Outside, Vargan is puzzled by the second giant, but soon learns it was an intentional mistake by the tower mages. The dean gets furious and tries to go after the skinny mage, but the director stops him, saying too many people are watching and it could look bad. The tower mage says the dean is calmer than the rumors claimed, and the director instantly threatens to kill him. In the other dungeon, Selbura watches Kagan in total fear. The giant is getting overwhelmed by the young Samian's skill, and 1 strike to its eye brings it crashing down. Kagan says he expected more from a giant, but while he's showing off, the second one attacks from behind, making Selbura panic and try to warn him. But Kagan had already seen it. Using Samian swordsmanship, he slices the giant's hand clean off. Then, with a few quick steps, he runs up its arm and strikes straight at its eye. The 2 cadets are stunned. Even if they hate to admit it, he's incredibly strong. Even with more people, this slaughter wouldn't change. Meanwhile, Vincent sprints from the giants, and Julian starts panicking because nothing is going to plan. He asks if Vincent can use 1 sword slash to cut both giants at once, but that's not so simple. They're huge, and he can't clearly see the full path his blade needs to pull it off. He needs a point between them for the slash to pass through without cutting it. Saizen and Harmon finally reach the tunnel entrance and face the giant, but Vincent is nowhere in sight. Then he suddenly appears, carrying the chest. Vincent says the plan changed. Someone else is coming. When Saizen asks who, he sees both giants charging toward them. The two of them nearly lose it. As the giants rush in, Vincent yells for Julian to get ready. Even though Julian is scared he'll be the target, Vincent dodges the first giant's attack and searches for an opening. But just as he thought, he can't find a path that cuts through both. Still, even without seeing it, he feels the other half of his soul finding a sword path that leads to Julian. Vincent prepares his move and uses absolute sword with lightning, slicing through the first giant. The slash keeps going, cuts through the second one too, and flies straight at Julian. Outside, the director asks what kind of swordsmanship that was, and the dean says it's Vincent's special move, a slash that can cut through anything. But even that attack can't pierce a god, which annoys Julian since he wasn't sure if Vincent had almost killed him. Vincent says killing a god is impossible, but he's confused about how Julian heard his thoughts when he wasn't using telepathy. That strange reaction makes the others ask if someone is with him. Vincent lies, says no one's there, and tells them to stick to the plan. The reason he saved one last absolute sword strike was to cut one more thing. He stabs his sword into the portal and starts slicing through the whole dungeon. The tower mage is stunned and tells the others to check the spell, but the dean says there's no need. This is Vincent's cutting magic. Even Varjan didn't expect him to slice apart the entire dungeon. The association mage gets upset too, and says the young master should be disqualified for destroying an exam stage. The director answers that there's no rule against it, then asks why a neutral mage seems so personally offended. The two students bring the chest to the director and ask if they won, but the tower mage says stage 1 is about showing strength, not arriving first. If young Kagon keeps displaying his swordsmanship, the Saiyans will win. Then Vincent walks up and says Kagon's about to finish the stage 2, which leaves the mage confused. Vincent asks the dean if the dungeon used a copy element, and Varjan says yes, an element was used to make both dungeons identical. So now the real question is, after Vincent destroyed his copy, where did all that mana go? He compares it to water split into two streams. If one gets blocked, the other overflows. So the mana from one side would pour into the other. Kagon realizes the giant just got stronger, but its attack pattern is still simple, so he thinks he can still cut off its hand. But when he uses a Saiyan technique on the giant's fist, it's become so tough that it ignores the attack and nearly lands a hit on Kagon. The giant keeps throwing more blows, and Kagon realizes something must have happened outside. A dying monster doesn't suddenly get this strong. The giant winds up for one last attack, and this time Kagon is in real danger. But Selbira beats her drums and pulls the giant's attention away before it can strike. She runs, risking her life to lure it away, thinking she'd never do this if Vincent hadn't told her to give the tournament everything she had. While she distracts one giant, the other surviving titan attacks her too. Now both of them trap her with nowhere to run and attack together. But Kagon shows up, furious they ruined his perfect showing. He demands to know how they dared mess it up. Then the blonde uses full moon strike, and just like Vincent, he wipes out both giants with one attack. Even then, he isn't happy, because Selbira ruined his perfect plan. As he leaves the dungeon, Kagon tries to stay calm, sure he still cleared the stage well and probably outshined Vincent. But then Vincent appears and asks if he liked the little present. Kagon asks how Vincent finished before him, and what present he's talking about. Vincent says he has a gifted sorcerer friend, and with that help he made the mana from his dungeon overflow. That's when the young Samian realizes he was tricked from the start. Even so, the blonde stays calm and admits he lost, but from now on, he'll treat Vincent as a true friend. That's exactly what Vincent wanted, so he says they're best friends now. The first round goes to Cadet Vincent, and the next stage will be in 3 days. Back in the fortress, Selbira has relieved her crush won, but then Kagon walks up and thanks her for saving him. He offers her a handshake, but for some reason she feels like she shouldn't take it. Still, he keeps insisting, so she finally shakes his hand, and it's clear that wasn't an ordinary handshake. Since he's a complete jerk, that can't mean anything good. The story then moves to the forest, where Carrie keeps training her spirit magic. She's interrupted by Wilson, who brings her things. Siri asks what happened at the friendly exchange, and he says the young master won, thanks to having such a capable servant with him, which makes her feel better. Wilson asks if training alone in the forest is too hard, but Siri says it's better for now. She connects with spirits more easily there, and if she stays near the young master, she'll lose focus. Suddenly, she hears a voice calling for help. It doesn't sound human, it sounds like a spirit somewhere in the forest. Back at the fortress, Selbira and the others celebrate the victory, but Vincent doesn't get why they're only ahead by 1 point. Selbira says even 1 point against Edinka is huge in history. She says she was only helping the Samian side, so she shouldn't have much to say. But Vincent tells her she was key to his win because what she did at the end helped the judges give him the victory. Selbira is amazed he planned all that, and says she'll help Kagan even more in the next match. But when they shake hands, Vincent feels something terrible from her hand. Looking closer, he sees a Samian chain seal, and quickly asks if she had contact with Kagan. She says he thanked her after the match, and shook her hand. Julian is alarmed by Vincent's reaction and asks what that is. Vincent explains the seal slowly strangles a person's mana until they die. Julian asks if the curse can be broken, but first they need to know what kind of seal it is, since the form changes by type. Vincent tells Selbira to come for Praga training the next morning, making the poor girl think he's inviting her on a date. The next day, Vincent explains to Julian that if Kagan used a curse this openly, it's because he's sure no one will notice. This seal was probably erased from history long ago, which only makes Vincent want to rip that jerk's arm off even more. When Selbira arrives, she's dressed way too nicely because she thought it was a date. Vincent asks why she's dressed like that for training, and Julian wonders if he was infertile in his past life because he somehow can't tell she obviously likes him. But this armless 30-year-old from 500 years ago has no interest in a 14-year-old girl. They begin with meditation and he tells her to keep moving her mana and report anything strange. Selbira feels nothing unusual, but Vincent is worried because her mana flow is completely broken. It looks like swordsmanship has fallen a lot since the imagery era. Julian asks if he can remove the chain, but Vincent says it's far stronger than he expected and he can't break it alone. Now the plan changes. He has to find the offering used for the seal. Usually that's an animal heart or a forest spirit. The problem is, if he doesn't find it fast, Selbira will die in 3 days. Julian points out the tournament starts again in 3 days, but Vincent shuts that down. The priority is saving their companion. He says that if his old comrades had still been with him, they could have helped him escape the prison where he spent the rest of his life. Julian asks how he knows so much about the curse, and Vincent says he went through something similar in prison. That makes Julian feel sorry for him, and wonder what kind of crime got him locked up for 10 years. Right then, Selbira collapses in front of them. Vincent rushes her to the treatment room, but even the healer can't tell what's wrong. After checking the mark on her hand, Vincent realizes it's getting stronger and she doesn't have much time. He has to find the offering before it gets worse. Going back to when Ciri heard that cry for help, she follows the voice and runs into the young master. He asks what she's doing there, then explains the situation. Vincent says the offering is probably a small animal or a spirit, since those are easy to hide. Ciri says she can help, so they head toward the voice she heard earlier. She says it came from the ravine, but when they go down, they find nothing. It's not that Vincent doubts her, but Selbina needs help now, so he's ready to cut through everything until he finds the spirit. Before he can act, Ciri finds the spirit buried in the snow. She asks if there's any way to save it, but Vincent says sadly no. The only way to undo the seal is to kill the spirit fast, but Vincent can't bring himself to do that, so Ciri starts forming a spirit contract instead. Julian says that kind of contract is stronger than normal seals, and can actually break the curse. Ciri's thrilled to gain a new companion, but they don't get a moment to rest because a hidden attacker suddenly strikes. Vincent shields his maid and demands to know who attacked. A young master named Samian steps out and says Vincent ruined a traditional ceremony, so he'd better explain himself. Then Kagan keeps going on about that so-called ritual and orders Ciri to hand over the spirit. Vincent asks how he can call it tradition when it was meant to kill Selbura. Kagan only looks annoyed that Vincent figured it out. He says they belong to a higher class, people born to bear destiny itself above anyone who crosses the line like Selbura. After what happened in the dungeon, Kagan was furious his plan fell apart, so he came for revenge on whoever stopped him. Since Vincent is from the same rank, Kagan thinks he should understand. Instead, Vincent raises his sword to Kagan's throat and says people like him haven't changed in 500 years. This ritual is simply wrong. Kagan still doesn't flinch. He puts his own sword to Vincent's neck and says they'll see who's right when the exchange ends. Back at the infirmary, the curse finally fades from Selbura's arm. She wakes up confused about where she is just as Vincent arrives to check on her. Kagan tells him she's fine and only just woke up, but Vincent still checks to make sure the seal is really gone. The priestess asks if he shouldn't be getting ready for the second stage, but he says he's already prepared. Then we cut to the Idanka main castle, where one of the 4 great elders reads about Vincent's huge win, while Fidanel says he even overcame Senyan sabotage. Normally they'd be glad to see one of their own beat the rival family, but Elder Delbek says the 4 elders have ruled Idenka for 500 years, and the new patriarch is weakening their control. Fidanel says that's why they're backing the first and second sons as heirs. The first is driven by ambition, and the second cares only about martial arts. The elder asks what happens if Vincent beats the Senyan too. Not long ago, Cain carved Vincent's name into the Stone of Heroes and even gave him the Lotus Crimson Sword. To them, it's obvious the Patriarch plans to use Vincent against the elders, so they decide to ruin his momentum. Televin proposes sending a letter to the Senyan, saying their cheating in the first stage won't be ignored, but the second stage will be handled by Idenka. Then the second stage of the exchange begins. The director explains the subjugation battle has just one rule: destroy the monster in front of you as fast as possible. Kagan's opponent is a lizard man known for making bone spears, but its fierce attacks still can't touch him. Kagan leaps from above and cuts it clean in half. Bargain says it took 14 seconds, a new record that even beats Lady Diaz. Kagan is thrilled. Sure, Vincent can't top it. He even points his sword and says Vincent will be next. Julian asks how they're supposed to beat that time, but Vincent says not to worry, when it comes to speed they won't lose. The director asks if he's ready to start, then Vincent notices something odd about the lizard man. The view shifts to the elders' table, where we learn Televin tampered with the second stage. He kept the lizard man from mating for 2 months, something most fighters don't know matters. A monster denied that long becomes wildly stronger. When the cage opens, the crazed lizard man charges at Vincent. He knows dodging the first strike is safer, but then he won't beat Kagan's record. So without any fear, he opens his arms and lets the monster thrust its weapon into him, using that instant to stab through its hide and trigger the mark of the god of lightning, frying the lizard man on the spot. The dean asks what's going on because he can't see, and the director tells him to look at Vincent's time. Even she didn't expect him to go this far just to beat the Senaian. With only 6 seconds, Vincent wins again. Healers rush over at once to pull the huge stake from his shoulder. Watching this, Kagan can't understand why Vincent used such a brutal way to win, but Vincent's grin answers for him. That brings the second stage to a close. A woman who heard all this wonders if the boy is Sarvana's son and says she can't wait to meet him. Back at the Crimson Fortress, the healer complains she took this job to avoid working, and things were going great until Vincent showed up. Vincent thanks her for healing his chest, calling it a miracle, but the priestess says it isn't fully healed. She doesn't have that wooden plaque, so she can't treat him like its real owner could. Compared to that person, she only patches people up. So Vincent's heart still isn't fully recovered, and if he keeps overdoing it, he may lose the ability to use mana. Then the director arrives and invites him to dinner. Since the 2 patriarchs of the Idenka and Samian families have finally arrived, Vincent quickly gets dressed and follows his father to the meal. But when he meets the Samian patriarch, he's completely stunned. Her build is massive, and she introduces herself warmly, saying it's a pleasure to meet Vincent. She tells him to eat as much as he wants because these are special Samian dishes. She urges him to fill up on the family's best food. Vincent studies her closely. Like his father, she carries the weight of an entire family. Yet unlike what he expected, she speaks calmly with Khan and jokes that he's gotten stingy with age for hiding such talent. She teases him for keeping Vincent a secret this long. That alone is enough for Vincent to leap back and draw his sword, which impresses her, since he sensed the tiny bit of mana she let out. Vincent is shaken. To her it was nothing, but to him it felt like death brushing past. Even so, he gets excited at the thought of fighting her one day. His father asks why he's smiling, and Vincent says it's because she's strong, making Khan proud that he noticed. Then the patriarch looks at Kagan and does the same thing. But unlike Vincent, the blonde boy doesn't react. That makes Vincent and Julian realize the 2 patriarchs are quietly comparing whose son is better. After dinner, the 2 patriarchs step onto the balcony to talk in private. The Samian patriarch says someone is plotting something ugly and wonders who dared interfere with the exchange. Kan asks if it was the Samian elders, but she says they meddled in the first stage while the Idenka elders tampered with the second, and both sides share one target. Vincent Idenka. She asks if he really thinks Sarvana's son will win, and the patriarch says yes. He believes Idenka will fully surpass Samian. The blonde boy asks if that's because of the testament, and what Khan plans to do about the elders' interference. Khan says anyone who betrays his trust never stays alive, and nothing will stop Vincent from winning. When she asks why he's so sure, he says it's simple. His son promised he'd win, so he will. The next day, the final battle begins. On one side sits Velka Samian, and on the other is Khan Idenka, both watching the match. The 2 young fighters cross swords as the director announces the long-awaited duel. Julian warns Vincent not to forget his condition. With his damaged heart, he can only use one absolute sword strike, so he starts by testing Kagan with the electric giant's power. Kagan blocks it with one hand and says if that was only a test, then he'll have to burn Vincent to ashes to be satisfied. Crimson mana starts pouring from his body. It's the same hidden art that beat Vincent in the past. Mana fueled by life force, the Crimson Emperor's power. Kagan sees that Vincent recognizes it and asks if there's anything he doesn't know before rushing in. Vincent tries to block, but the strike still lands. He's stunned, then realizes this boy has already surpassed the Kagan he knew in the past. The fight goes on, and Vincent is pushed back by non-stop attacks. Kagan wants to cripple him again, but Vincent keeps fighting back. Their blows collide and explode across the arena. Vincent knows the Emperor's power weakens in long battles, but Kagan gives him no break and keeps attacking. Kagan starts to believe victory is his, but that confidence falls apart when Vincent uses Kajan's sword style. In his past life, Kajan was a madman who kept beating opponents even after he had already won. He would even mock them for losing to a one-armed man. Vincent had watched all of it, and when Emo appeared he asked why Kajan kept striking after victory was already certain. Emo was a friend Vincent met on the battlefield. They were all just tools used to test Kajan's strength, but Vincent was the only one who still tried to bring that monster down. He knew that wish was probably foolish, yet his friend always respected him for fighting with everything he had. Emo wasn't just an amazing swordsman, he was also a true friend who never mocked that dream. But he grew too strong too fast, and was thrown away by the Saiyan. All he left behind was his swordsmanship, and now Vincent will use that very style against the Saiyan. Even knowing this technique was made by someone his family destroyed, Kagan calls it useless and charges in fast with a Kagan lunges, but the Dragon Slayer blocks it with ease. Even so, Kagan keeps pushing, and Vincent is shocked. It feels like fighting Kagan from 500 years ago. That resemblance is exactly why Kagan is about to lose. He vanishes from sight, confusing everyone. But Vincent slips past the surprise attack without trouble. He can't lose to this kid because he already knows this style too well. He fought Kagan hundreds of times in his past life. Kagan starts getting annoyed and rushes in recklessly. Vincent is almost thankful he inherited Kagan's bad habits too. He enlarges his sword and brings it down with a savage blow that snaps Kagan's sword in half. Vincent thinks it's over. But then Kagan's mana suddenly rises again. He admits he's still a beginner, so this is risky, but he's ready to burn everything he has to form his soul blade. Kagan is impressed by him. Not even his own mother knew he had this gift. The blessing of the sword gives insane talent, and at its final stage, the user can turn a sword into an imagined element. Vincent points out that Kagan already burned through his strength with the Crimson Emperor, but the madman doesn't care and charges anyway. Kagan says he risked his life in the second stage, so now he'll go all out even if his body breaks. Vincent refuses to lose to someone like that, and he's ready to risk himself too. Both of them are terrifyingly strong, but Vincent's technique starts to give out and shatters, making Kagan think victory is his. But Vincent doesn't depend only on sword skills. He slams a punch right into Kagan's face. Now both Vincent and Kagan are at their limit and put everything into one last clash. Vincent's absolute sword strike, backed by the electric giant, crashes into the Crimson Aura, but that huge attack is only a fake. His real strike comes from above. He cuts off Kagan's arm and wins the third round of the friendly exchange. The crowd instantly erupts, chanting his name. Seeing that, the former cripple thinks back to his past life. After 500 years, he finally beat the Sanyan. The elders don't look happy about it, and neither does Merlin, who knows it's time for him to step in. Still, one young man is thrilled by the result. He was clearly pleased with Vincent's win. He asks his subordinate if he could beat Vincent one-on-one. The man confidently says yes. He's from a great family line. That only makes the young man more eager to face Vincent. He says he'll enter the Crimson Fortress. After the fight, Vincent gets dragged back into his memories. This time, demonic soldiers swarm him. Vincent cuts them down, but the feeling is just like when he fought Malone. Then Kagan appears with pitch-black eyes and comes at him, saying he finally found him. Before Kagan can land a hit, one slash cuts him in half. Aslan appears and Vincent demands to know what is going on. Then the real archdemon rises in the sky, ready to strike. Aslan says he sensed it and warns Vincent to recover fast. Now Vincent has to move past the Sanyan and face the truth he left behind, as he gets ready to fight the demon. Vincent wakes up in his room with everyone gathered around him. He still doesn't understand Aslan's last words. Even after beating the Sanyan, he still wasn't worthy of seeing the truth. Then the Edinka Patriarch walks in, and all the Kadats immediately stand straight. He tells them to relax, he won't stay long. Ken says he's proud his son kept his promise and wants to reward him. Vincent says he still isn't a true Edinka and needs a master to teach him the family's swordsmanship. The Patriarch asks if he realizes the elders still dislike him, but Vincent says that after beating the Sanjan they can't stop him anymore. His father gives a faint smile and tells him to come along. At the end of the hall stand Realsa and Merlin is surprised Vincent remembered his name. Realsa introduces him as Vincent's new teacher. He's an 8-star martial artist and the holder of the electric giant. His full name is Merlin Falker. The moment Vincent hears Falker, he freezes, because that's Aslan's true last name. Back at the Sanyan main castle, Kagan gets scolded by his mother. She says his enemy read his anger perfectly, and that's why he ended up with that humiliating wound on his arm. She rests a hand on his head and warns that if he loses like that again, she'll cut his muscles herself. But the boy doesn't even flinch. Then he suddenly feels a wild rage and tells her to calm down. They're standing before the matriarch, and this evil presence is calling itself an ancestor. Back with Vincent, he asks if Merlin holds major power in the family. Realsa explains that the Falkers are one of the oldest families serving the Edinkas, but their influence is neither great nor small. That only confuses Vincent more. If the Falkers became Edinka, why are they still around? Merlin says that starting tomorrow, he'll treat Vincent like a real student, so he'd better be ready. Even the Patriarch tells him to work hard, he'll need it. Elsewhere, the elders are furious their scheme failed. Everything went the wrong way, and now Vincent is a hero. They say the one who should answer for this is Elder Tilavan. He argues that things simply didn't go as planned, but the others insist this was his doing alone, dumping all the blame on him. Sensing the threat, Tilavan says he'll fix it at once, while the Samian elder may already be near death. The matriarch asks why he hired those mages, and the bald elder says he only wanted a total win over the Edinkas. That just makes her angrier, because they still couldn't get a full victory even after cheating. She says she hates politics and dirty tricks. They don't suit a martial artist. That's also why she never beat Khan in a straight fight. She adds that the family has no ties to the Magic Tower or the Association. She'll let it slide for now, but he can spend some time quietly gardening or doing something harmless. Terrified, the elder retreats to his room, contacts an Edinka elder, and asks what went wrong. Tilavan says Vincent's ability was far beyond what he expected, which makes the Edinka elder furious. He says someone has to take responsibility, and orders him to find a way to get rid of Vincent before things get worse. Meanwhile, Vincent is sleeping peacefully until an assassin nearly kills him. He dodges and pulls his sword at once, but it turns out to be a test from Merlin. He says it's past midnight, and now he's officially Vincent's master. From here on, Vincent will train day and night until he can truly control the electric giant. Only after that can he leave and learn Adunka swordsmanship. Vincent asks what's wrong with his technique, and Merlin says everything. He shows him a necklace with a strange pendant and explains that it's a magic item that will break the moment it touches someone else's electric energy. Vincent thinks this should be simple and wants to finish fast, but the second he attacks, Merlin triggers his mark and blows him back. When Vincent looks up, he's stunned. It feels like Zeus himself is standing there. Julian says this is nothing like what they saw before, and Merlin proves it's not just his look that's different by smashing Vincent away with a single hit. Vincent wonders what this blue lightning is and why it's so powerful, but Merlin admits he's bad at explaining things, and says the only way he teaches is by beating the lesson in. Outside, Wilson is busy with the laundry. The dean is still stressed over the director, and someone else is clearly plotting something. A week passes since Vincent began training. Ciri keeps sending her spirit contract through the fortress because she's worried the young master isn't getting proper rest. Inside the cave, Vincent makes solid progress, and Merlin is impressed by the clever ways he tries to deal with him. Even so, he still has a long way to go. Vincent tries using his lightning to strike back, but it can't match Merlin's blue lightning and gets shoved back by the pressure. Merlin immediately comes at him from behind, but Vin dodges and gets right in front of the pendant. Naturally, he reaches for it, but that's exactly what the redhead wanted. A moment later, Merlin smacks him with the butt of his weapon. Merlin says Vincent's movements are getting better, but his electric giant still hasn't improved enough. Julian tells him to drink plenty of water. They don't know when the next break will come. Vincent has tried everything, but his lightning still can't beat Merlin's. It's like they aren't even using the same electric giant. Then Julian complains that barely any water is coming out of the bottle, and that gives Vincent an idea. He finally understands why his electric giant is weak. He always thought he had to hold back the lightning before releasing it, but it's actually the opposite. He has to let it all burst out at once. Merlin is glad he finally figured it out, but the training still isn't done. Before learning the true Adunka swordsmanship, Vincent has to destroy the pendant. The two clash again in a storm of lightning. Merlin thrusts forward, but Vincent leaps up and readies a strike, only for Merlin to stop it, setting off a lightning blast that quickly condenses into a ball and knocks Vincent back. Merlin notices that Vincent is using Rasadores. The moment Vincent spots an opening, he grips his sword and swings hard. Merlin blocks it and startles him by saying he knows Rasa and understands her power. He crushes Vincent's attack, putting him on guard. Then Vincent notices a deep old scar on Merlin. It looks like the kind no healing could erase. Pain, fear, shame, defeat. Those are deadly weaknesses for a martial artist. Vincent fires lightning through his blade, and when Merlin dodges, he uses that instant to grab the exposed pendant. He pours his energy into it and shatters it. Both drop to the ground slightly hurt. Realizing Vincent aimed at his scar, Merlin admits the boy has shocking experience for a 14-year-old. He says Vincent passed and has earned the right to learn Adunka swordsmanship. Vincent asks if he's serious. Merlin says he is. Vincent needs this training for even bigger trials ahead. A few days later, his friends praise him for surviving a whole week training in that closed space, but then Ciri calls out to him. Ciri hands him a mission. His friends think it's odd because it's addressed straight to Vincent. When he asks why, Salbura says jobs like this usually go to rank 7 cadets. Julian points at the signature. He's shocked to see it came from the elders of Edenka. Salbura laughs and offers help, saying they all got stronger training with him, but Vincent chooses to go alone, and Merlin asks why. The rector reminds him this is his first mission, and going solo is risky. Vincent says that's exactly why he has to do it alone. The elders were bold enough to hand him this mission, clearly treating it like a test or a trap. Merlin says they may be trying to get rid of him. The rector agrees and warns how dangerous it is to send him by himself. Vincent cuts in. This is his war, and winning means walking out of their trap unharmed. He knows there's a truth hidden here, and he has to get stronger to uncover it, even if he gets dragged into a power struggle. With a cold smile, he says he has to accept because he's Anika too. Bargain sighs, realizing Vincent has already made up his mind, so he permits the mission and tells him not to forget himself as a cadet. Vincent then heads out for his mission in Tornik. Later, while the rector is resting, Vargan shows up and asks if she's dodging work. She says she's only taking a break, then asks about Vincent's mission and the one behind it. Even though it carries the elder's name, they suspect Elder Tilavan is the real culprit. The rector figures he's planning something. Then someone calls out to her through a cloud of smoke. The guards report a martial artist demanding to see Vincent. He refuses to back down, and a clash seems close. The guards demand his name. A servant suggests coming back later, but the redhead pushes back. He only wants to talk. Spear in hand, he takes a fighting stance and asks where Vincent is. The guards yell for him to stop. The redhead stays calm, raises his spear and uses the first form of Javelin's spear. A whip snaps out and stops him cold. He's shocked to realize he's already been pinned down. The rector steps in and says she recognized him from that spear style. She tells Raven to stop before this becomes a bigger problem. The servant cries out, worried about Raven, but Vargan appears behind him, locks him down and warns that one wrong move will cost him his head. The servant is stunned. A mage with over 5 circles, and a woman using a shape-shifting whip. He quickly realizes they're the ones running this fortress. The rector says he seems well informed and introduces herself. Raven asks if she's really the rector, then cuts the whip and frees himself. Even the rector is surprised, but Raven, full of excitement, blurts out that he wants to join the fortress as a cadet. Once they enter Tornik, Julian says the mission seems too simple for the elders to be involved, but Vincent says that's the trick. The target is a single goblin. Julian immediately suspects a trap. Vincent explains that goblins are weak alone but dangerous in groups because they overwhelm their prey. This one, though, is wandering by itself. He says it was either cast out or got so strong it no longer needed its group and may have eaten them. That thought scares Julian, who quickly starts planning for the worst. Vincent thanks him. According to the plan, the creature should be nearby. He climbs onto the carriage roof and tosses some money to the driver. The coachman says they still have a long way to go, but Vincent insists on getting off here and tells him to leave the forest fast. The driver has no idea why, and then Vincent vanishes, leaving only traces of ice behind. He stops in the forest and with a sly grin starts the hunt. He activates the blessing of the electric giant and appears behind the target, unleashing giant lightning storm. The blue lightning isn't especially strong, but it blankets the whole area. Vincent senses it and finds a gray monster overflowing with purple aura. He's stunned by its huge body and the strange marks covering it. Julian guesses it might be a chimera. Unable to judge its level, Vincent moves in carefully. Then he senses someone else and wonders if an assassin is nearby. He dodges a spear and Raven arrives, cheerfully saying he's glad to finally meet him. He explains that he came to challenge Vincent. Confused, Vincent wonders who this guy is, especially with a rank 9 badge, since someone that strong shouldn't have slipped past him. Suddenly the goblin rushes toward Vincent, catching him off guard. Its roar shatters a tree, but he jumps clear. Raven asks what that thing is, and Vincent warns him to stay sharp. It might be a chimera. The monster charges Raven and swings a heavy punch, but his spear flies back into his hand and slams into the goblin's back. Raven says he doesn't know the full story, but he'll take the goblin down. Back with the director, she sighs, relieved to be free of trouble for now. Varjan asks if that was really an accident, thinking she rushed Raven's enrollment so she could send him after Vincent. As a descendant of someone with the third highest authority, Raven could be a shield for him. The director insists she knows nothing about that. She just says she still has a few vacation days left. Back in the fight, the goblin winds up to punch Raven, but Raven smiles and slices through it with his spear, smashing it to the ground. The monster looks up and sees Raven standing like a shadow, sunlight gleaming on his spear tip. It barely dodges and Raven's strike cracks the ground. The goblin tries to counter, but Raven cuts it again with incredible speed. Vincent watches, realizing there's barely any opening for him. This guy is on the same level as him and Khan. The goblin starts to look afraid as Raven reveals his blessing trait, the spear that pierces everything. The monster screams in terror and its arm is torn off in an instant. Vincent and Julian are stunned, but then the arm begins to regenerate. Raven sees it and goes pale at the goblin, which now looks more like a demon. The monster appears behind Raven and he seems to recognize it from the scales. Vincent rushes in to help, and the monster is suddenly bound. Raven recognizes the wires and a voice scolds him for running off again without warning. The servant reveals himself as Sirkin. Raven thanks him for the save, but the monster, in rage, breaks free. Vincent notes that the restraint was destroyed. Then the monster forms a magic seal, and everyone is shocked to see it using magic. The creature teleports away, and a mysterious figure appears, speaking to an elder about a problem. Julian can't believe a goblin just teleported. Vincent asks who these two newcomers are. They introduce themselves as the young master and butler of the Vardican family. Raven says he became a cadet today, and was sent to find Vincent under the director's orders. Julian reacts to the family name, and Vincent asks if they're important. Julian explains the Vardicans are one of the 3 great martial families, famous for spearsmanship. That also explains why Raven is so strong. He adds that the Vardican patriarch has only one child, making Raven the sole heir. Vincent wonders why the only heir of that family is at the academy. Julian suggests staying with them for now. No one would dare touch the Vardican successor. They can work together and use that as cover while they figure out the elder's real goal. Vincent quietly appreciates the director for sending 2 powerful allies. Sirkin says he wants an explanation. He asks why that goblin was here and why a direct descendant like Vincent was sent alone. This mission clearly wasn't just about taking down a monster. With a hard stare, Sirkin warns them not to drag Raven into an internal Edenka conflict. Depending on the answer, they may leave. Raven suddenly cuts in and says something else matters, more right now. He challenges Vincent to a duel. Vincent is baffled, and Julian remembers Raven already talking about this. Raven says watching Vincent fight Khan lit a fire in him. He had planned to beat Khan first, but now his real target is Vincent. He wants to grow stronger with him and then surpass him. Julian thinks the guy is intense, while Vincent sees someone blunt and competitive, and figures they might get along. Still, he refuses, leaving Raven staring in confusion and asking why. Vincent says his priority is the mission. Raven begs for just one fight but gets turned down again, so he calls Vincent a coward and a chicken. Vincent doesn't budge. He says no duel happens until the goblin is dealt with. Sirkin realizes Vincent is basically forcing them to help. Raven asks if they can fight once the goblin is dead, and Vincent says maybe. That's all Raven needs to hear. He gets fired up to hunt the goblin. Sirkin can only think his young master is hopelessly obsessed, and that this time Vincent caught them. After reaching Tornik's main street, they eat at an inn and decide to stay the night. As they talk, they bring up the danger of being pulled into the elders' schemes, and Vincent says the goblin looked like a chimera. Sirkin agrees, while Raven adds that its scales and horns were especially strange, so they decide to investigate more. Then Vincent senses a presence and a smell like the Sanyan prison. A man comes down the stairs. He freezes in shock and blurts out Vincent's name. Vincent is surprised the man knows him. The stranger suddenly stumbles down the stairs and Vincent catches him, demanding to know who sent him. Then red mana starts pouring from the man's chest, and panic takes over. Vincent sees the man's mana flow spiraling out of control and asks what's happening. A moment later, he turns and shouts that the man is about to explode, but the others say they can't feel anything. Only Vincent can sense that mana as the man's skin cracks and his eyes glow from the overload. The body starts to burst, and Vincent yells that it's dangerous. The man explodes. Raven shouts because Vincent is right next to the blast. People scream and run, while Sirkin wonders why he didn't sense the explosion and throws up a wire barrier around Raven. Raven says they have to save Vincent. He's still inside it. As the explosion swells, Vincent cuts through it, shocking them both. He drops to the ground, worn out, and Raven rushes over. Sirkin is stunned. He thought Vincent had been swallowed by the blast, but he actually sliced it apart. Raven carries him away while Sirkin checks the body. Vincent realizes he almost died. Julian says he's lucky his heart didn't burst from using the absolute sword again. Once they reach the room, Vincent says he needs to meditate and asks them to guard him. Sirkin wonders why Vincent trusts them with that. Vincent says Sirkin is at least a 7-circle mage, so whether he meditates or not wouldn't matter if Sirkin wanted to beat him. Sirkin wraps him in a wire cocoon. Vincent starts meditating. Raven asks how Vincent survived that blast. Sirkin figures Vin somehow sliced the explosion apart. Raven can't believe it and asks if he could do the same. Sirkin says maybe about 50-50. Even though the man exploded, the body is still mostly intact. Then it starts evaporating, and even Sirkin is shocked. Raven says he gets it now, and Sirkin asks what exactly he means. Raven calls Vince an insane bastard and says he really wants to duel him. By night, Vincent finally comes out of the cocoon. It took longer than he expected. He notices Raven passed out without a care after everything that happened. Julian brings up the dead man's mana. Vincent says he's sure it came from the Crimson Emperor. Julian wonders if the man stored mana in his heart like they do, but he wasn't a martial artist. Raven guesses he may have been a prisoner, injected with mana before being sent out. Vincent thinks this points to something bigger involving the elders in the Sanyan. Sirkin walks in and asks if Vin knew the man would explode, why didn't he run? Vin says there were too many people nearby, including a woman holding a baby. Sirkin asks if that mattered more than Vin's safety and goals. Vin asks what Raven would have done and whether Sirkin really thinks he would have left him. Sirkin gets the point, though he admits not everyone would act like that. Then he says Vin carries the finest sword among the Idenka. Vincent thanks him. Sirkin says that out of respect, he'll step back from the subjugation mission. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure appears with the goblin on a leash and tells it to be quiet. Soon enough, it'll get to eat Vincent Idenka, and maybe Raven too. In the forest, Raven walks along humming, excited to hunt the goblin and head back after killing it. Vincent can't sense Sirkin nearby, and realizes he really kept his word. He remembers asking earlier why Sirkin was leaving the subjugation, and Sirkin answered that Raven comes first. If things got bad, he would have killed the goblin himself, but that would have gotten in the way of Vincent's growth. He wants to see how far Vin can go with an honest sword, so he promises not to interfere. Vin finds it funny having someone that strong cheering for him. Julian says he should have healed fully and returned a few days later. Vincent disagrees. Someone dangerous is involved, and waiting could make things worse. Raven asks where they're headed. Vin says back to the place where they fought the goblin. He still can't sense it, so its real base must be farther away. Raven asks how they'll find it now, so Vin rolls up his sleeves and says they'll do it the old-fashioned way. Raven says that without a special trait, tracking it should be impossible. Vin explains the goblin is much bigger than the other beasts here, so it had to leave tracks behind. He mastered this method while hunting monsters, and starts by following the smell of blood. Before long, they find claw marks, bones, and footprints. Raven is impressed, saying he's learning a lot from Vin, but Vincent finds it too easy. The signs are laid out too neatly, almost like a straight trail, as if someone wants them to follow it. And right then, he triggers a trap. A huge blast goes off, but they barely avoid the magic mine. Julian says the field itself is strange. Wheat shouldn't be growing there. Vincent drives his sword into the ground, sending lightning through the area. It reaches a hidden man, who cancels his spell, setting off a massive electric burst. Vincent says he's the one who lured them here. The man praises them for figuring it out and introduces himself as Carvel, thanking them for accepting his invitation. Vin asks if the elders hired him. Carvel says Vin's head is worth 100 million. Vincent thinks he's talking way too openly. Carvel says one thing clearly, he has no plan to let Vin live. Then the goblin appears behind them. They immediately draw and strike at it, making the creature shriek. Vincent realizes it reflected their attacks. Carvel tells them not to forget about him, and fires magic projectiles. They dodge, but Vincent feels pain in his chest. His body still hasn't fully recovered. Carvel mocks them, asking if they really think they can beat both him and his chimera at the same time. Vincent says he'll handle the gauntlet. Then wires suddenly bind Kargan and explode around him. Sirkin says he's surprised Vincent noticed he was there. Vincent knew he'd never leave Raven alone. Raven shouts that Kargan's body vanished, leaving only bits of clothing. A moment later, Kargan teleports back. He remembers Sirkin's name, the famous Vardican assassin, and calls him the King of Assassins. Raven is lost, while Sirkin is surprised his name still carries that much weight. Tightening his wires, Sirkin says Kargan won't get away. The mage just smiles, saying things have changed. Now he can build an even better chimera using their bodies. Vincent says Sirkin can take the sorcerer, and Sirkin agrees at once. Then everyone rushes in to fight. Vin uses the absolute sword, but the goblin blocks it. Its body seems to reject mana itself. At the same time, Kargan starts overwhelming Sirkin, who snaps that he's built for assassination, not open battle. As magic flies, Sirkin fires back that Kargan isn't much of a tamer either. Kargan says he only uses his collar trait to force monsters to obey. With a snap, the goblin turns on Sirkin and unleashes a huge attack. Sirkin gets clipped, but escapes. He says Raven was right. Those are dragon scales. He explains they come from an extinct species, and that trait gives extreme resistance to mana. Kargan starts screaming and beating the goblin for nearly hitting him too. The goblin grows agitated, like it's ready to snap back. Kargan keeps attacking it, warning that it will never escape the collar, and if it tries that again, he'll drain its dragon blood. Vincent asks what that collar is, and Sirkin says it's the trait controlling the goblin. Vin thinks there's still a way out. As Kargan keeps stomping the goblin, Vincent says he has a plan. Kargan looks up and realizes they're gone. Sirkin strikes first with his wires, but Kargan dodges. Raven attacks from behind, yet the mage teleports again. But Raven activates his spear's blessing. Kargan panics and uses the goblin as a shield. He catches Raven's spear and hurls him upward, thinking the whole thing is pointless. Kargan misses Vincent using the second form of the true sword. That's when he realizes he was the real target all along. Still, even with the technique, the cut only grazes him. The mage laughs, saying the odds still favor him, and orders the chimera to kill them. Instead, the goblin screams and turns on Kargan. Vincent says Kargan was never the target. The collar trait was. The monster charges him, and Kargan throws up a magic barrier, but the dragon scales tear right through it. In the end, his own monster kills him. Julian says the tamer clearly didn't have much trust with his beast. Vincent says he shouldn't even be called a real tamer. A true one shares the beast's pain and joy, while Kargan only controlled it by force. The goblin's scales start melting. Sirkin says this fusion was never stable in a chimera. Magic was just being used as glue to force it together. Vincent says he'll finish what he came to do, and brings out shovels for the monster. Soon he's walking away with both heads packed in bags. Raven happily says their first mission was a success. Vin replies that this job came from the elders, and with everything that happened, he plans to answer them using the family's power, because now he has strong evidence. Sirkin asks what evidence. Vincent points at him and calls him the King of Assassins. The dead man's head carries marks from Sirkin's wires, so Vin thanks him. He made this easier. Sirkin sighs, realizing he stepped into something dangerous. Then someone appears, clapping and calling it impressive. She adds that the butler took quite a beating. It's the director, saying they managed to run into her on her day off. She says the mission was a success and asks to see the bags. Vincent shows them and asks if she recognizes the contents. She jokingly says she's never seen them before, then agrees this should be handled with family authority. She also says something about the whole thing feels off. Vincent asks what she means. She says an elder likely helped Kaiden during the friendly exchange event. Halaman Samian handled the cheating, while Elder Tilavan is the one targeting Vincent. Since the two are old friends, she sends a letter and dumps the work on Varjan, who explodes in anger because she handled things on her day off. Now he's the one stuck working overtime. A soldier then brings him Vincent's report. He's surprised by how detailed and well-written it is, so he decides he doesn't need the director's version. Looking over all the incidents, he wonders what's happening inside Adenka. Vincent's father reads the same letter and asks what Vincent's getting at. Standing before him, Vincent says he has two suspicions. First, the mission was set up to target him. His father says that by itself isn't a big issue. Vin agrees that's not why he came. The real problem is that the Samian were involved. He says it's normal for an elder to use family power to test him, but using the Samian crosses the line, and the two elders are close friends. His father asks about the second point. Vincent says the elders behind this may not have known anything at all. As he sees where his son is going, the patriarch asks which possibility Vincent thinks is more likely. Vincent says he hopes it's the second one. Better they're incompetent than cowards. Suddenly his stepmother bursts in and says there's an emergency. They ask what happened and she says Tilavan Adenka killed himself. Vincent's father is stunned, but she continues. Tilavan stabbed himself in the heart and left a letter taking responsibility for the mission. Vincent immediately says it was a fake suicide. Both of them stare at him and ask why. Julian and Vincent say that if Tilavan really meant to take responsibility, he wouldn't have done this. Either the force behind him killed him or he silenced himself. Vincent says he doesn't want to believe there's a group bold enough to kill an elder inside Adenka territory. To him, this is part of a larger scheme. His mother says he notices things she can't, then asks the patriarch to lend her Vincent. He tells her to do as she likes. She calls Vin over and says she wants to examine the incident through his eyes. They open the door and find the elder dead. His mother tells Vincent not to force himself to see it as suicide. Then she walks up and studies the body. She thinks this should be simple for him. But Vincent spots something off. The blade is too clean and it went in with one strike. His mother says a martial artist could do that. Vincent disagrees. A real suicide would look more desperate and painful. No matter how strong he was, nothing here feels like suicide. With no hesitation marks, he says this corpse is probably fake. She immediately asks where the real body is. Vincent quickly turns to Julian and asks the same thing. Julian says he thought Vincent already figured it out. Vincent admits he has no clue and asks if the lesser god knows. Julian guesses it's dark art corpse ventriloquism. Vincent repeats that to his mother. She asks what he's basing that on. Vincent asks if she can't tell with her eyes, but she says her blessing barely lets her tell truth from lies, and this kind of trick is beyond it. Then she grabs him with a chilling pressure and asks how he knows dark arts. Julian and Vincent both tense up. She says she doesn't care about the corpse. She wants to know where that knowledge came from. Elsewhere, a man is startled when the patriarch arrives. The patriarch calmly says it's been a while and asks for some tea. At the elders' meeting, he sips it and praises the flavor, asking if it was Tillivan's favorite. The room instantly grows uneasy. A woman, sweating, says that corpse has already been removed from the council. The patriarch thinks they must have cleared themselves already. She tells him to get to the point and asks if he came to complain about Vincent's mission. He says the outcome was unfortunate, and she mocks him, saying Vincent must be his favorite because he's Sarvanna Heasley's son. One elder jokes that his wife might get jealous, while another says the Helling family may object. The woman presses harder, calling it shameless, and asks why he cares about that woman's son now, saying he grew stronger at the cost of her life. That drags the patriarch back to the past. He remembers begging Sarvanna to use anything that could save her. She asked him to respect her choice, raise their son, and not cry. Now filled with rage, he remembers her asking him to fill the hole she'd leave behind. He rises, releasing a terrifying pressure. The woman, now sweating harder, asks why he's reacting like that. She taunts him, asking if he thought no one would notice that after his wife's death, he achieved something incredible and was hailed as a Denka himself. She says anyone could suspect her death helped open that path for him. Then she stands and praises Sarvanna, saying everyone mourned her. Smiling, she adds that no one could be sadder than the one who had to kill her. The patriarch points his blade at her, and with a purple glow unleashes a manta ray that tears through everything ahead. But the woman drops unharmed. It was only a hallucination born from his killing intent. She's left shaking at the peak level a human can reach, the 9 stars. With crushing presence, the patriarch says her name was Sarvanna Denka. Back with Vincent, he and Julian scramble for a way out. Vincent says he can see, and his mother presses him for answers. Julian mutters that they're doomed, while she doubts he can even see the name of the dark spell. Vincent says he actually can't, trying to slip past her eye of truth, so he says he received a revelation. His mother is surprised and asks if it's like what happened at the sword assembly. Vincent says when he observes with his feelings, revelations come to him. That's how he found it. He notices her eye doesn't react. She warns him never to tell anyone. He agrees, and Julian is shocked that it actually worked. She asks what the god said and whether he revealed Tillivan's location. Vincent asks Julian to help him out. Julian says if even his mother can't sense it, then a huge amount of dark magic was used. Tillivan has burned away most of his life force. Vincent relays that, and she asks if a third party is involved. Julian says the chance is low. Tamov had no value left. With no one helping him, he pushed himself to the limit and is still somewhere in this room. She finds that hard to believe. Then Vincent asks her for a favor. He wants her to cut off Tamovan's head with her own hands. She says he'll be executed anyway, and asks if Vincent can even force him out. That's why he needs her. He says he'll draw Tamovan out, and she just has to block the old man's attack. His mother tells him to leave that to her. Vincent drives his sword into the floor. Lightning spreads through the room from his strike and races toward the corpse, forcing Tamovan to reveal himself as he attacks. But his mother stops the blow with 2 fingers. Tamovan is stunned as she snaps his sword. When he drops, she says he's become a dog of Samian. Using the Crimson Emperor's power, Tamovan pitifully claims he could have escaped if not for her. She asks if he really believes that. Then Vincent's sword path slices cleanly past the old man's neck. He thinks it's over, but suddenly Vincent collapses. His mother cries out and he writhes on the floor in pain. She asks what happened. Vincent says it started right after he used the absolute sword. Then he sees one of his nails vanish. Julian is shocked while Vincent says he didn't expect it this soon. The destruction of the celestial exoskeleton. His mother runs to call a priest. While Vincent says this wasn't supposed to happen for years, Julian isn't surprised. Vincent pushed his body to beat enemies far stronger than him. After using power beyond his level again and again, this backlash was bound to come. Vincent asks Julian if he failed again in this life, but Julian says no. Purple butterflies gather around him as he admits Vincent's methods were reckless, but worth it. Without Vincent, none of this would have been possible, and no one would have seen his worth. Julian says he'll use his divine power to hold the celestial exoskeleton together. Vincent yells at him not to, but Julian cuts him off. He already knows he'll disappear. Smiling, he tells Vincent to find a way to contain the exoskeleton before he fades away. Vincent screams Julian's name, and Julian says goodbye in a storm of butterflies. Vincent catches one mana butterfly and vows to find a way. Then Father Dulene opens the door. Elsewhere, Ciri is in a meeting. The director and Raven wait for him, and Raven hopes they'll hurry. Merlin suddenly arrives, and she asks if he came all the way from the fortress at this hour. He says Vincent's report worried him and asks how Vincent is doing. She says he's fine and should be with his father right now. Ciri leaves the meeting, complaining it took longer than expected. As he says he did a good job, she notices that Ciri and Merlin are staring each other down. The director asks if they know one another. Ciri says, unfortunately, he's the one who gave Merlin that scar. Merlin instantly draws his sword and Ciri readies himself too. The director tries to stop them. Back with Dolan, he asks how Vincent's body got this bad. If he'd arrived any later, it could have been much worse. He says Vincent may look fine outside, but inside he's still a mess. Vincent says he may know a way and asks about the celestial exoskeleton. He explains he doesn't have much time and asks if there's any way to restore it. Dolan says this is his first time hearing of such a thing. Vincent starts to think there's no hope and that both he and Julian will die anyway. But Dolan says there is a way to protect Julian. Vincent has to learn to use divine power. He dryly asks if that means becoming a priest. Dolan says that's one option, but there's no time. Instead, he tells Vincent to go to the Celestial King's tomb. The king was a legendary disciple who built the temple, and inside is an item with incredible power, the Holy Grail. Vincent asks if he's supposed to hunt down some myth, but Dolan says it's not exactly a myth. A martial artist once gained power that way. And when Vincent asks who, Dolan says it was Aislinn Denka, his ancestor. Back with the director, the two still look ready to kill each other. Merlin says this is his first time seeing him since their battle. Ciri explains he was a mercenary back then, and their paths crossed more than once. Merlin lifts his sword and says this meeting will end like the others. Ciri charges with a grin, and Raven shouts at him. Just before they collide, the director stops them. She reminds them they're now the masters of two cadets, and if they can't wait until Vincent and Raven leave the fortress, she'll kill them both herself. Merlin later sees Dolan trying to stop Vince from entering the tomb alone, but Vincent has already made up his mind. The others overhear, and Cedric says he must be chasing another adventure. He tells Merlin Falker they'll finish their fight next time, and Merlin says he hopes so. Then they leave. The director, surprised, asks if his name really is Falker. Near the tomb, Dolan questions whether Vincent really plans to go in. Vincent says he didn't come all this way to turn back. Under all that pressure, he knows he can't delay because of Julian. Dolan reminds him that no one has ever come back alive from the tomb and they know nothing about what's inside. Vincent asks why Dolan told him about this place at all. After all, with the guards, he could have reached it without a second-class priest. Dolan asks if he knows the Holy King Laimegor. Vincent says only a little, remembering what he studied. Laimegor was the hero who founded the Gaia religion and died fighting the Archdemondavin, but much of his story was lost. Dolan says he is the priest who inherited the Holy King's power, and priests like him carry a prophecy. Only someone who has faced death and recognized God can find the Holy Grail. Even Dolan doesn't fully know what it means to pass through death, but he believes Vincent is the one the prophecy was talking about. He admits he got scared when he heard Vincent was really going into the tomb. Vincent tells him not to worry. He's the Holy King's chosen one. Then he steps inside. Dolan watches Black Mage swallow the entrance. He clasps his hands and prays for him. As Vincent walks down the stairs into total darkness, he notices he's been descending for a long time with no end in sight. He calls out for Julian, then remembers Julian can't hear him here. Even after 10 years in prison, being alone still gets to him. Unable to find the way, he wonders if he missed something in the dark, when a voice suddenly warns him not to look back. If he does, he'll lose his way and be trapped forever. Vincent pulls his sword and demands the speaker show himself. A light suddenly appears, and shadows rise up. They take the form of Shadow Clan assassins, and one man introduces himself as Melanon. He says he's been waiting for the one seeking the truth. Surrounded, Vincent has no idea what's happening. Melanon tells him to overcome the Samian and face the truth. They were left there by that wish, waiting for 500 years, and now he must prove himself and set them free. Vincent asks how he's supposed to do that. Melanon says only his swordsmanship can free them. So Vincent decides to use Idenka swordsmanship. He cuts through the shadows with the first form, Crescent Slash, declaring that he's Aislinn Falker's descendant. But Melanon says that's still not enough proof. The tomb shakes as the fight explodes into a fast clash. The shadows try to break his focus with their words, but he answers with lightning storm, wiping them out only for them to regenerate and surround him again. As he dodges, Vincent realizes his attacks aren't stopping them. Then Melanon strikes from behind. Vincent remembers the warning not to look back, so he takes the hit. Melanon tells him to give up. He isn't the one from the prophecy. Through the pain, Vincent wonders if this is really the place Aislinn meant for him. If Julian were here, he'd know what to do. Feeling trapped and outmatched, he faces the swarm of shadows. Outside, while Dolan is praying, someone arrives yelling at the guards to move. Dolan recognizes who it is. Inside, Vincent's blood drips to the floor. Melanon says they are guardians chosen by the Sun King and the Holy King, given absolute power to protect this place. They hoped he would free them, but since he can't beat them, he's just an intruder. He's neither the seeker of truth, nor the one who knew death and found God. Vincent realizes there were actually two prophecies, and Melanon says he fits neither. Then he moves in to finish him. Suddenly, red mana bursts out. Vincent breaks free with it. Melanon recognizes it as Samian's mana. Using the Crimson Empire's power, Vincent unleashes the final form of Scarlet Song and cuts down everything with Bloody Full Moon. He realizes he introduced himself wrong. He should have said he was Davin, the man who went through death and overcame it to stand here. By the prophecy, they should hand over the Holy Grail. Melanon is relieved to finally be freed, and the shadows disappear. A huge door appears before Vincent. He opens the tomb, wondering if the Holy Grail is inside. The coffin opens, revealing the Holy King. The king says the task Aslan left behind has been fulfilled. Then he summons the Holy Grail into his hand and says his role here is over. Now Vincent must move on to his next mission. The Holy Grail, he explains, will lead him to the Celestial Fruit. He thanks Vincent for keeping the promise made to Aslan and fades away. Vincent salutes him, offering his respect. Then the whole place starts to collapse, and Vincent asks if this is the next mission. That's when he notices Sir Falcor behind him. Outside, Dylan keeps waiting, while the director says they've been inside too long. She explains the prophecy came from her family, and Merlin's family. It also mentioned a descendant of Coibel. She doesn't know why he's involved, but the prophecy is clearly coming true. So she worries about Merlin because if Vincent is the seeker of truth, Merlin may not come back alive. Vincent notes that Falcor was Aslan's original family name, so it's strange that line still remained after dropping it. He asks what happened to the Falcors, and Merlin explains that some Agic families carry a prophecy about a mission left by the first patriarch. A Falcor descendant must sacrifice himself in the tomb for the Agica who remembers that name. Vincent is stunned by that. Then a rock falls toward him, but Merlin slices it apart at once. He says the tomb lasted 500 years, but now it's about to fall. There's only one way out: destroy the pillar holding up the tomb. That collapse will open a small escape path. Vincent rejects the plan and suggests finding another way, but Merlin refuses, summons the lightning giant, and accepts his fate. Vincent warns him he'll die. Merlin says that when they first met, Vincent promised to remember his name. That made his heart shake, because his moment had finally come. He says there's no greater joy than finishing your mission before death, and calls Vincent a great student as he attacks. But Vincent blocks the strike and asks if those are really his last words. Does the name Falcor mean that little to him? If he were the Aslan Falcor, Vincent knows he'd never throw his life away for some mission. Aslan was a kind child who cried over the unfair pain Davin suffered. He would never abandon his own descendants like this. Merlin yells that if this keeps up, they'll both die. Vincent says they can both survive, because Merlin was planning to spend all his power making a path for him. If Vincent moves faster, Merlin won't need to use everything. He starts focusing, activating all his blessings. Merlin sees the traces come together, and Vincent bursts with power as he gives Merlin the signal. Merlin draws his sword and destroys the pillar. With the opening made, Vincent rushes for the exit. But just as he gets close, his power suddenly runs out. As he starts to fall, Merlin catches him with a smile and tells him to find the truth no matter what. Then he uses his lightning and throws Vincent out of the tomb. Vincent screams for his master, but then a beam flashes past. The director cracks her whip, shattering the debris and wrapping it around Merlin's leg. He hangs on, relieved he made it. She says she figured Quebel's name was in the prophecy to save the Falcor. Vincent wakes up shouting for his master and finds him asleep beside him. The director says that for someone who caused so much chaos, he sure slept well, and asks about the item. Vincent says it's the Holy Grail and asks if they want to see it. Dylan can't believe it's real, and when he touches it, he starts absorbing its holy power. The cup fills with water. Vincent wonders if drinking it would give him divine power. The director, disgusted, points out it's been sitting there for 500 years and he still wants to drink from it. But the moment he does, divine power floods his body. A purple butterfly appears and Julian shows up in front of him, asking what happened and whether the exoskeleton was restored. Vincent says he restored Julian's sacred power and now has enough divine power to keep the exoskeleton stable. Julian then asks what happened to the place. Vincent says the tomb collapsed. Julian comments on the mess he's caused again. Later, the news hits the papers and people start talking about it. His mother reads it, thinking he was supposed to be home in bed. Vincent says he recovered fast. She lowers the paper, furious, and says she can tell, considering the chaos he caused. At the Temple of Gaia, Dullan defends Vincent, saying he had no reason to destroy the tomb. But the man at the table says Dullan is being too soft, and asks if he really thinks they care about the reason. He's a first-class priest named Nelly. What matters, he says, is that Gaia lost a historic treasure. Dullan tries to answer, but the priest slams the table and says they have every right to demand compensation. At the very least, to preserve the 500-year trust between Gaia and Yidenka, they can ask for a fair donation. The other priests agree. Dullan is sure they'll pocket the money themselves. Then an elder enters and says the others are disappointed with Vincent's behavior too, and he must pay for the disaster. He draws his sword and says taking Vincent's left arm would be fitting. Vincent's mother says he has no idea how much trouble he caused. He destroyed a site Gaia protected for 500 years. Gaia and Edinka have been allies since the war against the Archimean, and if that bond breaks, the damage will be huge. She already knows Gaia will send a protest group demanding outrageous terms to keep the alliance. Vincent says if she already knows all that, he can skip the usual report. His mother asks if there's anything unusual to report. He calls Rolelsa, who brings in a covered cart and pulls off the cloth, revealing the Holy Grail. His mother thinks it's just an ordinary cup. No matter how valuable it is, she says Gaia will still demand whatever benefits them. Vincent tells her not to worry, they'll be thanking him for this. She tells him to go on. Vincent explains they don't actually care about the tomb. Even as a historic site, it sat abandoned with only 2 guards and a priest could let anyone in. They had also stopped researching it. If it truly mattered, they'd still be studying the inside despite the danger. So to them, it had become useless. He asks if that proves enough. His mother says she's disappointed. Even knowing what her eyes can do, he still dares to lie to her face. Raelsa gets nervous when her trait activates. With a frightening aura, his mother tells him to say what he's hiding. Vincent admits he knows he can't lie to her, and asks her to look at something. They're both shocked to see a sphere that seems to have come from the Holy Grail. His mother asks if it could be fake, but Raelsa says it's far too old. With this, they can completely turn things around. A few days later, the priests arrive. Nellie says that boy won't get away with this, and mocks Dullan for believing in the Holy King's power. That's how this ends, just because he believed in him. Dullan says he's making a huge mistake, but the priest insists he's right, already dreaming about becoming high priest. The elder asks if what the matriarch said earlier is true. She says yes and thanks him for letting Vincent take part. If Vincent fails, she'll kill him herself. The elder says she really believes in Vincent. He thinks all this talk is pointless and would rather see what Vin does when the moment comes. The matriarch welcomes them in and says the meeting may take a while. Once everyone is seated, the priest starts mourning the incident and demands an official answer from the elders. The elder smiles, thinking he can pressure the council through the Temple of Gaia, but then he notices Vincent laughing. He points at him and yells, asking what's so funny, when all of this is his fault. Vincent rises, still laughing, and says that's exactly it. Neliak left the Lady of Eating out of the discussion. Everyone is stunned, and the priest snaps that if Vincent can't clear his name, he should give up his life. Vincent says in that case, he'll begin properly. He introduces himself and lifts a crystal that holds a message from the Holy King, revealing the king's final words. The priest can't believe it. Vincent says now the real meeting can begin. Elsewhere, a young woman is carrying swords when a man asks if this is Hansen's workshop. She asks if he wants to place an order, but the boy, a reporter, only wants to know if Hansen really made the Red Lotus. Annoyed, she tells him to stop showing up. He's getting in the way of her work. Hansen scolds Millie, asking if she's trying to chase customers away, because they'll have none left if she keeps it up. She quickly tries to defend herself, while the boy gets excited, seeing a muscular dwarf in person, and begs Hansen for an interview. Hansen comes back, blaming all this chaos on Vincent, as the reporter keeps pleading. Still, thanks to Vincent, people are calling him a master again, but Vin never came back. Not a single word since he took the transmission crystal. Back at the trial, everyone is shocked to see the king's message saying the tomb collapsed because the mission was complete. Even Vincent didn't expect the crystal to be used like this. The priest explodes, claiming the message is fake and meant to cover Vincent's crimes. But the other elders say a mana crystal can't be altered. Vincent says there's still more to show and reveals the Holy Grail. The elder is stunned at once, but the priest scoffs, doubting that an old cup could be the real Holy Grail. Vincent says Merlin of the Yellow Dragon unit swore his life on it being real. The priest is shaken by Merlin's involvement, and Dullan adds that he also witnessed it and stakes his life as well. The priest is furious that Dullan, one of theirs, is backing Vincent. Then the matriarch offers Elder Delbecq a serious wager. A mother should answer for her son, so she coldly bets her right arm that Vincent is telling the truth. The elder starts trembling and asks her to put up her left arm instead. He realizes he can't back down now and stakes his own arm. Vincent says his life was already on the line the moment he walked in. He steps toward the priest and points out that he's the only one who hasn't bet anything. So Vincent tells him to offer something equal to the lives already at stake. Under all that pressure, the priest convinces himself it can't be the Holy Grail and wagers his life too. The other priests copy him and bet their lives as well. Vincent then tells Dullan to begin. Dullan touches the Grail and draws in its power, leaving everyone speechless. It proves the Holy Grail can absorb divine power and turn it into holy water. Vincent asks if the priest will now admit the Holy Grail is real. The man goes stiff and says nothing, but another priest beside him claims he still won't accept it, calling it a trick. But before he can finish, his head is cut off. The priest stares at blood splashing in front of him, then realizes his own head is separating from his body along with the other priests. The elder asks what this means, and then his arm is sliced off too, making him scream in agony. The matriarch, as Lady Edinka, declares that her son's honor has been restored. Everyone is left frozen in shock. Vincent, who didn't even notice her striking, finally looks at the woman known as the Giant of Edinka. The whole hall goes quiet when Vincent asks if he may speak and says he wants to keep them alive. With the Holy Grail and the high priests, they can still be saved. His mother asks why. Vincent says he doesn't want to stay a child sheltered by her. He wants to prove his own honor. She allows it. Vincent tells Dullan to move, and Dolan immediately orders everyone to help, fast. The priests begin pouring their power into the Holy Grail. Julian says everything has gone just as planned so far and wants to see Vincent's next move. When the priest regains consciousness, he wonders how he was brought back. Dolan sets the Grail on the table and says it's good to see him alive again, then tells the elder to come over so his arm can be restored. But Vincent cuts in and says the elder won't be getting his arm back. The elder demands to know why. Vincent says he's such an honorable martial artist that surely he wouldn't want the arm he bet so boldly returned, otherwise that honor would mean nothing. The elder, furious and groaning, admits the lost arm as proof Vincent spoke the truth. Vincent mocks him, saying he hopes to be that brave someday. Still in pain, the elder mutters that one day he will. The matriarch asks the priest if everything is settled now. Shaking, he admits Vincent is innocent and says they will no longer demand compensation. He quickly tries to leave with the others, thinking they can still get out before losing anything else, but Vincent stops them, saying there's still unfinished business. He shows the crystal and explains that the emperor gave this task to the Holy King, yet the temple ignored it and left it unsolved. Vincent, on the other hand, searched the tomb and earned the king's gratitude, so as descendants of that king, they should have something to say. The priest thanks him for what he did in the tomb and bows, and the others follow. Julian says that is the highest sign of respect in Gaia, but as the door opens, the priest quietly swears revenge, and suddenly reporters rush in. They see the priests kneeling and start taking pictures at once. The priest yells at them to stop, and the elder tries to call the guards. He refuses to let Vincent gain even more from this, and quotes a law saying the meeting can't be published. Vincent explains that anything bringing honor and profit to the Edinka can be reported. He just forgot that last part, and no matter how they spin it, this is clearly good for the Edinka. A few days later, news spreads that powerful figures bowed to a young boy. The temple tried to win and failed. Dolan asks if it's really right to hand over the Holy Grail. Vincent says he inherited the king's power, so no one fits better, and since he'll need divine power ahead, he wants the Grail with someone he can trust. Dolan realizes there's no arguing with that. He clenches his fists and admits the temple is rotten right now, and if he stays there, he might end up using the Holy Grail the wrong way. Then he asks if Vincent truly trusts him. Vincent does. After all, Dolan is the same priest who gave him the Miracle Stone, and Vincent believes he'll use the Grail for good. Dolan asks him to trust him on this, then tells Vincent not to push himself too hard. Suddenly, Realsa opens the door and says he should get ready. His mother wants dinner with him. Vincent brightens right away. At dinner, the matriarch asks if he's returning to the fortress. He says he's still a cadet, so he has to go back. Julian finds the dinner strange, since his mother never invites anyone to eat with her, and her stare still scares him. Vincent asks if he still gets nervous around her. Julian says he used to be extra careful so she wouldn't realize he was pretending to be useless. Vincent says there's no reason to be nervous after everything they accomplished. His mother says she wants to give him a reward. He brought great benefit to the Edinka, so she acknowledges his achievements and asks what he wants. Vincent asks for a little time to think. The matriarch sees that as payback for not handling everything herself. When he decides, he asks to take the cadet advancement exam. His mother says he's underestimating her power. She could make him a cadet of any rank she wanted. But Vincent is still satisfied with this. She asks why. He says it's the proper way. The exam is very competitive, and it only happens twice a year. If he used her influence, he'd be taking someone else's spot. He wants to rise by his own effort. The matriarch says that choice may be slower, but it will take him much farther. She once believed in things like that too, but age and duty changed her, and now she usually chooses the fastest path. She says he'll receive a mission that counts as his advancement exam, and she'll be cheering for him. Vincent thanks her. By his carriage, his mother watches him leave and tells Realsa to prepare things, because she'll write the mission herself. Realsa asks what the mission will be. The matriarch says he's going to melt him. Realsa asks if that's the city ruled by the Vire family, the place overflowing with money for no clear reason, maybe because they're stealing from the people. She asks if Vincent will be sent to strike them, but the matriarch says no, that would be too much for him. His mission is to escort the priest of Gaia being sent there. Realsa questions that since he humiliated the temple and now has to protect one of them. The head of the Vire family is greedy and might even bribe that priest to kill Vincent. The matriarch agrees he'll be in danger and remembers that Vincent always chooses the right path. It's risky, but that's why it's called an exam. Back at the academy, the director welcomes him and congratulates him for achieving something amazing enough to make her emotional. Vincent says she seems really happy. She says that's because he took care of Tilavan, and she's glad to be rid of that scumbag. Vincent figures the director never liked him much. She says Tilavan even tried to make her his concubine. Then she's called away. When she returns, she gives Vincent his mission and says he leaves in 3 days. Vincent asks where he's headed. Barjan tells him it's Maltum, the southernmost city. Vincent recognizes the name right away. Roxa hears that and asks to come along. She says Maltum is known for its barrier, and even though it borders Helheim, there are no wars or tribute records, just lots of guesses about why. In Vincent's memories, those two families were always tied together. Since Helheim is his mother's side, he knows this mission serves her plans too. Roxa keeps sharing facts and Vincent realizes she really loves history. She blushes, embarrassed, then admits she wants to be a historian. Vincent barely reacts, so she asks if that sounds weird. He says it's a good dream, but wonders why she joined the academy. Roxa explains historians don't earn much, and knowing how to fight matters. She adds that she could be useful on this mission too. Then the others burst in. They heard about the mission and want to join. Vincent agrees and says they'll all go together. Everyone cheers, and Julian says they've got plenty of help now. Vincent says that's not the real reason they're coming. That leaves Julian puzzled. Vincent tells him to look at their eyes. They genuinely want to support him. With that settled, only one person is left. Raven lights up when Vincent says he'll duel him if he joins the mission. They shake on it with Raiden agreeing too, and of course his savior Serkon is coming as well. Julian says Vincent has gotten more resourceful, maybe thanks to him. Raven then says Serkon has something to tell Vincent. Later in the forest, Vincent is stopped by countless threads. He asks what this is supposed to mean. Serkon apologizes, saying he didn't mean to scare him. Vincent keeps a hand on his sword, and Serkon asks why he still hasn't drawn it. Vincent says he doesn't sense killing intent, so there's no need. That surprises Serkon. He's impressed by Vincent. Vincent asks about the technique. Serkon explains it's a barrier that protects both what's inside and outside. Julian calls it the Bloodthirsty King's territory, and Vincent repeats that to Serkon. Serkon says it's perfect for assassins and for private talks. Vincent asks what he wants to talk about. Serkon takes a moment, then says, very few people have ever escaped this technique. Only one managed it. Merlin Falker, a genius who, despite the age gap, completely crushed his skill. Serkon's face was cut, and the whole thing ended in failure. Later, after studying mana control, he managed to leave only a scar behind. But after he became a butler 15 years ago, he lost contact with Merlin. That shocks both Vincent and Julian, and they ask his age. Serkon says he's around Vincent's father's age. Then he reveals his real face and the scar. Julian is stunned by the reversal technique and says that's how Serkon fooled his enemies. Serkon asks if Vincent knows why he's showing him this. Vincent says no, he doesn't get any of this conversation. Serkon starts with one reason: Vincent saved Raven from the explosion. Second, he hopes Vincent is worthy of sharing Raven's dream. Vincent still doesn't understand. Then he thinks of Raven pushing himself through brutal training. Serkon once told him to stop because of the cold, but Raven said he had already lost twice. First when Vincent saved everyone from the explosion, then again against the Chimera. Both times he could only watch. He grips his spear tightly and says having a stronger rival is amazing. He wants to grow stronger with Vincent as the goal. Serkon is grateful because Vincent can push Raven even higher, so he tells Vincent to keep getting stronger for Raven's sake. But if Vincent ever turns pathetic, Serkon says he'll kill him. Vincent calls that a pretty scary warning. Then he asks what that technique has to do with any of this. Serkon says he made it to build a body that could endure Merlin's lightning. It doesn't just change appearance, it reshapes mana circuits, muscles, and bones. He knows Vincent has been holding back because of his body. Since Vincent dying would be a problem, Serkon offers to teach him the method. Vincent is thrilled and accepts. Julian gets excited too, saying this could stabilize the exoskeleton even more and give Vincent another defense besides divine power. Serkon asks for one promise. Vincent says he won't promise to stay Raven's goal forever, but he does promise that one day he'll surpass the Saiyans. Serkon decides that's more than enough. As Vincent meditates, Serkon focuses his mana into him. 3 days pass, and Vargan gives a report. With everyone ready, he says the exam is happening at Dolan's request. Lady Edenka approved it as an advancement exam, and he hopes they all do their best. As for the results, Serkon reminds them the director handles that, so they'll find out later. After saluting with absolute glory, they leave in carriages through the snow. Julian says that even with teleport gates, the trip will still take days, and Vincent notes that in his time, journeys like this took years. Julian says that even with teleportation portals, it'll still take a few days, and Vincent says people used to spend years traveling. By the 4th day, they reach the 5th portal. There, a boy starts shouting about the high price. The woman insists that's the normal rate. He yells that they're cadets from the Crimson Tower traveling on duty. The woman asks what that even is, which shocks him. He quickly adds that the young masters of the Edonka and Vargan families are with them. She says if they're so important, they can pay even more. Wilson starts yelling that he came from the slums, but Vincent stops him. He tells Wilson not to lose his temper over things like this, or he should head back to the fortress. The farther they get from Ajka land, the worse the treatment becomes. Vincent realizes this trip won't be easy. On the 6th day, they travel down a narrow road. Roxa tells Vincent to look. She points out Maltum's barrier, built 200 years ago during the maritime battle. She says it protected the people from pirates. Vincent asks if pirates are still around, and she says yes, but he doubts that story and asks Julian to inspect the barrier. The coastal city has lived behind that wall for 2 centuries, yet people still talk about weak security, pirates, and hunger crushing the citizens. As they move through the city, they find people starving and desperate. Raven and Serkon point out that hunger is far worse than people claim. The group wonders where to go since no guide was sent. Roxa guesses it might be because the Edenka have little influence in the south. Vincent finds that odd since the Halim are Edenka's only in-laws there. With Maltum so close to their border, their name should carry weight. So Vincent decides to visit the temple priests. At Gaia's temple in the city, they meet a priest named Lisane. When they bring up the mission, he tells them to leave for everyone's good. With a strange look, he claims the city is peaceful and doesn't need guards. Raven complains about how long they traveled, but the priest shuts the doors on them. Everyone is stunned that he brushed them off. Roxa asks what his problem is, while Vincent asks whether Julian finished checking above. Trembling and worn out, Julian finally returns. The distance weakened his powers, leaving him exhausted. Vincent asks about the barrier's condition. Julian says it has no damage at all. No spell marks, nothing. So the pirate stories were probably made up. Vincent realizes something else is going on, then a huge explosion hits. People panic at once, thinking pirates are attacking. Bombs start falling all around. Vincent asks if it really is pirates, but Julian says no, there isn't a single ship on the horizon. The priest suddenly throws open the doors and tells everyone to take shelter inside. Citizens rush in, greeting him warmly. Vincent notices how calm the priest is. Remembering his earlier words, he realizes the man seems sure no one inside is in danger, even during these attacks. That means he knows the raid is fake. Then Vincent remembers a place the priest mentioned earlier. Elsewhere, Merlin looks out over the land from a tower. Vincent asks what he's thinking. Noticing how much Merlin has recovered, Merlin says he once swore to fulfill his duty at the king's tomb because he thought it was his destiny. But Vincent changed all of that. After that, Merlin realized he had never thought about life beyond that duty, so he didn't know what to do next. Vincent says his own family also forced him into a hard place, and a child helped him through it. That let him face what he truly wanted. Merlin asks who the child was, and Sirkin quickly says it was Vincent. If Vincent changed Merlin's fate, Sirkin says maybe he can also help him find his answer. The next day, the group reaches a camp for the homeless. Two men stop them there, saying the land belongs to the Vire family. Vincent says they're from the Crimson Tower, but the man replies that without a proper reason, no outside family can enter. Then he points beside him and says that's exactly his reason. The priest snaps that he already said guards weren't needed. Vincent says he's just following orders, but the priest keeps telling them to leave. Vincent realizes the man is stubborn, so he pulls out his level 2 priest token and says he wants to inspect the place. The priest slaps it away and orders him to leave again. By ignoring church rank like that, Vincent knows there's definitely something hidden here. Suddenly Raven dashes past everyone and throws open the door, shouting that there are tons of boxes inside. The guards are baffled, since they were watching the whole time. When Raiden moves to inspect one, a large man grabs him, warning him not to touch the boxes. Sirkin puts the man down in seconds. Vincent says if the man gets hurt, they'll all have problems. He explains they're the priest's guards, here for an inspection, and if anything looks wrong, they can report issues with the Vire family facility. That makes the men nervous. While the priest curses under his breath, the big man finally says fine. If that's the reason, then as long as they're with the priest, it's allowed. He introduces himself as Edmund, the manager. He tells them to follow him and look around. Vincent thanks him for cooperating. Edmund says there's not much to see, and the place is peaceful, which immediately catches Vincent's attention. The others ask what's in the boxes. The priest says they're all filled with magic stones, materials used to make magic crystals. He adds that the homeless get food and shelter in return for refining them. Stones, and the priests treat the workers' injuries since refining them is dangerous. Roxa asks how homeless people can handle work that normally only mages can do. The manager says it's possible because of a Vire family method, though he doesn't know the details. His friends add that this is why the family makes so much money. Those stones sell for a lot. Soon they reach the work area where people are breaking down minerals. The manager claims he's helping them as much as he can so they can stand on their own someday. Then he leads them to the final stop. It's the roof overlooking the barrier. Vincent asks about the buildings nearby. The man says they're for storing and maintaining the stones, but Vincent can tell that excuse is weak. Then the priest shows up and tells them to head back and rest. That night, Vincent watches those buildings. In the forest, lights reveal people being moved like slaves. The captors rush them along before sunrise. Then we're introduced to Helio, a martial artist from the Vire family. One man begs to be let go, saying he isn't homeless. He says the priest put him there and reminds them he has a daughter. Helio knees him, dropping him to the ground. Then he asks where the man's house is, saying he'll bring the daughter too. The man breaks down crying on the floor. Helio warns everyone not to even think about escaping. A boy with lifeless eyes keeps mumbling that he wants to go home, but suddenly he's caught. When they arrive, Helk says the real work starts here. He forces them inside, warning they'll be beaten if they resist. Then he asks for the count, and his partner says there were 10. Helk counts them himself and finds only 9. He yells that one got away. Just then someone comes out of the forest, claiming he fell and got lost. It's Vincent in disguise, wearing a nasty look now that he's finally caught up. 2 hours earlier, the group had already figured out they were lying, since magic stones can't be mined like that. The girl guesses the homeless camps are hiding something. The other two searched inside and found the whole facility suspiciously clean. Vincent is sure they still missed something. He brings up the mountain warehouse and grows more suspicious of Edmund. His senses were too sharp for a mere manager. Those were a killer's eyes, just like during the ambush. He quickly decides his mother sent him for a reason. Something is hidden there, and tonight he'll sneak in alone and expose it. Raven reminds him they'll get suspicious if he's missing. Vincent then looks at Sirkun, already thinking of a fix. He asks if Sirkun can use his reversal technique to turn into someone smaller. Not long after, Sirkun is uneasily disguised as Vincent. Meanwhile, the others stay in the church during a sermon. The priest smiles, thinking everything is under control. Raven asks if Sirkun is alright since he looks nervous. The girl tells him to act more like an elder and speak the way Vincent does. He sighs, admitting his young master saw through him again. Then we cut to a filthy dark cell. A mercenary throws Vincent inside in a rage. He hits the floor hard. The guard curses him for being a hassle, saying he thought he'd lost one of them. After shoving the boy in, he orders them to stay quiet. Julian trembles in fear, but Vincent says he's used to places like this, so it isn't that bad. Suddenly, a blue and purple mana circle appears, and a magic mole pops out. It asks if he's alright. Vincent says he's fine. He got inside without being caught, and now he needs to gather all the information he can. A man suddenly screams for help, shaking the bars and begging to be freed because he isn't homeless. It's the same man from earlier, now crying as he gives the full address of his home, begging them to at least let him feed his daughter. The mercenary walks in and orders him up, holding a pill with a creepy smile. He says it's time to eat. Vincent quickly senses something is wrong with it. The man asks what he's waiting for and tries to force the pill into his mouth. Julian panics and warns Vincent not to eat it since they don't know what's in it. Vincent says the fastest way to learn is to test it himself, and swallows it. Julian stares in shock, asking what kind of idiot would do that, while the man orders the rest of the pills given to the prisoners. Then he sees an aura rising from Vincent. Vincent slips out of his shackles using a new technique so his body won't absorb the pill. With a hand on his chest, he explains that he can use lightning to analyze what's inside. The cell window glows from his power. Light gathers in his hands. Refined, concentrated mana. Julian explains that if normal people who aren't martial artists take this, the mana builds up in their hearts until it hits the limit and explodes. It's dangerous even for martial artists. Vincent still can't figure out why they're kidnapping people and making them take it. But for someone like him, who can store mana in his heart, it could be a strong supplement. A few days later, the prisoners line up and enter the tower. Vincent thinks it's strange they've never brought anyone here before. The mercenary says they've reached the destination. He points at a door leaking black and red energy and orders them to go in one at a time. The first prisoner steps forward, shaking with fear. Then the others follow with their heads lowered, already hopeless. The mercenary grumbles, annoyed by so many failures. Soon the second-to-last prisoner steps up. The old man, terrified, he walks to the doorway and crosses over. Inside, he keeps moving forward. He wonders what this place is, as creatures with red eyes surround him. Their sharp teeth and dark aura close in, and soon that power starts eating away at him as he screams in pain. The mercenary laughs, glad at least one finally worked. As the man breaks down completely, he keeps repeating his address and saying he'll be home to see his daughter soon. Julian and Vincent grow tense. Vincent suddenly understands and recalls what he knows. It's a contract with the evil spirit of Davin. The old man screams even louder, like he's about to die. Vincent can't believe a normal person could make a deal with an evil spirit. Then he remembers the pills and why they were packed with mana. All at once, chains appear and wrap around the man's neck and arms. The mercenary says the manager will be happy. One of them succeeded, and the chained man now looks possessed. Then a guard orders Vincent to go in. The mercenary smirks, hoping for another success. He shoves Vincent toward the door. The moment he steps inside, Vincent realizes he's in danger. As mana surges at him, once everything turns pitch black, he drops the disguise and returns to normal. He realizes the spirit is trying to steal his heart by using his darkest memories. He sees his family looking down on him from the moment he was born, with his father and mother looming over him like they'll seize him. Then he's back in a cell, thinking they never loved him, not even at the end. Charging lightning, he apologizes to his parents. As he fires, he says he won't be taken. A voice screams his old name, but he doesn't move. The mercenary gets suspicious and goes to see why Vincent has gone still, when lightning bursts from Vincent's eyes, setting off a huge blast that tears apart everything around him. People in the mountains see it and start wondering if pirates attacked. The priest is horrified because he knows what happens there. Sirkun is just stunned by Vincent, who has blown apart nearly half the tower. The mercenary rises through the smoke and says he knew Vincent was suspicious all along. He orders everyone still standing to capture him at once. Vincent instantly moves behind him, sword already drawn and charged with mana. The mercenary turns and sees the strike coming. Vincent fires a strong bolt upward and the mercenary blocks it. He says a nobody like Vincent shouldn't even try that. But then his sword snaps in two. Vincent follows with a fast, clean strike. The man screams in pain as Vincent says that as both a martial artist and a human, he can't ignore what they've done, then drops his disguise. Two henchmen rush him from behind, calling him insolent, but Vincent vanishes into a blue mist with snow. They freeze, confused by his sudden disappearance. They don't get time to think. Vincent cuts both down at once. The mercenary clutches his wounded arm and says the bleeding won't stop. Vincent drives his sword into the ground beside him. He says the blade carries lightning so the wound won't close, and warns him to call a priest fast, or he'll lose the arm for good. The mercenary grabs a stone and calls for backup, summoning priests and soldiers. Vincent is satisfied because once the priests arrive, the cadets will come too, just like he planned. As he heads deeper into the tower, he calls for Julian and says their whole conspiracy is about to be exposed. Parts of the tower still seem untouched, until another blast sends up dust and flying stone. Vincent tears through the place with a guard already down at his feet. Vincent shouts that an intruder is here, and that he's just a brat. Vincent lands as another soldier goes flying behind him. The guards charge, trying to stop him from reaching the production area. His aura turns gold, and he uses Absolute Slash in an alternate form. With glowing eyes, he activates the Dwarf King and blasts apart a huge section of the wall. Other guards stare, wondering if everyone else already fell. Their eyes widen, but lightning soon surrounds them as Vincent forms a giant electric figure and charges up. Then he unleashes giant thunderstorm, wiping out all the soldiers there in one massive electric blast that even tears up the floor. It crashes down, lightning still snapping through the air. Vincent figures those were the last martial artists, and that he burned too much mana. As he starts looking for proof, a red knife flies at him. He catches it in time and dodges as it slices past. A clown-like man steps from the shadows, draws another blade, and says Vincent got greedy. Julian warns him, this is Jaster Lancerto, a 7-star fighter from Vyra. Holding 5 knives, the clown mocks the useless young master and asks what kind of dance he'll show. Julian adds that Jaster is one of the 5 strongest in the Vyra family. Jaster talks about the gap between them, but Vincent can already tell this man is different. Compared to Rowlessa and Sirkin, this 7-star is far weaker. Vincent points his sword at him and says it out loud. Jaster freezes for a second, then lunges with his knives. He throws a storm of blades, asking if Vincent will keep talking once he's dying. The knives tear up the ground. Through the smoke, Jaster spots Vincent's hair and laughs, bragging that this power gap is absolute and talent means nothing. Then Vincent speaks right beside him, arms folded, saying the mask looks even uglier up close. Jaster is stunned and realizes the one who blocked his attack below was Sirkin, using threads to hold the knives. Vincent reminds him, he said he was weak compared to other 7-stars. Now shaken, Jaster wonders how there can be 2 of them. Sirkin rushes in with a dark aura, threads whipping forward. Jaster is cut down before he understands what happened, while Vincent watches his body hit the ground. Sirkin asks if everything went the way Vincent planned. Changing back, Vincent says Sirkin's arrival, and Jaster showing up too, worked out perfectly. He guessed the mercenaries had backup plans after Sirkin showed his strength in the abandoned fields, and knew Raven wouldn't ignore this kind of evil. Raven arrives, demanding to know where those bastards are. Vincent says they're gone now and they need to search the lower floors. Sirkin sighs, realizing he got used again. Dropping down, he says they should check because he wants to know what they were hiding in the shadows of Meltem. After dealing with the soldiers, they find a room full of books. Vincent guides the slaves and asks what happened here, since this was where magic stones were made. Shaking, an old man says the priests kidnapped him and forced him to make those stones. He says the Dark Door was used to make evil contracts with people who had mana talent, and the survivors were sent to the mines. Vincent listens in disgust and clenches his fists. The temple and the Marshall family who were supposed to protect people caused all this suffering. With rage rising, he wonders where the city's justice went. Sirkin asks how the stones were made. The old man points to a device like a crystal ball and says that tool uses dark magic to let the stones absorb mana. Vincent stares at it, clearly shaken by everything, then puts his hand on it. Dark energy reacts at once and starts spreading. Julian jumps and asks what he's doing. As the mana wraps around him, Vincent thinks that since he survived the door and swallowed the pills, he can handle this too. The mana condenses into a crystal, and soon he's holding a large glowing stone. He asks Julian if that stone can store the information. Julian says yes, it's perfect proof. Vincent tosses it up, and blue lightning bursts from it. Back on the surface with the tower ruined, the priests are healing wounded soldiers outside when Luzine demands to know how they lost to one boy. Then he sees something ahead and starts trembling. The heroes are standing there, and Vincent looks furious. The priests shout, asking why he attacked their facility, until one gets slapped across the face. Vincent asks if they feel no shame getting rich off innocent lives. With cold fury, he says they'll all be sent to the Jeremiel Tower of Judgment, and this place is finished. A voice in the purple mist says that would be a problem. Sirkin and Raven notice the air around them feels wrong. The manager appears and says his plan is only beginning. Vincent glares at him with killing intent. White hands push out of the manager's mouth. Vincent tenses at once. The man's body splits apart, and a pale long-haired being crawls out. He says he should introduce himself properly. In the purple haze, he names himself Edmund, a first-class strategist of the Nightmare. Everyone freezes as the dark mist and aura swallow the area. He asks if they know what Nightmare is. Julian doesn't, but guesses it's some secret group. Then Julian realizes the truth. If Edmund revealed himself, he probably plans to kill everyone here. The priest and guard beg him to save them. Instead, Edmund casts a strange spell, and a giant purple mana serpent appears. The priest is too terrified to even move. As the serpent eats them both, Edmund calmly says they did well. Furious, Vincent points his sword at Edmund and demands to know what Nightmare wants. Edmund looks at Vincent, unsure for a moment, then says their goal is, in his view, a better world. Skeletal hands start pushing out of the ground. Vincent realizes they're undead, and wonders if these are the civilians who died here. more skeletons rise beside the serpent, all staring at them. Edmund tells the king of assassins and the heirs of great families to get ready. They're about to become his puppets. The skeletons rush in, screaming, but Vincent's greatsword cuts them apart. The others join in and quickly realize these undead aren't very strong. Then the Suman director appears, asking if anyone needs help, and her whip smashes through several skeletons. One look at that attack, and everyone knows who it is. She says Varjan kept bothering her until she came to help with this dangerous mission. Since this is now an emergency, she stepped in, and Vincent is surprised to see her. Smiling, the director asks Edmund what he'll do now that his corpses are gone. Edmund only laughs. The next second, a huge pressure pours off him and the serpent. She turns in surprise as people start screaming to run. The tower is collapsing. A giant hand slams into the ground and shatters it on contact. Even the heroes stare in fear at its size. Edmund reminds them there was still the corpse of a powerful 7-star there, the clown. Then the giant headless body appears, carrying its own head like a sack. Sirkin recognizes Jaster. The director tightens her grip and shouts for everyone not to panic. She charges in, whipping forward, saying most undead are useless once the necromancer dies. Her whip wraps around Edmund, but he only grins back at her. That smile chills Julian. He says Edmund is probably a lich. The director snarls that she'll rip him apart. Vincent warns her not to. He's a lich. She's stunned by that. A lich can't be killed unless its phylactery is destroyed. Tear it apart and you only make it stronger and widen its attacks. Behind them, the clown raises its hand to strike and smashes down, blowing apart a huge area. Sirkin jumps to shield Raven while Vincent and the director dive away. Even then, the blast keeps surging forward, tearing through everything. When the smoke clears, they've barely escaped. Edmund says his collection just gained another powerful soldier, and as he strokes the serpent, he thanks them in advance for becoming his nightmare troops. The serpent lunges at them, and they dodge again. Sirkin says revived martial artists can become even stronger under a necromancer than they were alive. The director mutters that using a 7-star like that feels like cheating. Sirkin can tell the fight is turning bad. She stops on a branch, and he calls out to her. He says that as the Vartican family's butler, his duty is to protect his young master first, no matter what. She gets the message. He means he'll run if he has to, and thinks he's a bastard. The director says she'll leave Vincent with him so they can flee too, but Vincent refuses. He says they'll beat the nightmare here and leave with their heads high. The director looks surprised and says he's starting to sound like Varjan, which confuses him. She says they're alike because they both wear that strange smile, and neither seems to know how weird it looks. Then she asks if he actually has a way to beat Edmund. Before he answers, Edmund summons 3 serpents and says their goodbye is taking too long. Vincent dodges the serpents and says he's done all he can as a cadet, while sprinting along one giant body. He leaps up, raising his sword for a huge strike that makes Edmund freeze for a moment. With battle lust in his eyes, Vincent tells him not to forget who the 7th son of the Edenka is, but Edmund blocks the attack. He adds that he was never the real target. Then ropes and whips suddenly lock the nightmare in place. 2 allies appear on both sides of the monster to back him up. They jump in and drag Vincent away. He curses at them and demands to know where they're taking him. Then a bright beam of light hits his face. Raven is above them, ready with his spear technique. He dives down and drives the attack into the lich's chest. The blow launches Edmund into the air and smashes the ground hard. Raven grins and asks how that hit felt, but his butler warns that it isn't over. As Edmund slowly gets back up, purple aura leaks from him as he recognizes who he's facing. 2 7-star fighters and a family heir stand ready, but he mocks them, saying they can only stall him for a few seconds. Still smiling, he releases more aura and asks if they're crazy enough to think they can kill him. The director says they don't have many options. Vincent told them they'd all survive, so they chose to trust him. Sirkin adds that the young master is good at making people believe in him. The nightmare sneers that they're holding on to false hope, because Vincent is probably already dead. Soon the clown starts spinning its head and throwing heavy attacks. Even so, it can't land a hit on Vincent. Under pressure, Vincent calls out to Julian, asking if he's ready. Julian tells him he needs a little more time. Suddenly the clown's giant hand appears behind him and clips his arm. Vincent drops with his arm badly hurt and the clown laughs below him, ready to devour him. Pinned down, Vincent realizes the clown's head moves on its own. Then knives shoot from its mouth straight at him. Vincent blocks them and says he just has to hold out until Julian finishes. He vows to end the clown soon and raises his greatsword wrapped in purple aura. He swings and slashes the clown's head, but to his shock it doesn't leave even a mark. The clown attacks again and knocks him into the air. Vincent realizes he can't recover his balance, and if this keeps up, he's dead. The clown comes in with another head strike, closing in fast on Vincent. Raven notices the huge blast and worries about his friend, but he reminds himself to trust Vincent and stay focused on the enemy in front of him. The nightmare calls out to Raven, and Raven rushes him, calling him a zombie. The clown puts its head back in place at once. With its head restored, it mocks Vincent as a foolish young master. Everything around them is basically wrecked. Vincent is still standing only because his sword is planted in the ground. The clown jumps at him and raises its hand to strike, when it is suddenly cut off. The jester looks over and sees golden aura inside the wound. Vincent says it worked. Julian's divine power was poured into his sword. now glowing gold with chains. It reveals the Adenka chain art, the divine power of chains. Vincent remembers training with Merlin, who said chain enchantment is one of the main Adenka sword styles. Merlin also taught that there are 7 styles, just heavy, fast, and finally chain. Compared to the others, chain art isn't flashy. Merlin draws his sword and shows lightning running through the chains on the blade. That lets the user combine the power of the body with the power of the sword. It's said to be the best style for someone with many techniques because it grows stronger as they gain more abilities. Vincent smiles, thinking Aslan must have left behind the perfect style for him. The clown can't understand how martial arts and divine power are being mixed like this. Vincent tells him he should feel honored to be purified by the king's heavenly power. He focuses on merging Falker fencing, divine power, and the art of chains. Then he triggers divine power ascension and unleashes a long-range slash of golden mana. Seeing that power rush toward him, the clown can't believe anyone could wield it. A huge part of its body is blown away by the golden strike. The flash is bright enough to be seen across the city, and the evil clown crashes down defeated. Meanwhile, the spearman says the zombie's aura is gone. The assassin admits young Master Vincent is starting to scare him. The director says that's exactly what you'd expect from Vargenia. The necromancer is thrown into confusion, wondering if even a 7-star body really lost. Vincent walks up and says this is the end of his ambition. He tells him it'd be better to surrender. Edmund starts to realize how trapped he is. He remembers planning for 20 years to destroy the proud Edencause. Instead, everything was ruined by a 17-year-old boy. Dark energy pours from him as he rages and swears he won't forgive Vincent. The force causes a tremor that spreads through the whole city. Julian and Vincent are shaken when they realize all of Meltem is trembling. The necromancer declares that the city belongs to him, and if his plan failed, he'll destroy everyone with it. But then a voice cuts in. Someone holding a strange egg says it's pointless. That alone startles the necromancer just as he's about to strike back. The man calls him pathetic for showing such an ugly side just because his plan fell apart. He says the title of strategist was clearly too much for him. Then the speaker steps forward, a young man with red eyes. His appearance may look calm, but Edmund is terrified of him. Both the director and the assassin are stunned by his arrival. The bodyguard seems to know him, and Julian warns that the man is holding something. It's the Lich's core, most likely Edmund's phylactery. Desperate, the necromancer tries to bargain, begging for one more chance. The man just tells him to shut up, and crushes the core in one hand. Edmund's body immediately starts to crack while he screams for mercy. Begging not to die, he crumbles into small stones. Raven is stunned to see him shatter like that. The director asks the second Vargan what he makes of all this. He says the man they fought was only a pawn in this game. Then the king of assassins asks why he's here. The mysterious man replies that it's good to see him, making the young master wonder if they know each other. Sirkin explains that the young man is Daimar Heli, heir to the Heli family. Then countless guards start to pour in and surround the whole group, forcing the protagonist to get ready. He remarks that this is a lot of guards for an uncle-nephew reunion. Julian explains, these are Helium family martial artists, and wonders how they arrived so fast in Vyre territory. Vincent recalls what the waifu told him that even though the lands bordered Helium territory, there had never been trouble. He also remembers his mother saying she was too old to chase this stuff, and only wanted the easiest path. Vincent realizes the Helium family was behind everything. His uncle is impressed he figured it out that fast. The protagonist wonders if his mother's real goal was to expose the dark side of their family to the world. The man says that if he's reached that conclusion, he should step back. Vincent asks how that could possibly be reasonable. He saw a father of a 2-year-old child dragged in to be nearly sacrificed. Furious, he demands to know how anyone could call that reasonable. His uncle just watches him with a cold face and walks closer, saying he isn't here to debate right and wrong. If Finn wants no one else to die, then he should forget everything that happened. The knights prepare themselves, and the spearman asks if they're picking a fight, but the protagonist stays calm and says he got what he needed as a cadet. Now he is Vincent Edenka of the Edenka family, and that makes him their son too. After that, everyone feels a powerful aura bearing down on them. As someone approaches, the protagonist questions whether his words were true. Then it becomes clear he's talking to his mother, who arrives furious. As she walks toward her son, the guards are shocked. It's the great Versa. Even her brother asks why she's here. With a threatening stare, she praises her son for noticing her. Vincent says he was sure once Damien showed up, since she wants to replace the current Helium head. His uncle warns that stopping him would be a huge mistake. The magic stones are hard to make, and he'll use them as the Helium family's power source. She fires back that the family is also a martial clan, and he's using dark magic to excuse his hunger for power. He tries to pin it all on the dead necromancer, and tells her not to worry about it. Annoyed, she says it's been a long time since they met, so maybe he forgot her power. She releases her aura, opens her eyes of truth, and asks how he dares lie in front of her. The sight leaves Vincent and Julian wide-eyed. Even the man stares at his sister and remembers when they were young. Those eyes look down on everything, always one step ahead, almost pitying whoever faced her. They're the eyes he hates most, and he gets ready to attack. She doesn't move as the strike comes at her. Then a beam of light tears through his arm. In his eyes, we see who fired it. The light swells into a massive blast, that rips through him and explodes behind him like a bomb. Panicking, the man apologizes and says he lost control for a moment. He freezes when he realizes the one standing before him is the Anica patriarch. Vincent is shaken. One attack cleared the dark sky. That makes sense. This man is Aslan's descendant and the father of his current body. He is the living power of the Anica family. Like a loyal hound, the patriarch asks his wife what she wants him to do. Blood drips from the man's arm onto the ground. He looks desperate, and his sister thinks he really is pathetic. Even after all he's done, it still hurts to see him like this. She steps forward, ready to fix the Heleme's mistakes. Then she tells her brother he will answer for everything that happened here. Footsteps echo nearby, and soon more people arrive, members of the Idenka family and priests. Damien quickly recognizes them as the Idenka Black Sword Union and the Temple of Gaia. Still tied up, he asks his sister if she planned this from the start. As he's dragged away, the matriarch says she wants the Heleme to return to the right path. Her brother asks if she feels no regret for their father. For a moment, she hesitates, but then says their father will also be held responsible, and even more heavily. Khan speaks to her, but Versa just says it's fine. Even if it's late, she wants to do what she's always wanted. She orders the martial artists arrested, and the soldiers are quickly taken in. Our healer adds that the Temple of Gaia will be shut down, so no one should expect to walk away clean. If they want lighter punishment, they'll need to cooperate during the trial. Then he notices young Master Vincent, and the director. He rushes over, scolding Vincent for overdoing it again. Vincent brushes it off and asks the director about his promotion. She says he did take part, but he acted as a descendant of the Idenka family, and the mission was to protect Gaia's priests. Looking at their condition, she can't call it a success. The priest cuts in at once, shouting for the priest of Meltum. In a scary voice, he asks what they thought of Master Vincent's protection. They realize that if this keeps up, they'll be jailed with the Vire family, and maybe even executed. So they quickly cry out that no one could have protected them better, and that the young master must be an 8-star martial artist or higher. The priest turns back, saying it sounds like they truly appreciated the protection. The director agrees. If the clients are satisfied, he can advance. She gives him a new emblem and tells him he's now in the 8th position. She knows she should say something proper, but can't be bothered, so she just congratulates him while the lesser god proudly cheers. Raven also offers his congratulations. Then the patriarch and matriarch leave, leaving the group behind. Vin's uncle is led away in chains while a guard tells him to move faster. Damien is furious. Everything had gone to plan until Vincent ruined it. He thinks that if the matriarch had come herself, she would have hidden it much better. She probably could have, but instead she sent Vincent. Then he uses aura from his hand to cut the ropes. He lunges toward his sister, ready to strike, saying he'll destroy her whole plan. But he isn't aiming for his sister, he's going after the protagonist. When Vincent turns, all he sees is blood spraying in front of him. The director and the assassin panic, realizing they let their guard down. They relaxed because the Great Khan was there. Both rush to stop it, calling for their young master, but it seems too late. Vincent can only stare ahead in shock. Then a hand reaches him and we learn the blood wasn't his, it was his uncle's. His rage may have cost him his head. His sister quietly says she hoped it wouldn't come to this, as her brother's body drops to the floor. The director is left completely stunned. Even the man called the King of Assassins thinks she's cruel for killing her own brother. Vincent is frustrated. He couldn't react, while she countered with ease. Then something catches his eye. His mother's hand is trembling. He walks up and calls out to her, then shows her a magic stone made from her life force, saying it's proof of the crimes committed there. When she reaches for it, she says her burden feels lighter, and thanks him, adding she'll return it after checking it. But before she can, Vincent takes her hand and says it's a gift from him. The sudden gesture catches her off guard. He says it can't replace what she lost today, but it's from the heart. Julian can't understand why he's comforting the great Versa. But then Vincent says her hand was shaking and someone that gentle doesn't fit that title. She clearly likes the gift, smiling as she looks at him. Later that night at the Vire family's main house, someone is suddenly run through by the Idenka patriarch who holds the body up like a puppet. The other guards stare at their captain in fear after he was taken down so easily. Khan says there is proof the Vire patriarch was involved in the Meltum incident. He throws off his cape and declares he'll remove anyone who stands in his way. Even terrified, the guards force themselves to charge him to protect their lord. But the old man is merciless, cutting down everyone in the hall with fast, exact blows. Still, more guards keep coming. The huge old man readies another attack and tears through them in a storm of blows, leaving only destruction behind. As he throws open the door, he says all the evidence was sent to Jeremiel and the Tower of Judgment. The patriarch of the Vire family has already been sentenced to death. Still, Khan says he'll allow the man to redeem himself by ending his own life. Scared but furious, the man shouts, ordering his guards to kill Khan. A hidden fighter suddenly rushes the patriarch, but Khan kills him in a single strike. He proves once again why he is the Edenka's power. The Vire patriarch can only mourn his fate. Then his aura flares and he says this is his answer, leaving the elder terrified as his life is taken away. He screams desperately for salvation. Sometime later, elsewhere, someone adds sugar to tea and asks if it's sweet enough for the protagonist. It's his mother, apologizing because he should be back with his friends. Before Vincent can reply, she says she did it because it was the right thing. His words while defending his children inspired her to stand up for what she believed in again. Vincent and Julian both look pleased hearing that. But Vin still asks if everything is really fine, since she'll be treated like a traitor. She finds it funny that the one who destroyed the Helheim Magic Stone factory is worried about her. That makes both him and Julian realize what kind of mess they're in. Then she says something incredible. He's very much like his mother, and though it's hard to speak of, she wants to give him something in return. A story about his mother, Sarvana Heasley, and the celestial fruit. Vincent is confused. What does his birth mother have to do with the celestial fruit? The matriarch says Sarvana was chosen to receive the fruit, leaving the lesser god confused too. She says it's a long story from a long time ago. Back then, Kong was the rank 1 cadet about to graduate from the Crimson Fortress. The three of them traveled together for their graduation mission, which required a ritual to kill a monster near Nelly Waterfall. They completed the ritual, and the monster appeared. But all the woman could think about was how strong and beautiful Sarvana was, enough to rival Kong back then. Suddenly the monster lashes out with 5 tongues, binding Sarvana's hands and feet in the air and rushing in to eat her. Sarvana screams that she doesn't want to be eaten by some monster, but she was only acting. A huge attack slices through all the tentacles, launched by the future matriarch. She yells for someone to move now, and Kong cuts the monster clean in half with one strike, showing how strong he already was. Sarvana lands lightly on the ground and happily says their teamwork was perfect, and the mission is done. Then the future patriarch goes to collect the monster's pearl. The young woman wonders why they need something so gross. He explains that taking the mollusk shell is a tradition from Aslan's time, but then something catches their attention. She says the waterfall mollusk is annoying, but not too hard for a graduating rank 1 cadet. Then she asks why a waterfall like this exists in such a cold place. Sarvana wasn't just cheerful, she was smart and curious enough to notice what others missed. Young Emo speaks to her as she says the mission must have had another reason, maybe something the first patriarch Aslan left behind, and asks what could be hidden behind that waterfall. Curious, the future patriarch asks how they'll get through it. So the three start making their way through the mountain. Sarvana says she'll check what's there from this path, since her intuition is always right. Then her foot slips, and she falls straight into the river beneath the waterfall. Seeing the danger, Emo tries to stop Khan, but he dives in at once to save Sarvana, and soon all three are swept into the river. Then Sarvana starts to wake up. She wakes up in a cave hidden behind the waterfall. For a moment she's excited. She was right that something was there. Then someone yanks her by the ear. They demand to know what she was thinking, snapping that they nearly died because of her dumb idea. The other two are baffled that the current didn't injure them, and before they can call it a miracle, a voice says it wasn't. Back in the present, Vincent wonders how anyone could have been hiding there. His mother explains that they called that being the celestial fruit, but its real form was a huge, powerful red dragon. The three are instantly terrified. They've never seen anything like it. The dragon asks which one of them can see the truth, and the other two realize this matches the prophecy passed down in the Adenka family. The dragon quickly understands they got there by accident and know nothing, but says it doesn't matter. Then he readies an attack and declares they'll all die there. He fires a fireball and blasts the three backward. Yemo can't believe there's a dragon inside the Crimson Fortress, but she forces herself to focus on escaping. The three run for their lives. The dragon says it's useless, and before they can get out, the waterfall thickens into a barrier. The giant lizard tells them there's no escape, and they should accept their fate. Hearing all this, Benshin can't believe a dragon could really exist, but his stepmother asks why that's so hard to accept, since the thing he added to the Crimson Lotus was dragon bone. Julian is stunned that she knows about the bone, while Benshin thinks it's stupid to believe anything could stay hidden from her. He then asks how she made it out alive. She says she doesn't know. The only one who knew the full story was Sarvana. Back in the cave, the dragon says they have nowhere left to run and should accept death. The young matriarch calls to the other two, and Sarvana starts drawing her sword as the patriarch gets ready to strike. All three charge the creature at once, rushing in and landing a hit that briefly surprises the dragon. The patriarch uses that opening for a sword art technique, but the dragon catches it and knocks it into the wall like it's nothing. That leaves him shaken, because it was the strongest move of the Adenka family. As the dragon gathers mana, he says humans have limits, and a crushing force bears down on them, making it hard to breathe. Sarvana and Versa collapse, while only the patriarch stays on his feet. That catches the dragon's eye, and he asks how a human can endure his mana pressure. He even thinks it's a waste to kill someone with such talent, but the patriarch refuses to let him kill his friends. A symbol spreads across his face, and attacks begin tearing across his body, like arrows brushing past him. The dragon says the ways humans used to control mana were originally passed down by their kind, then transforms into a woman and walks toward them. She says it's unfortunate, but she'll have to finish him, and forms an attack in her hand. Right then, a huge blast erupts outside the waterfall. Sarvana's hair flies upward, and it's revealed she stepped in front of the attack to protect the patriarch. The dragoness is stunned that a human survived her magic, and with one look she realizes what the girl is. Touching her chin, she says Sarvana is a Risley, leaving Sarvana confused about how she knows. The dragoness says it's obvious. After all, Sarvana's family was chosen by her. Versa says that's all she remembers, and when she woke up they were already outside the waterfall. On top of that, Sarvana somehow was holding the celestial fruit. Hearing that, Vincent is stunned. Now he knows it really exists, and that Aislinn truly left it in the Crimson Fortress. But even though she survived, Sarvanna's health kept getting worse, and over the next 7 years she grew so weak she could barely live normally. Hearing about his mother's end, Julian grows quiet and sad. The matriarch says that even then, Sarvanna never ate the celestial fruit. Instead, she wanted Khan to take it, but he couldn't accept gaining strength at the cost of her health. After all that, she passed away and left Vincent behind. In the end, Khan ate the celestial fruit because it was her wish. Still, Sarvanna stayed in his heart forever, as beautiful as ever. Vincent notices the mix on the matriarch's face: envy, longing, and regret. He asks what she truly thought of his mother. She answers that she cared about Sarvanna and envied her too. Then a memory appears of Sarvanna hugging Versa and telling her everything would be okay, while Versa trembled in fear. Versa soon breaks down and Sarvanna comforts her, saying she isn't a puppet. She cries in Sarvanna's arms under the rain.